Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deck Had Shinigami Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department. This is Officer Sato speaking. How may I help? Hello. There is going to be an earthquake on May 15th at approximately 15:20. What? It will be followed by a tsunami. It will reach Iwaki, Fukushima by approximately 15:35. Who am I speaking with? I know it sounds like it might be a joke or some sick prank, but I promise you, I'm not lying. If nothing is done to prepare, people will die. How do you know this, sir? Can I get your name? I can see it with my quirk. And no, I don't want to. Your quirk, all right. What else can you see, sir? It will kill a lot of people up the coast in Ibaraki and Chiba, too, though it will hit them slightly later. Iwaki is the farthest north I've seen. I can't tell exactly how strong the earthquake will be, or how high the tsunami will be. I don't know how many aftershocks there will be, or how bad. There's not much else to say. That's all I can help with. No, thank you, sir. Can you stay on the line for a minute? I'd like for you to talk with my supervisor as well. He may have more questions than I do. Can you do that? Beep. The recording ended, and every one of the 20 people around the rectangular table was silent and still. Then, one person shifted forward in their chair. So, let me sum this up. The police got a call about a vague disaster prophecy from some guy whose name we don't even know, so you called us all in because Lock Hero. Rock left his words hanging in the air the same way he did objects. An open hand raised an incredulous invitation to take him up on the offer to reply. The Commissioner General of the police force shifted his severe frown to him. The police force must respond to every threat to national security accordingly. Of course, and an earthquake is no joke, but there's no guarantee that this isn't. Locke returned. I mean, are we going to man a nationwide response to every prank call the police gets just because they promised they were for real? What's our proof we should listen to him? Do we even have any? Officer Tsukachi, seated beside the canine chief of police Tsuragami, shifted forward. Your point is not invalid, Rock. Officer Sato was unable to keep the caller on the line long enough to gather more information, and further investigation revealed a disposable phone ending the trail there. We know absolutely nothing about this individual, other than what he told us. However, it is the opinion of myself and others on the police force that this claim warrants further investigation. In addition to his call to the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department, he has made other calls to various institutions, all reflecting the same message: police departments in Fukushima, Ibaraki and Chiba, the National Coast Guard, and the offices of several pro-heroes, those ranked the very highest and specializing in water or search and rescue. His eyes flicked around to each of them in turn. Selkie, Gang Orca, Ryukyu, Hound Dog, Uobami and Mandalay, Ragdoll, Pixie Bob, and Tiger of the Wild Pussycats. Although most of the highest ranking like Endeavor said they were too busy to make it. Even All Might, his eyes settled on a specific man at the table, declined to be in this room. His eyes shifted back to Rock. If this is a prank, it is a time-staking one risking serious personal consequences. And to be honest, this sense of urgency he holds doesn't sit well with my intuition. Rock considered that with a frown that was not entirely convinced but did concede a hum of acknowledgement. That specific man settled forward in his seat, lacing long fingers in a tent beneath his chin with a humorless look. You say this individual made calls to many of us in this room. However, I can say with certainty I was not one such person. That call of invitation came you alone, Officer Tsukachi, and I can suppose a reason. Tsukachi's eyes returned to him, and he gave a nod. Yes, I invited you here to gain your insight on this person, Sir Night-Eye. Centipter and Bubble Girl looked to their boss sitting between them expectantly. His face remained solemn. Would you like me to theorize about his quirk based on the tone of his voice? I'm sure I could propose all manner of conjecture, Night-Eye replied dryly. Though, of course, I understand what you mean. The proof you are seeking for this person's claim, you hope to find it with foresight. What better to judge the validity of one prophetic quirk than with another? The collection of heroes, police, and government officials fixed him with looks of anticipation. Can you do this, Sir Night-Eye? The commissioner asked seriously. Night-Eye was motionless for an unrushed pause. Then he bowed his head. You should be more wary of calling on my quirk so quickly. You just might regret what I'll see. I question the extent of this person's ability to judge the future. May 15th, at approximately 15:20, approximately 15:35, and a slightly later arrival to the other locations. Time was the only specific detail he could even provide. That and people will die. He was quiet for another long moment with his face cast in shadow and eyes on the table between his elbows. He said that with such certainty. If that's the future he saw, then I have to wonder at its potential to be changed. When I look beyond the present, the view I see is unforgivably certain. So, what's the answer, then? Is that just a roundabout way of saying you can't do it? Locke spoke up, looking a bit impatient. People will die if that's the case. Then what the heck are we waiting for? Take a peek already and see if he's for real. Come on. Night-Eye looked up, his gaze unreadable over the top of his laced fingers as it returned to the Commissioner General, still awaiting a response with stern attentiveness. I can. You are right about that much. We cannot bet with lives. I'm afraid my foresight cannot provide confirmation of the exact timing, but as to whether or not there will be a disaster in the near future, that I can see. His head turned to the young lady beside him, looking Bubble Girl in the eye. She had a serious gaze that met his, and she nodded. Viewing an entire month into the future was something he typically deemed extremely risky. However, the weight of lives that might be lost from such a disaster outweighed even his great caution about foresight's accuracy. Whatever the specific nature of the caller's quirk, the risk at a national level demanded Night-Eye concede the use of it. He reached out and tapped her hand with a finger. I'll have my own sidekick assist me in the matter. His eyes shifted purple as foresight activated. Bubble Girl's future rolled out in his mind with days spent toiling in the office, short periods of fieldwork, and a dissatisfying lack of cheer demanding tickle torture. Cautiously, he skimmed over most of it, looking only for the disaster. There was an unclear passage of time with days melting into nights. But eventually, there came the moment that he focused his sight on. She paused in her work and moved to the doorframe to brace herself. There was a short span of time waiting, and then she and the slim view of the world around her began to shake. He watched until the shaking became truly formidable, and then he closed his eyes. He dared not risk looking to the end results of the quake and beyond. It was difficult to judge the days, but it was close enough by his estimate to be accurate with the caller's prediction. Night-Eye looked up and swept his gaze around the waiting room with all eyes on him. There will be an earthquake in the near future, Commissioner. I advise proceeding with the assumption that the caller is accurate in their timing. The Commissioner's slim eyes narrowed further. We will be prepared. Breaking news. In an unprecedented move, the Commissioner General of the Japan Police Force has declared a nationwide state of emergency, 1 month before the emergency. The full story at 11. Police force received an anonymous tip that there will be an earthquake and tsunami 1 month from now on May 15. Heroes and police are coordinating preparations in vulnerable coastal regions, recommending the public stockpile food and water for the aftermath. Sales of portable stoves and toiletries have skyrocketed. Companies under public scrutiny for taking advantage of fear to hike prices. Stock market plunge. This is kind of crazy, isn't it? Here, listen. They got a leaked recording of the caller. That guy sounds pretty shady to me. Attention seeker. I dunno, he sounds scared to me. What kind of quirk do you think he's got that sees the future? I could have had a dream more detailed than that. Commissioner taking the word of some prank caller. How bad is it even going to be? The police won't say. He's staking his career on this decision. What a fool. Heroes fortifying the seawalls, did you hear? How much money is this costing the government? My tax dollars. They're advising evacuation drills ahead of the date. At least I might get out of some work. But what if it really does happen? Commissioner's decision under immense public scrutiny. He doesn't have any proof at all. What a joke. I'm usually for his decisions. But this is beyond me. His stances are so hard-lined. This is highly unusual for him. Something we don't know, maybe, confidential information. If it happened and he didn't do anything, the media would eat him alive. On the other hand, if it ends up being a prank now, he'll lose all reputation and credibility. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I don't envy the guy at all. Well, as it stands, he's taking us all down with him, too. If Japan invests all this effort into taking a joke seriously, we'll all be the fool on an international scale. You make it sound like that earthquake better happen or else. So, everybody ready? Yeah. Tomorrow's the big day. Everyone seated on the floor around the table shifted their attention to Present Mike. He had a bit of a grin with cheeks tinted and his cup of sake lifted in one hand. It's all anybody can talk about this past month. Come on, Yamada. We're trying to relax about it right now, Midnight scolded. Not something I'm really eager to see there. Mike, Vlad agreed from across the table. Giorarararar. You bet I'm ready. It's gonna happen, all right. I've gotta be ready if worst comes to worst, and it's a big one. My nose is already itching. Ref. Hound Dog looked far more worked up about it, his drink tipping precariously as he swiped his hand around until Vlad nonchalantly steadied it for him. Of course, you'll be out on the front lines if it comes true, Mike nodded, his eyes shifting sympathetically to another hero at the table. Kinda like someone else, around here. How are you holding up, Cement? A weary-looking Cementos settled heavily into his arms with a sigh weighed down by the thousands of tons of seawall reinforcing cement he'd put up this past month. I sincerely hope that everything they've had me put up won't be needed. It would be embarrassing if it was a hoax, but I'd like it to be, for everyone's sake. No way, we're ready for this. I'm ready for it to happen. I'll be out there first. Power Loader shot back, flexing his massive digging hands. Oh, you're on the Commissioner's side, too, huh? Mike questioned. no side that needs picking. The Commissioner General has never suffered any fools. I've always agreed with his approach. Well, you're certainly right about the guy being serious. I think he knows how to smile even less than Aizawa, Mike replied, his eyes shifting to the man slouching beside him. Eraser remained completely impassive until Mike prodded him with an elbow. And you? He never looked up from his drink. There's nothing to say. Conjecture is a waste of time. It happens or it doesn't. We respond accordingly. The group was startled as Hound Dog suddenly brought his hand and cup thumping down on the table, sloshing a little of the beer over the edge of the glass with Vlad quickly providing napkins. You guys are missing the point. It will happen, and it will be bad enough for people to die. That's what's going down, and anyone not ready for it is a barking mad fool. He growled heatedly. Mike took in how agitated he was for a moment. You were at that first meeting, yeah, with the Commissioner there. G-R-R-R-R. Hound Dog's growl quieted as he thought for a moment. Then he lifted his head and peered around the room for eavesdroppers. He leaned closer into the table then, his voice dropping to a gruff undertone. It's not just the caller who saw it. Sir Knight, I did, too. The table collectively stiffened up at that. Hey, he's that one guy who was All Might's man for a while, right? Some kind of precognition quirk. Foresight. He was there, and he saw it coming with foresight. Hound Dog continued in his hushed voice. He didn't want it public, though. Too much attention on himself. And something about his quirk. For some reason he didn't want to look at the details of what's coming. Afraid he might set it in stone. So, if the caller and the Commissioner aren't good enough for you, let one of our own be. The group stared at him in silence, and Vlad, in particular, looked concerned from where he'd paused in cleaning up the beer with napkins in hand. Hey, were you supposed to tell anyone that? I think this is your last one, dog. He scowled with his canine nose scrunching as he gesticulated clumsily with a hand. I'm a grown man. I'll drink what I want. Drown your anxieties about tomorrow is more like it. The group was sufficiently quieted, though, contemplating on that. So, that's the piece the media is missing. Huh, Mike mused to himself lowly. Someone flicked him on the head and he startled, looking up sharply at the offender sitting next to him. Midnight looked a bit cross. Congrats, you've got him all worked up now with your yammering. Let's all just enjoy tonight. How about that? She turned to her own drink, hiding any obvious worry. Sounds like it will be our last chance to relax. May 15th, 15:10. All right, just like our drills. Everybody on the floor. Get under your desks. Huh, it's not for another 10 minutes, though. The racer looked cross. The earthquake is supposed to hit at approximately 15:20. Stop wasting time. Floor. Now. The students got on the floor still chatting actively amongst themselves. Eraser himself stayed standing to supervise though remained behind the desk at the front to get under it when necessary. Due to the time of day the earthquake was supposed to hit, it had been decided on a nationwide scale that all school-age children remain on school grounds until after the time had passed. All classes were put on hold and homeroom teachers returned to their designated classes until the theoretical disaster passed. As for everywhere else, the nation was in a state of well-organized chaos. Systematic removal of senior citizens and otherwise vulnerable individuals from threatened coastal regions to designated evacuation facilities had begun in the morning all across the country. The workday had been cut short for everyone else, giving them sufficient time to prepare their belongings and retreat inland. The police and fully mobilized pro-hero forces had finished last-call sweeps of the direct coastline communities and taken station at their blockades by the end of the last hour. The coast of Japan had become one long, continuous ghost town in a matter of hours in a way that had never been seen before. As the final minutes crept by, sirens all across the nation warned drivers to stop their vehicles and police patrols made sure of it. Every train in Japan came to a standstill. Factory assembly lines were motionless. Thousands of offices were quiet and even eerily empty, with most employees leaving to prepare. The harbors were a skeleton with all their boats removed to the safety of open water. Cameras were rolling on all angles, with every news channel offering its own particular opinion on the situation. And not just in Japan, internationally. All eyes were pointed inward on the bizarre, fascinating diligence of the nation in response to this supernaturally perceived threat. History would be made today. And only a scarce few minutes remained before it would be decided, with Japan going down in the records as setting a world precedent in disaster response, or as the most gullible nation on the planet. The world held its breath and watched. One of the students had pulled up a live news feed on her phone, and the whole room listened in on it between some nervous, excited chatter. Aizawa listened to it with detached disinterest. Of course, the media didn't really have anything new to go on with this case, so it was a rehash of everything that everyone already knew, with check-ins around the country in real time while they sat on the edges of their seat waiting for the real news to begin. The Commissioner General was of course at the heart of the discussion, though he kept his thoughts to himself unlike seemingly everybody else. That certainly didn't mean Eraser hadn't thought about it. Logically, it was a massive bet, but one the commissioner had absolutely no choice but to take. Even the slightest chance of it coming true could mean disaster for the entire country. Illogically, he'd be thrown to the wolves regardless if he had nothing to show for the national loss of face, massive preparation efforts, and financial losses associated with them. This moment would define his career whether it made it or ended it. But despite the burden he carried, the commissioner was all in, absolutely steadfast and unwavering in seeing his decision through to the end. Eraser didn't envy his position one bit, but he could respect that stony resolve. 1519. Eraser's ears focused on the broadcast. The room had become unnervingly quiet. Just 1 minute left until the earthquake's time of arrival. We expect an EEW to be issued in the coming seconds. Anyone who hasn't taken refuge yet, please do so now. A system of over 4,000 seismometers installed around Japan consisted of the early earthquake warning system designed for the soonest possible detection and nationwide alerting of impending earthquakes. 1519 and 10 seconds. 20, 30, 40, 50, 1520. Eraser did sink under the desk then, and the whole nation tightened its grip with the students to their desks. The room was dead silent, everyone's eyes and ears focused on the phone as the news presenter continued quietly onward. 1520 and 10 seconds. 20, 30, 40, 50, 1521, 1521. The time has passed. Approximately. The call said approximately. No one relax yet. The police advisory will remain in effect until 1535. 1521 and 10 seconds. 20-second. Chime. This is an earthquake early warning. The student's phone sounded, and there was a sharpening of breath. There's the warning. Everyone brace yourself for tremors. Depending on an individual's distance to the epicenter, the warning could give them seconds to minutes to respond. Not knowing the exact when hung an excruciating tension over the room, hardly a soul even breathing. The spell of silence was broken by a loose pencil twitching, then starting to jitter on its own. The metal legs of the desks trembled with impending vibrations beneath their fingers, increasing in rapid speed until it was the legs that were moving back and forth entirely. Rumbling filled up the space left by broken silence as everything began to shake in unison. The first rolls of the earth under their feet were gradual, as if testing, and then the real deal slammed into them. Students let out sounds of alarm, holding for dear life onto desks that tried to slide away. The building around them groaned. Eraser was silent, his eyes pinned tensely on the unsteady floor and gripped tight. As a nation that experienced 1,500 recorded tremors of varying magnitude every year, no citizen of Japan was a stranger to seismological activity. By that same coin, most of them, especially older residents, had enough experience to rapidly tell that this was no minor event like most of those tremors were. The country creaked, buckled, and shifted, ripples of energy radiating out across the globe. The time stretched out with their fear, but soon enough, the worst vibration passed, the desks calmed down, and eventually, even the lone pencil, having skittered far beyond its starting place on the floor, came to a standstill. A wary hush settled over the class, then a collective sigh of relief escaped. Eraser uncurled and rose cautiously, eyes scanning the room. Is everyone all right? The students checked themselves and voiced an affirmation. And with that, ease washed over them. They rose off the floor with excited, awed, and concerned chatter returning loudly amongst themselves. Eraser let them, getting a visual on every student then going out into the hallway. Other teachers were coming out into the hall as well to check with each other as planned, each with their phone on for wider shared communication across the campus. Eraser met eyes with Vlad, his eyes still visibly and literally shook up. You good? Eraser asked. Yeah, that was huge, Vlad replied seriously. A disaster on that level. Tsunami warnings have been officially issued. Early detection anticipates landfall in approximately 10 minutes. Anyone who has not done so, retreat to high ground now. The teachers listened to the continuing announcements coming from the students' phone. Vlad and Eraser shared a solemn look. Nothing more needed to convey what the experienced pros could already sense. A disaster like this would define a lifetime. An 8.9 magnitude earthquake at 1521. The largest earthquake recorded in Japan in over a century. Top 3 in Japan's recorded history. 8-story high tsunami inundated Iwaki, Fukushima. Even the reinforced seawalls weren't enough in some coastal communities. Whole towns destroyed and swept out to sea. Officials still evaluating the casualty report. Tsunami waves continued their swell for over an hour before subsiding. International support pouring in. Tsunami landfall estimated around the Pacific. You can see for yourself on the screen the absolute swath of destruction that tsunami has left in its wake. Japan's efforts being commended worldwide. 52 casualties. 52. Officials still weren't sure they could believe the count. In a nation of over 100 million. It was an astronomically tiny loss of life in the face of such a significant disaster. Didn't heed the warning, decided to watch the tsunami from presumed safety on the cliff. There's always some sad, sorry fool that thinks it won't happen to them. A tragic waste of young life. A poor old lady fell and hit her head, too. How sad. More people were killed in the significant number of powerful aftershocks which came in the following days than the actual inciting quake and tsunami. This was attributed to a lack of forewarning. The death toll was still a shockingly low 187 people nationwide for a disaster which had impacted the entirety of the heavily populated coast. Rebuilding was going to be a massive undertaking. Officer Tsukachi was in the same room as the Commissioner General when the earthquake struck along with other members of the police force. Each of them had known the significance of this moment for his fate, and likewise the reputation of all of them. When the shaking ended and everyone warily stood up, he bore witness to the scene that followed. The commissioner, usually stoic, seemed in a state of shock by the widening of his eyes. It had happened. It had really happened, after everything. The commissioner's wife, also in the room, embraced him at once. They had been witnesses to her as a silent pillar of support in the past month. No matter how much the public, media, political leaders, his own colleagues, and the international community battered his character and life's work, she stood right at his side through the full brunt of their scrutiny. Her touch seemed to bring him back to reality. He melted into her arms with the crushing, unceasing, vicious weight of the whole world's critical eyes and opinions sloughing off of his shoulders. The dreaded anticipation was resolved. It was over. His fate, and that of history, had been decided. His lips pressed into the hair by her ear and whispered, "Thank you," and then he pulled away, the private vulnerability disappearing with his face settling again into its stern default as he focused on addressing the gathered officers and government leaders. The phase of preparation was over, but the new challenge of response had only just begun. The Commissioner General of the Japan Police Force, is being hailed as a national hero. His intuition in listening to the caller, leadership of the police force, coordinating preparations was instrumental. The police response in the wake of the disaster has been praiseworthy. Prime Minister commending the Commissioner General's actions. Commissioner General to address the public today in open media forum. Commissioner, what guided your decision to take action on this anonymous call? I will not bet with people's lives. What gave you the strength to get through this most difficult point in your career? My wife. Web search, the Commissioner General's wife. Name divided by. Married how long? Divided by. Career divided by. Do they have kids divided by? Is pretty divided by. Commissioner, do you know who the caller is? Not at this time. How quickly the media changed its tune. After tearing him apart from every angle for an entire month, everyone was tripping over themselves in the effort to build him up in the best possible light. It was not underserved. Knowing fully what the costs might be, the commissioner had declared himself the source of responsibility in order to protect his colleagues and the leaders of the nation from any fallout. In his eyes, the world's praise came on the sobering reality of the worst-case scenario, that of the call being true, coming to pass, from scapegoat to savior. But without a doubt, the single most significant factor in the preservation of untold thousands of lives in the eyes of the media and public opinion was the person who had made any of it possible in the first place. Who is the mystery caller? Police being inundated with fake claims of being the caller. Prime Minister asking the real caller to step forward. A national hero as much as the Commissioner General. A quirk that can save countless lives. Did you hear? Even All Might thanked him on TV. Has he saved as many people as All Might, do you think? We won't ever know, because he kept him from getting hurt in the first place. Make that guy a pro. I wonder if he's single. You don't even know if he's cute, yet. Who is he? Where is he? Why isn't he coming forward? Too scared. I'd be. Everybody's watching. That's selfish. Should use his quirk for the police. What if he's already in the police? Plot twist. More like conspiracy theory. Who is the mystery caller? Everyone is dying to find out. Tsukachi. The commissioner settled a hand of trust on the detective's shoulder and looked him in the eye. Find him. Well, I think I might be sick. The nurse nodded absently and continued typing without pause. Tell me about your symptoms. Well, I don't know. None, I think. Her eyes flicked up from the computer to the older man sitting on the exam table. Any sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, coughing or sneezing? No, none of those. Fever, headache, nausea or vomiting? No, none of that, either. Trouble sleeping, appetite changes, fatigue, weakness anywhere? None. Any chronic illnesses, or maybe exposure to someone who's ill? No. A general feeling of being unwell, perhaps? No, I feel all right. In what way do you feel sick? I'm not sure. That's why I'm here. She fixed him with a long look, the keyboard silent. Is there anything I can tell the doctor? He shifted uncomfortably, crossing his arms. I know it doesn't sound like it makes much sense, but I met someone who said their quirk told him I could be really sick. I feel just fine, but it scared me a little the way he came up to me. I didn't want to take any chances, you know. It's been a while since I've had a checkup. Anyway, she absorbed that for a moment then resumed typing a quick note. Okay, I'll let the doctor know. She'll be in with you shortly. Thank you. The nurse exited. Still not the weirdest story she'd heard today. I have cancer. Officer Tsukachi looked at the older man sympathetically. I'm sorry. This must be a difficult time for you. He looked down at the coffee cup in his hands, quiet for a moment. Doc says my prognosis is great. We got it early. I didn't even have a clue. It feels like it hit me from out of nowhere. If that person hadn't told me to go to a doctor, and if I hadn't listened well, it would have been worse. A lot worse. Maybe I'd even die. It got me thinking, then, about the similarities with that caller and how he saved everyone. He looked up at Tsukachi again, his eyes earnest. Officer Tsukachi, I hope this is of use to your investigation. I don't know if it's him, but if there's someone out there who can help people like that, the world's a better place for it. Tsukachi nodded solemnly, putting a reassuring hand on the man's forearm. Thank you for the information, sir. I wish you the best recovery. Edogawa, Tokyo. We're looking for a young man. He's described as tall, thin, and wearing black clothes. His most defining trait is said to be red eyes. Does that sound familiar? The woman behind the convenience store counter thought for a few moments, a hand to her chin. Oh, hold on. There was that one boy. He came in with his hood up and his head down, dressed in all black. I remember him because he looked so shady that I expected him to steal. He didn't, but he refused to look up at me or say a word when he paid at the counter. He had long black bangs, but I do think his eyes were red. Tsukachi's eyes were keen as he wrote quickly in his notepad. When did you see this individual? A couple weeks back too, right at the end of the week. Have you seen him before then or since? Nope, never. You said he was a boy. How old did he look to you? Oh, he was young. A teen, for sure. Tall for his age even with the slouching, though skinny. And pale, too. I see. One more thing. May I see your security cameras from that time? Sure. Come to the back. Thank you. Tsukachi followed her lead. Got to dust this old dog off. Give me just a minute. All right. I think it was on a Sunday, if I recall correctly. And it was at night. I remember that for sure. She fell silent as she searched through the video. There he is. Tsukachi leaned in a little closer as she slowed the video down to real time. He entered the store just as she had described him, and Tsukachi watched him slink down the row. Whether he knew where the camera was or not, he kept his face obscured regardless, with his hood up and his head angled down. He seemed to know just what he was getting as he made a beeline for a particular candy and soda, then went straight to the counter. Tsukachi squinted at the screen. A Coca-Cola for sure, and a bag of licorice. Black licorice, she confirmed. Terrible stuff. I'm fairly fond of it myself. Tsukachi wrote a quick note. An insignificant detail, perhaps, but sometimes it was the little things that mattered. There wasn't much else to see in the video, though, for he slinked out as discreetly as he had slinked in. The detective tapped his pen a few times while thinking, then clicked it closed and slipped his notepad into his coat. May I have a copy of your surveillance? I don't mind. Once a copy of the recording was in his possession, Tsukachi gave her a tip of his hat and a polite bow. Thank you for all your help, ma'am. I won't take any more of your time. Sure. They returned to the front of the store, though before he could leave, she looked at his retreating back curiously. One question for you, officer. He paused by the door and looked back. This have anything to do with the earthquake caller? Tsukachi made a polite smile that gave nothing away. I can't say, ma'am. She gave an unconvinced grunt. Everyone knows you're onto him, anyway. Tsukachi's expression didn't change as he said nothing in reply and exited the building. Out of sight, the smile slid off his face for a mildly annoyed look. Everyone was onto him, and didn't he know it? No one on the force was exactly sure how it had been leaked that Tsukachi was the officer on the case, but the detective himself suspected that it might have simply been chance informants and word of mouth. With the way he had practically been going door to door, there was a long trail of people who had seen him around, and the media had a nose better than hound dog for this sort of thing. Not that it surprised him given the circumstances. The entire country wanted to know who this person was, people around the globe. It had been nearly a month now since the May 15th disaster, and still, the caller had not come forward. People were restless. They wanted answers. Who was this anonymous hero? And could he use that same power again? Unfortunately, the trail was, well, he couldn't even say it was cold. There was no trail. The phone was the closest thing to a trail, and it had been an immediate dead end, with the single identifier of the caller being male. They had reduced their search to a meager half the population of Japan. Except, the media did have one useful contribution. The spotlight they shone on the police force and its investigation, constantly stirring the pot of public interest, meant that they were fed a regular feed of people calling in with possible leads. Millions of eyes and ears were on the alert for this guy. Undoubtedly, most of these tips would end up being useless, some of them downright fake, but it gave the police something. They were still taking shots in the dark across the whole country, but at least they had bullets and a prayer for this scattershot approach. It was one such tip that had brought Tsukachi here, an older gentleman, coming into the station to present possible information. as one of hundreds who had said the exact same thing. He hadn't been regarded as anything special at first, politely told to wait and fill out a quick document until someone could speak with him. "Hi there, I'm Tsukachi Makoto. Thank you so much for coming in today." The older man startled at the bubbly warmth from the young lady who came in. He'd really been expecting someone more serious and less pleasant. She took him by the hand as she sat down beside him, chatting away comfortably, a brimming smile on her face. "Tell me this information you've got." Yes, it made Officer Naomasa Tsukachi want to groan. Again, in fact, his little sister screening the leads was just exasperating. She had come sauntering in out of the blue like she always did, insisting she could help speed things right along. "You just don't have the right presence for this kind of thing. I'll smooth talk the truth right out of them, and polygraph will prove it. I'll make sure you don't waste your time on the useless leads right from the start. And I know, confidentiality and all that. You know who I work with, of course." Tsukachi wasn't sure if he was more dismayed over the fact that she hadn't taken as many no's for an answer, or the fact that the chief of police had vetoed all of them with a single yes once she presented her case. But either way, he was working with his little sister. "I've got your back." She winked cheerily, and he sighed. "I know." He was equal parts annoyed and proud of her. Annoyed, because she always did things unconventionally like this, and had somehow worked her way into everybody's good favor at a record pace in a way he could never do, proving exactly why she was right. And proud, because she was doing something great for people, and for him. Family always made things so complicated. Regardless, he hadn't doubted her judgment at all when she called him into the room with a sufficiently buttered-up older gentleman. Tsukachi had seen too many such individuals over the course of the investigation to be outright hopeful when he sat down with him. But the jaded set of his eyes soon vanished once the man spoke. "He just came up to me all of a sudden on the street and took my hand, stopped me and told me that I should see a doctor. That his Quirk said I would be really sick soon. It scared me. He had these piercing red eyes, felt like he was staring right into my soul. He turned away as quickly as he came though, didn't stop to chat. I called out and tried to catch up to him, but he ran off." An exact description of the young man, a location of Edogawa, Tokyo, with a time and date, and a tangible consequence from the interaction. Cancer. Some of the leads they'd gotten had one or two of those things, but scant few had all of them. And there was something so honest about the intent in the man's eyes that it made Tsukachi's intuition fire. He raised his handheld radio. "Tamakawa. He was at the convenience store a few weeks ago. He advised that he may be younger than we originally thought, though tall for his age. Got it. No luck at the park over here. Don't worry about it. I also got a copy of surveillance footage with him in it. Let's head back to the station for now." "Roger that. See you soon." Tsukachi put the radio away, his eyes drifting out across the environment as he headed back to the police car to meet up, somewhere in Edogawa. It was one of the most distant of the special wards from the heart of Tokyo. It had the sea to the south, the Arakawa River along its western edge, the Kuito River on the eastern edge, and the Shinaka River cutting right through after diverging from the Kuito. Fortunately, its placement well within the Tokyo Bay had protected it from the brute force of the tsunami. A beach, a sea life park, several natural museums, and gardens were some of its highlights. None of that was particularly useful, though it at least gave them some populated places to start looking. Crime-wise, it was completely unremarkable. Not exactly the place where a disaster-preventing Quirk was best put to use. Why here? From a more socioeconomic perspective, it also had the cheapest rent on average in Tokyo. There was a culture of fishing as was appropriate for its water proximity. His family has a low income. Or work, perhaps. If he's so young, then a school. He dwelled on that thought and pulled up his phone, studying the local school district. There were several high schools and a handful of junior high schools. He put his phone away again, a troubled frown on his face. For someone so young to be the caller. "It's regrettable, but even if that is the case, I still have to find you. This is the individual that we're looking for." Tsukachi tapped the images taken from the surveillance pinned on the board as copies were handed out to the officers in the room by the orange tabby officer Tamakawa. "We will visit each of the junior and high schools in Edogawa and ask them if they recognize him. Contact me in Tamakawa if any of them do. I'd like to assess him directly." A hand raised uncertainly. "Tsukachi, are we really sure the caller is someone so young?" His voices sounded older on the call. Someone else muttered in agreement. "There's software for that, though. Or maybe he's just mature for his age." Tsukachi cut through the murmurs calmly. "We won't know for certain until we meet him. Though I understand how unfortunate it may be. If he really is just a child, we have an even greater duty to protect him." His expression was solemn. The weight of the whole world's scrutiny is something a boy shouldn't have to carry alone. Tsukachi and Tamakawa went to one of the high schools first. They were both of the opinion that it was more probable and better off for the boy to be relatively older, so the junior highs were prioritized lower. Their questioning left them empty-handed, however. As they were exiting down the front steps of the school, another team gave them a buzz. Tsukachi, he was recognized at Edagawa Junior High. The detective replied immediately, "We'll be right over. Let the other teams know." The two officers drove to the school straight away. Entering the building, they regrouped in the school office with the principal and the two other officers. Officer Tsukachi Naomasa. The detective gave a bow and gestured to the feline man beside him, and Officer Tamakawa Sansa. "Thank you for meeting with us, sir." Kajima Aichi, the beaver-shaped principal, greeted in turn. He invited them with a furred paw into the privacy of his office, the furniture notably made of attractive wood, and they followed after his paddle tail. "Please, have a seat." Kajima gestured to a pair of sofas facing each other over a coffee table. Tsukachi and Tamakawa sat on one side while he took the other. The principal settled forward with an amicable, round-cheeked expression. "As I understand it from your colleagues, you're looking for one of the students here." "That's right. They showed you the pictures. You recognized him?" "Yes, I did. Though they wouldn't elaborate on anything else until you got here." "Tell me, then, did he get into trouble?" "No, sir, none that I'm aware of," Tsukachi reassured him. "We're here for another matter entirely. A rather opposite one. We are investigating a case in which a witness recounted him using his quirk to help save that person's life." Kajima's eyes widened. "Akiyama did." "Akiyama, that's his name?" Tamakawa inquired, golden cat eyes sharpening. The principal fell silent for a moment as he digested his surprise into a puzzled frown. "That doesn't make sense. His quirk can't do anything like that." "What can it do, exactly?" Tsukachi asked. Kajima's frown didn't go away as he sighed, eyes dropping to the coffee table. "Akiyama Shisui is an unfortunate boy." The officers stirred at his suddenly solemn air. "When he looks at people, he sees how they will die." Their eyes widened, then flicked immediately to each other, thoughts in sync. "It's not something he can turn off. It is a constant vision for him. As I understand it, it's something related to his mother's quirk, death dreams, or some such thing. They see the future of how people will die." Tsukachi's eyes gleamed, returning to the principal as he leaned forward. "If that's the case, and they can change that future?" "No." Kajima remained solemn, eyes down. "Not as far as I know." The spark died in the detective's eyes, and he settled back in his seat, still looking at the somber countenance of the principal, his brow furrowed. "As far as he knows." "Kajima-san, we would like to speak with Akiyama." "I'm afraid not." They looked at him questioningly, but his solemn look shifted apologetically. "Because he isn't here. He skipped school today." "Skipped? Not something unusual for him," Kajima assured to the officers' expressions of alarm. "Rather unfortunately. He's a student with some disciplinary issues. His grades have slipped and he skips school regularly. We've tried multiple times to address the issue, but he has been unresponsive." Tsukachi's eyes softened. "Has he always been troubled like that?" "Not in this way, at least. He was always quiet. A loner who kept his head down and out of trouble. It's only been since the end of last summer that his misbehavior began, and it's continued into this year. Like he suddenly stopped caring." What changed?" Tamakawa purred thoughtfully. "I don't know. I've seen him a lot because of it, but talking with him has been completely non-productive. Better conversation with a wall. Meetings with his mother haven't gone so well. There seems to be some tension in the household. Teenage angst, perhaps. He's shot up like a weed, too. Is there no one that he confides in?" "A close friend?" Tamakawa questioned. I suppose. There's only one of his classmates who comes to mind." "I suppose you'd like to speak with her?" "Yes, we would. I'll attend your questioning as well." "Of course." Kajima stood up and started for the door. "Let me have the office call her down." "You wanted to speak with me, Principal Sensei." The officers and Kajima looked to the doorway where a girl in her school uniform stood tentatively. "Come in, Aoyagi-san. Have a seat with us." The principal smiled and gestured to the empty spot on the sofa beside him. "Okay." Kajima looked to the two men across from him as she made her way over. "These are officers Tsukachi and Tamakawa." She took a seat sitting straight backed with her hands folded neatly in her lap and nervous, bright green eyes flicking between them. They looked back at her kindly with Tsukachi raising his hand in greeting. "Hi, thanks for meeting with us. Aoyagi Hitomi. Nice to meet you." She bowed her head with an anxious murmur. "I hope we didn't take you out of a favorite class." No. Aoyagi tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear and glanced away. "Just math." "Hey, not my favorite, either." Tsukachi smiled easily, his hands cradled loosely between his knees. "We have a few questions that we want to ask you, if you're all right with that. If you aren't comfortable with what we ask and don't want to answer, or want to stop at any time, you can do that. Please don't feel forced to say something you don't want to. Are you okay with talking to us right now?" She looked between them and then to the principal, whose familiar buck-toothed smile gave her reassurance. "Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. Aoyagi-san, are you friends with Akiyama Shisui?" Her head perked up. "Yes, we want to ask you some things about him." Her eyes shifted worriedly. "Is he in trouble?" "No, that's not why we're here. Actually, we think Akiyama might have done a very good thing, and we need to investigate further. In the case that we're working on, someone told us that Akiyama used his quirk to help save their life. Does that sound like something he can do? Her eyes widened. She thought about it for a long pause. Then her expression leveled out. Yes, the principal looked surprised, and the officers remained keen. Do you know how he uses his quirk? Yes. Can you describe it to us? Her eyes darted away and she shook her head a tiny bit, and the officers frowned. Akiyama seems to have some trouble in school. Do you know why he skips classes so much? Tamakawa tried another angle. Yes. Can you tell us? No. She looked away to the side. I'm sorry, it's just, I don't. Shisui-kun would want to answer that, so. Tsukachi's voice softened. No, it's all right. It sounds like you're a good friend to him. How long have you known each other? We've been in the same class since junior high started. We weren't friends back then, though. When did that change? Last year. That caught Tsukachi's attention. The same year his behavior changed, too. Was that before he started having trouble in school? She seemed to get tenser. No, she befriended him after his behavior changed, then. Tsukachi's brow furrowed slightly. How did you two become friends? Her eyes fixed in place on the table, lips sealed. I guess this is what they mean by putting lipstick on a pig. Ha ha ha. She ran away, out of the bathroom and away from their jeers. Her eyes stung, but she held back the tears until she retreated to the bathroom on the second floor where the other girls wouldn't see. Looking back at herself in the mirror, she watched as she let them fall down her cheeks. Stepping up to the sink, she turned on the water and ran her hand under it, then rubbed her lips furiously. It wasn't even anything fancy. They were all wearing the same lipstick and clothes for the set. She swiped a paper towel and smeared the wetted lipstick off. The door to the bathroom opened, and she spun away, immediately retreating into a stall to finish wiping the tears and lipstick in solitude. When she finished, she sat there, motionless, waiting for the other person to leave. Alone again, and so she remained staring at the cracked paint on the stall door. I didn't see you at the school festival. My stomach felt sick. Oh, why didn't you tell me? I could have brought you something. I was looking forward to seeing you dressed up with all of your classmates. I'm sorry, they were prettier without her, anyway. You've hardly touched your plate. Did I season it badly? Oh, no, it's fine. Is it your stomach pain again? Yeah, we should see the doctor about this. You've hardly got any appetite these days. Better to be hungry than a fat pig. Someone had been in her bag. Her notebooks for every class were missing. Heart sinking, she looked around at the class. Hey, has anyone seen my notebooks? There was silence. Then someone snickered and it set off a cascade of ill humor around the room. No idea. She clamped her lips shut and slid into her seat, alone in the full classroom. She found her notebooks again at the end of the week. They were under her desk, torn up page by page into a heap of scraps. Oh, it looks like someone found your notes. Right in time for end of term, too. She got down on her hands and knees and cleaned it up without saying a word. Itomi, dear, what happened? These grades are. I know you're smart enough to do this. Sorry, I didn't study enough. And I was anxious. My stomach hurt. Again, dear, the doctor couldn't find anything wrong. Is something going on? No, I just messed up. I'm a fat, ugly, stupid pig. Maybe you should ask some of your classmates for help studying. A study group would be great for all of you. Yeah, no, because everyone hated her. Bringing it up to the teacher only made their treatment worse. The only help they'd give her was making it perfectly clear how alone she was. Why me? She wondered that sometimes while picking herself apart in the mirror. Her body that had matured too soon, ahead of the rest. Too fat. Her breasts made the boys look at her more than the other girls. That was about the only reason to look at her. Her awkward shyness saw to that. She stumbled when she talked and said stupid things. She didn't even have a quirk. Different, nonconforming. Or maybe there was no real reason at all. People were just cruel, and she was unlucky. Maybe it just didn't matter at all. There are a lot of bridges in Edogawa because of all the rivers. Walking along the Koiwao Bridge, she looked down at the Shinaka River. The water looked peaceful, pretty. She was jealous of it. What a stupid thought. The next thought wasn't so much. This bridge isn't very high. The Kamatsugawa Bridge over the Arakawa River was taller. There was a cluster of other bridges close by, but it was the tallest. Still, looking down at the water below, she was filled with a sense of unease. Not tall enough. Summer break was coming soon, though, so she had the time to look elsewhere. Things were better in the summertime, too. Being at home was nice. It was safe. They weren't here to mock her. She looked at bridges and thought about it a lot, but in the summer, at least, she could put it off. She went with her mother to the Tokyo Sea Life Park. For the first time in a while, she felt really light. They went to Kasai Beach Park afterward. It was located on a small island connected by a bridge. This bridge isn't so tall, she thought, looking down at the water as they crossed it. Her eyes scanned outward across the shimmering Tokyo Bay and settled on a structure in the near distance. The Tokyo Gate Bridge was very tall. The railings weren't so high. She could climb them with some effort. There were glass panels along the top of the railing for viewing. She looked through them to the water below. It was beautiful and very far down. Probably this would work, but not right now. She kept walking alongside her mother, enjoying the day. Summertime was all right. Perhaps she was even happy. There was still some free time left to decide. I can't go back. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't breathe. The thought of returning to school in the morning was eating her alive from the inside. She slipped out of bed on the final night of summer break. A note left on her desk. I'm sorry, Oka-san. I never wanted you to worry. But I don't see the point anymore. I'm not a strong person. It's just too painful to live. There was enough money in her purse to make it to the bridge. 10 minutes to midnight. Her eyes looked out across the bay illuminated by the city and moonlight. This was a lovely final sight. She leaned close to the glass and looked down at the dark waves. A twinge of worry pinched her gut. Would it hurt more than the pain inside already? How long would it take to die? Her hand stayed on the railing, pinned by the final uncertainty. What if it didn't work? This one is tall enough. A rough voice interrupted from behind her. She jumped and spun around. The voice belonged to a shadow cut from the night. Faintly glowing red eyes looked back her. Their eyes met, and the glow intensified with the look piercing right through her as she pressed back against the railing with a chill racing down her spine. It stepped closer and then she realized that she recognized it as a familiar boy, with his hood up and hands buried in the pockets of his sweatshirt. Her classmate slinked up to the railing. He looked away from her as he rested his arms and gazed down to the softly churning waves. You'll die in an instant. Shisui-kun saved my life. The adults around the table tensed in alarm. What happened, Aoyagi-san? The principal shifted closer on the sofa, his eyes filled with concern. She clamped down, staring at her curled hands in her lap. I don't want to say. Shisui should be the one. You should ask him. Sorry. The adults looked at each other from across the sofas, both puzzled and worried. Tsukachi's eyes settled back on her with a long, thoughtful look. Aoyagi-san, did Akiyama use his quirk to save you? Yes. And can he save other people in the same way? Yes. Tsukachi leaned in, looking at her intently, his intuition fully wired. Maybe it was a long shot. Nothing but a flimsy hypothesis. But even if it wasn't, there was something serious going on here. And he was going to find out the truth. This next question may seem strange, but do you know if Akiyama has any knowledge regarding the unknown caller from the May 15th disaster? Her reaction was immediate and spoke more volumes than her words. She wasn't surprised. Tsukachi gauged the widening of her eyes as the shock of knowing and being discovered. It was all he needed to see. The principal, however, looked stunned. His head whipped to Tsukachi and he extended a hand over the coffee table. Wait, hold on. Is that what this is really all about? You think Akiyama is that caller? Tsukachi's eyes didn't leave Aoyagi. If we wanted to find Akiyama, where would he be right now? Her resistance seemed to crumble with the revelation, crumpling in with her shoulders. She shook her bowed head, then murmured softly to her knees. Shisui-kun is kind. He doesn't skip to cause trouble. He only cares about helping people. But he's really sensitive, too, and he hates when people look at him. I don't know where he is for sure. He'd never go to the same place twice. There's only the bridge that he goes to a lot, since no one's ever around. The old bridge on the former Jobin line. The room was silent as the adults processed that while looking at her. She didn't look up, eventually asking in a small voice, I don't want to talk anymore. Can I go back to class? Tsukachi absorbed the information for a moment more, then replied kindly. Yes, of course. Thank you, Aoyagi-san. You've been a great help. She stood up without saying a word and bowed, then hastily walked out. Tsukachi followed her with his eyes until the door clicked behind her. Then his gaze shifted around to Tamakawa with a shared nod. We've gotten enough information. Kajima-san, thank you for your time. Thump. Something loud and sturdy hit the wood of the sofa, forcing the officer's attention to the principal. His paddle tail relaxed, but the round and soft-furred features of the principal seemed far less amicable now, with Tsukachi finding a serious, demanding look aimed at him. Just 1 minute, please. The principal's voice was firm. You didn't answer me. Do you suspect Akiyama of being the earthquake caller? Tsukachi's expression was level. I can't answer questions regarding our investigation at this time. The principal didn't waver. What happens when you find him? Are you going to brand his face all over the news? Will you use him? Tsukachi's expression didn't change, either. Whoever the earthquake caller is, the police have a duty to find him before anyone else does and to protect him from that scrutiny. Neither of them moved for a long pause, eyes locked. Then the principal shifted back slightly, though his eyes didn't leave Tsukachi's. I've never been able to get Akiyama to confide anything in me. But that is certainly from no lack of concern. Keep that boy's best interests at heart, officer. Tsukachi inclined his head. I do. The principal seemed satisfied then, with his posture relaxing. If he returns to school before you find him, I'd like to notify you directly. Thank you. Tsukachi took a business card out of his coat and passed it to the principal across the coffee table. There is one other thing. I would like to get in contact with his parents. Of course, though it's only his mother. I'll get you the information you need." Upon exiting the school, Tsukachi and Tamakawa rejoined the original pair of officers who had been waiting outside. "We have a name for the student and a possible location he frequents. Here, looking at the map, I think this is the address. You two go to the west side of the bridge. Tamakawa and I will drive to the east. I'll let everyone know." "Got it." They headed back to their vehicles. Tamakawa took the wheel while Tsukachi grabbed the radio from the passenger seat, putting out a call to regroup for all officers checking the other schools. Tamakawa started driving while the officers tuned in, and once they were all present, Tsukachi instructed them. "We have confirmed the identity of the young man to be Akiyama Shisui, a third-year student at Edogawa Junior High School. He is skipping school today. Ada, Hashira, Tamakawa, and I are en route to a potential hangout of his at an old bridge on the former Joban line. The rest of you will disperse and search for him in populated areas in Edogawa. He does not tend to stick around at any place more than once and avoids long interactions, advising to approach him as casually and non-confrontationally as possible. He seems to be the type that would run away." The officers continued to discuss their search areas, and Tsukachi chimed in now and then to provide information and directives. By the time they pulled up to the old bridge, everything had been sorted out and the teams were mobilizing. The two officers stayed in the car scanning the area carefully. The old bridge in question was actually two identical truss bridges side by side. For a long time, they had served the Joban and Chiyoda lines before being discontinued due to newer construction elsewhere. The steel beams and railroad tracks were rusted all along the span of the bridge and were supported by short, stout columns. The terrain below the bridge was flat with short grass alongside the narrow river, and there was a gravel path that ran under the end of the bridge parallel with the water. Tsukachi studied the chain-link fence that blocked off access. It was as rusty as the bridge, decorated with worn-out caution signs and topped with askew barbed wire. Right at the end of the bridge where it met the earth, a box of fencing blocked access to the space underneath it where some mechanical supports were. The fence wasn't topped with barbed wire at this junction, as its top ended right at the bottom beam of the bridge. Bolted to this beam, the above guardrail that spanned the length of the bridge was potentially in reach. "I bet that's where he climbs up the fence to get on the bridge. I don't see him from here," Tamakawa commented, looking carefully along the railing and between all the trusses. "Maybe on the other side, or the other bridge." "Maybe," Tsukachi agreed, "though I'd rather not get too close right now. If he is here and he sees us, he'd think we're here to get him in trouble for being on the bridge. Ada and Hashira will be on the other side of the bridge soon. I'd rather stake out the location than risk him running off." After waiting a couple of minutes for the other pair of officers to drive around to the other end of the bridge, the radio announced their arrival. The four officers got out together and approached the outer side of each of the bridges for a closer look. After a thorough scan, they confirmed he wasn't there. "What now, Tsukachi?" Tamakawa asked, looking over to him. The officer thought about it for a few moments, leaning against the car while studying the bridge. He raised the radio to speak with the two on the other side of the bridge as well. "This is the only area that we know of for sure that he frequents. I want to maintain surveillance here at least for the rest of the day. If he isn't here by evening, it's probable that he's gone home. Tamakawa and I will go contact his mother in the meantime." He lowered the radio and looked at the bridge with a thoughtful furrow to his brow. "Hopefully, she can give us some insight. Akiyama-san, some police officers want to talk with you." The woman seated at the table with an inventory list looked up sharply with a frown. "What's going on? Did they say?" "No, but they're waiting by the door." The employee pointed towards the staff-only door leading back into the store. She thought for a moment, then sighed, abandoning the merchandise and pushing up from the table. Probably someone stealing something. No one better be dying. She was less irritated by the interruption upon stepping out of the door and discovering one officer was an adorable orange kitty, and a drab-looking fellow in a trench coat beside him. Her face brightened into a customer-serving smile that wasn't entirely faked for the cat man. "Hi, you wanted to speak with the manager. I'm Akiyama Akane." Tamakawa blinked at her focused attention on him. "Ah, you're the manager. This is actually unrelated to your work, Akiyama-san." She frowned perplexedly at that as he gave a polite bow. "Officers Tamakawa and Tsukachi, pleased to meet you. May we speak in private?" Tamakawa for a cat. "Oh, that's too cute. Depends on what about." "First," she replied, her customer service mask slipping off for a slightly wary one. "We have some questions to ask you regarding a case in which your son is involved," Tsukachi answered with a cordial smile. She immediately groaned, her eyes rolling up. "Oh, what's that kid done this time? Is he hurt? Seriously, Shisui?" "The police. You couldn't stop it skipping." Tsukachi looked at her in surprise and quickly lifted a calming hand. No harm as far I know. I'm sorry to have alarmed you. We're not here because he's done something wrong. But, please, it would be best if we explain in private." Her annoyed expression didn't depart, but she conceded. "Yeah, come on, this way." She headed back through the staff door and the officers followed. She took them to an office that was full of inventory items and boxes, though well organized. All right, what's he done? Or not done? Whatever, she sighed, taking a seat at the desk and gesturing at a chair across from her. Only one chair, sorry about that. That's all right. The two officers played a round of you first. No, you first before Tsukachi took the seat. Tsukachi studied her as he settled into the chair. She had dark brown hair that was pulled back, fair skin, high cheekbones, and a sharp chin. Her eyes, most notably to him, were a rich burgundy, perhaps similar in color to what her sons supposedly were, though the bags under them plus her annoyance gave her a tired and cross appearance. Akiyama-san, we are investigating a case in which a witness reported that your son used his quirk to help save their life. What? She looked dumbfounded, her eyes flicking between them, then settling on Tamakawa. Pardon my choice of phrase, but you're barking up the wrong tree. There's no quirk like that in my family. Tamakawa looked at her in confusion. Your son is Akiyama Shisui. He attends at Agawa Junior High. Is that correct? That's him. Then there's no mistake. We went to his school. One of his classmates confirmed it. Well, as his mother, I can assure you that there is a mistake. My son's quirk can't save anyone, she shot back flatly. Tamakawa's ears pricked at the bitterness in her tone. What is his quirk, exactly? Can you explain your certainty? Her eyes flicked to the side with a perturbed pursing of her lips. Is that really going to be of any help to you? Tsukachi leaned forward in his seat and urged, please, any information you can give us may help settle our investigation. She considered that for a moment with a swish of her mouth, then sighed and settled forward with a bleak look aimed at the wall between them. Fine, he got most of it from me, a little from his father. When he looks at people, he sees when they'll die. If he makes eye contact, he sees how. And no, he can't change that fate to help anybody out. It got that damn trait from me. When I sleep, I dream the circumstances of someone's death, someone at random who I met eyes with that day, or one person who I saw of my choice if I focus on them before going to bed. The visions we get are a self-fulfilling prophecy. Our quirks see a future that has already taken into account every action to change it. It doesn't matter what either of us do to try and stop what we see from happening. What is seen will definitely happen. No matter what we do, something will always get in our way to make sure of it. The best either of us can do to save anybody with our quirks is to not see those fate. Might do something to keep it from getting set in stone, so I hope. I take medication that keeps me from dreaming. My quirk tries to fight it, ensuring I sleep like crap and feel like it when I wake up. But at least I don't see anybody die. And Shisui, my poor boy, stares at his feet all day, every day, to avoid eye contact with anyone. She pointed at the dark rings under her eyes. The only thing our quirks have ever done is made sure I look like this, and that Shisui has the most god-awful slouch. That's it. She settled back in her seat and laced her hands on the desk. There, anything else I can help you with, officers? Tamakawa said nothing. The look on his face and the sideways swivel of his ears revealed how perplexed he was by that information, and the glance he shared with Tsukachi showed similar confusion on his face as well. He rubbed his neck, head tilting a little from the effort of trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. Do you know your son's friend, Aoyagi Hitomi? I do. Do you know how they became friends? Not exactly. Shisui's never told me. I'd imagine their similar personalities have something to do with it. She's a wallflower, and Shisui, he's the wall. I see. We talked to Aoyagi. She told us that your son saved her life with his quirk. She told us he can save other people in the same way. Tamakawa leaned forward, his voice insistent. I know that doesn't match what you just said, but are you sure? She frowned. I have no idea why she would say that. Saved her life. Did she say what happened? No, Aoyagi didn't want to speak with us further. She'd rather have Shisui speak on the matter. Speaking of which, as I understand it from the principal, he's been skipping school. Her features shifted to annoyance again. Yes, ever since summer ended last year, and he keeps his grades just high enough to scrape by without failing outright. Why? What happened? I don't know. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat and said nothing more. Tsukachi frowned. Tension in the family, the principal said. He doesn't talk with you about it? She was still for a long moment, then gave a huff with her expression softening into remorse. It's probably a bit obvious, isn't it? We aren't the closest. Shisui doesn't confide much in me. It shouldn't be like that between a mother and her child, I know, but it doesn't matter what I say to him. He doesn't want to, and I can't change his mind. Tamakawa looked at her sympathetically. I can't imagine that's very easy. Was that last year, too, when he stopped talking? No, that was earlier, from something else. She wouldn't meet the officer's eyes, a silence stretching out after she finished. Suddenly, she cleared her throat and looked back at him, her expression clearing up. Would you like to talk with Shisui? Is that what you're getting at? It's fine with me. Honestly, you might get more out of him than I can. Well, we're actually trying to do that right now. When we went to his school, we find out he's skipping today. How surprising of him, she deadpanned. I have several officers out looking for him now. Can you think of anywhere he'd likely be? She thought about it, looking down at the table. He likes water. Quiet water with reflections. Maybe parks with ponds. I can't even say I know him well enough to tell you more than that. She fell silent, and the heaviness in her voice made both the officers share a sympathetic glance. Her eyes flicked up. But if you don't find him, he's usually home by 8 every night. If you want to come by then, I wouldn't be opposed. Thank you for offering. Sukachi took out a card from his coat and passed it across the desk. I'll let you know right away if we find him. Contact me at any time if there's something you can think of. She took the card with a nod and swiped a sticky note to write on. Good. As soon as you find him, I want to be there. I'm sure you can look it up. But anyway, our address if he doesn't turn up sooner, and my cell number. She passed it to him. So, anything else I can help with right now? No, I think that will do. She looked lost in thought at the wall for a few moments. Then a small huff passed her lips and her eyes met Sukachi's softer than before. And look, just be kind to him, right? I try, but I'm not good at talking very gently, and it doesn't work with him. He always clams up. Sensitive. Sukachi nodded, his voice soft. I'll do my best to be patient with him. Family certainly has a way of making things complicated. She scoffed. Yeah, you can say that again. Anyway, we should both be getting back to work, right? Let me know as soon as you find him, please. Sukachi stood up. Thank you for your time, Akiyama-san. She walked them back to the staff door, and once they were through, she returned to her work on the table. She didn't begin right away, though, pressing her hands to her slumped head with a sigh as she muttered under her breath. Damn it, Shisui, just be all right. Outside, Sukachi and Tamakawa made their way back to the car. Both of them carried thoughtful looks. Tamakawa glanced over at his partner. She didn't seem to know about the bridge. I suppose it makes sense that he'd keep it just between him and his friend. Yeah, Sukachi agreed absently, brow furrowed with his gaze looking unfocused in the distance. There's something missing. They got into the car and Tamakawa looked expectantly at him. Where to next? Sukachi remained silent for a bit, his eyes still unfocused with his fingers rested against his temple. He shifted with the hand pulling away to take out his notepad. His eyes flicked down to study the pages while his free hand twirled the pen. Kajima and Aoyagi didn't agree on how his quirk works. His mother insists his quirk can't save people like Aoyagi said it could. The behavior changes in befriending her in the same year, saving her life. And now he's skipping to help others, too. Why not before? What changed last year when he saved her life? His voice drifted off and eventually, the pen slowed to a standstill as he lost the trail on the page. He slowly swiped down his face then looked out the windshield lowering the notepad. He'll have to fill in that part himself. Let's go look for him. It's all we can do for now. Sukachi and Tamakawa along with the other officers searched far and wide, but not a hair of Akiyama Shisui was to be found. The team staking out the bridge remained silent as well. As the sun reached the horizon coloring the sky orange, Sukachi put out the call to end the search for the night. And then the pair of them headed back to the station. I imagine you'd like to get home, Sukachi commented while watching a cup of instant noodles spin around in the staff microwave with a semi-mesmerized, glazed look in his eyes. I can take care of the home visit alone. I'm sure my dinner would taste the same in any location, Tamakawa replied between bites from a fish bento at the table. This is the closest we've gotten to an actual answer. I'd rather stick around and see it through. That's not the first time either of us has said that on this case, Sukachi smiled bleakly. After nearly a month of non-stop searching with the world breathing down their neck and the Commissioner General first in line for answers, going home at a regular hour was an increasingly distant memory for the detective. True, but I feel good about it this time. Tamakawa looked rather perky by comparison, munching on a fish. I agree, but the inconsistencies are making me anxious. We've gone and gotten our hopes up. The microwave beeped, and Sukachi got his cup out. He sat down at the table across from Tamakawa. As much of a workaholic as he was, Sukachi could manage to relax for a couple of minutes taking out his phone and scrolling idly through pleasant pictures and stories of anything that wasn't about the case. Tamakawa was content to remain silent as well. For a few minutes, the room was quiet, and then a newcomer poked her head in. Hello. Sukachi didn't even need to look up to recognize that voice. Hey, Makoto. I thought you'd be home by now, and leave you alone to make bad dietary choices. He heard her move closer. And then her hand was in his line of view pointing a disapproving finger down at the noodle cup. You aren't doing yourself any favor eating that junk over and over again. Here. She lifted up the grocery bag she had in her hand and set it down beside his cup. He looked up to find a box of nice spring rolls. Aw, thanks. She sat down in the chair next to him with her own box of rolls. Suo, how'd things go today? Nice try, but you still can't bribe me, he shot back, setting the phone aside and opening the noodle cup. You were gone all day, and a lot of the other guys, too, she carried on like he hadn't said a thing. Since most of our leads have dried up pretty quick, I'd say I must have found a juicy one. We're still investigating. He slurped up some noodles. But gosh, I really hope the caller isn't a teenager. Sukachi nearly choked on the noodles. That's so dreadfully young. He shifted a sidelong glance at her and found an impish smile looking back at him. You're not supposed to be getting into those details, Makoto. I'm serious. I didn't get into anything. Ada left a picture on his desk. Sukachi sighed, tucking away a mental note to scold the officer about that later. Your role is to screen our leads. That's it. You can't keep snooping around like that or it will get you into trouble. What? I'm not planning on doing anything with that information, of course. I'm just curious. Curiosity killed the cat, Sukachi muttered. And satisfaction brought it back. She shot back with a grin. Tamakawa looked across the table at them a bit sheepishly. They both looked up and realized what they'd said. Sorry, they said in unison. Makoto looked back at her brother. So, when are you going to be home tonight? Oh no, let me guess, 8:30? I have to follow up with a lead at 8. 9:30. Maybe. She leaned on his arm with her head lightly on his shoulder. It's okay to sleep every now and then. The caller will still be out there. And I'll take a nice break once we've found him. I promise. You're lying. He stiffened slightly, realizing that her head was touching his neck just a little, and of course, that meant polygraph. He scowled down at her. Don't do that. She chuckled and pulled away from him. At this rate, I'd better schedule you a vacation. Don't do that. Domestic or international. Might be good to get out of Japan after all this. But I hear Yamanashi has a resort. Don't do that. Tamakawa watched the siblings continue to pester each other in slightly amused silence. He slowly inched out of his seat when he finished his bento. I'll just meet you at the car. Sukachi nodded with a glance in between another retort to Makoto's antics, and Tamakawa slipped away with a pleased feline smile. Weary as his partner was, Sukachi looked a lot livelier when his sister was around. Officers. Akiyama Akane looked them up and down from the open doorway. Akiyama-san, it's nice to see you again. Sukachi gave a tip of his hat. I can't honestly say the same given the reason, but come on in. Anyway. She turned back into the apartment and they followed her inside. Also, Shisui isn't home yet. Of course, my darn kid is home late because I told you he's usually home by now. Funny that. It's alright. The officers slipped off their shoes while she walked on ahead. I made some tea. Do you want some while you wait for him? Yes, thank you. Sukachi looked around as he followed her. They lived in a simple and small apartment with the living and dining sections in the same open area. The furniture was minimalistic to match the cozy space, though color coordinated with blues and green. It wasn't hard for Tsukachi to spot the modern-styled Butsudan shrine dedicated in the living room with pictures of fond memories with the deceased. She took a seat on the floor at the Chabudai dining table and the officers sat down across from her with their backs to the shrine. She poured the tea and passed it to each of them and then for herself. She took a tiny sip of the steaming beverage, set the cup down, looked at each of the officers, then down again at the cup wordlessly. The officers sipped, looked at her, then at each other, then back at her. You have a nice sense for design. Tamakawa timidly broke the silence, studying some tiny plants in pots hung in a staggered array on the wall behind her. She blinked and glanced back over her shoulder. Thanks. Sorry. I'm not much for small talk. Don't have much time to entertain guests, either. It would be a short list, anyway. Do you work long hours? Tsukachi asked, trying for conversation as well. Yeah, store's been growing fast lately. Seems we're always one person short in every department. But growth is good, right? Job security. So, that's a positive way of thinking. She snorted a little. Hey, I guess. Tsukachi sipped, his thoughts drifting to the shrine at his back. It's just his mother, the principal said. And Shisui's father. Where does he work? Her eyes went to the shrine behind Tsukachi's head. He's not with us anymore. He passed away 4 years ago. Oh, my apologies. I didn't mean to assume, Tsukachi replied hastily, his thought confirmed. It's all right. Tamakawa looked at her sympathetically. That must have been a difficult time. Her eyes stayed on the shrine. Yes, Shisui was close to his father. But life goes on. Have to pick yourself up and keep moving. That's just how it goes. Her eyes left the shrine and she took another sip of tea. Sports? Anyone watch sports? Tsukachi gave a faint chuckle at what was perhaps the most awkward transition in history but took the hint. Not recently. I'm a big fan of baseball, though. Tokyo's winning in soccer lately. Keep seeing them on the TV at work. I like number 8. What's his name? The deadbolt on the door turned and they perked up at the sound. Shisui. They listened to the door swish open with their gazes expectantly pinned on the hallway. The teen stepped in with his head down and a black sling backpack over his shoulder. He closed the door quietly and turned to the entryway. He was about to slip off his shoes like usual but froze with the toe of one foot on the heel of the other shoe when he saw the 2 pairs of men's shoes that shouldn't have been there. For a few moments, he was motionless, an uncertain anxiety fluttering in his gut. Mom has guests over on a workday. And 2 men. She didn't say anything. He moved again, slowly, keeping his shoes on as he crept down the short hall into the living space. He peered into the room with his eyes low and found 3 faces turned his way, making his feet freeze again. They were waiting for him. His pulse quickened. "You're home late," his mother commented. "What you been up to?" There were a lot of police around today. He wasn't sure why, so he had been cautious and taken the long routes around town. "Just out walking." "Why are they here?" His voice was deep for his age with a rough quality. Especially over the phone, he could be mistaken for someone older. Tsukachi aimed a relaxed smile at him. "Hello, I'm Officer Tsukachi, and this is my partner, Officer Tamakawa." A feline smile was also aimed his way. Shisui's stomach dropped. For a moment, his mind was still, and then a single word was whispered. "Run." The adults at the table were startled as he whipped out of sight back into the entryway. They heard the door open and the officers scrambled up with his mother right behind them. "Shisui, get back here, young man." The door swung wide instead. By the time the officers reached the hall, it was empty. "Shisui, wait." They hopped into their shoes out onto the second-floor balcony to see where he'd gone. Tamakawa spotted him first with his cat pupils dilating in the dim lighting, and he pointed for Tsukachi to where the teen was running for a side street. "He's fast." "Did he jump the railing?" "You're not in trouble for anything. Just let us explain." "Should I chase him?" Tamakawa asked tensely, already poised to pounce down. Tsukachi watched him disappear around the corner with a clenched grip on the railing. "No, he's fast. He'd know these streets far too well. Besides, we might know where he's going." "Shisui, come back." His mother ran barefoot to the railing and called out. He wasn't anywhere to be seen, and her voice fell, hands clenched on the railing with a grimace. "Damn it, got him it." She wheeled around and whipped the air with her hands in frustration. "I can't get him to do anything. Not even come home. And I call myself his mother. Shit, why did you run?" She seemed to run out of steam, running her hands up over her head, then cupping her neck as she leveled an anxious, unfocused stare at the open doorway. The officers looked at her silently for a moment, then shared a look. "On second thought, you should stay with her. I think she likes you more, anyway," Tsukachi instructed quietly, then turned to address her. "Akiyama-san, I'm going to call someone who can help find him. As soon as I can, I'll let the 2 of you know. We'll get this figured out. I'll make sure of it." She looked over, letting her hands slide down heavily with a shake of her head. "I'm sorry. This is so ridiculous. None of us needed this tonight. Find him, please." "I will." Tsukachi gave a final nod to Tamakawa, then hurried down the stairs, his phone already out to connect through the police portal of the Hero Network. 2 people came to his mind. Canine nostrils sniffed the air, nose pointed at the pair of old Tress bridges. He's definitely been here. Very recently. Maybe still here. Fingers looped around a metallic scarf. "I'll take a closer look." Cloth whipped up to the beams of the left bridge, and they watched the hero depart silently up the structure with his back illuminated in the strong moonlight, the moon nearly full. The pair of them stood and watched from the cover of the rusty fence at the end of the bridge, being sure to stay out of sight. After just a minute or two, a silvery ribbon in shadow dropped back down and approached them. "He's here, 5 pillars down, left side, sitting with his back against one of the beams. Only thing he has is a backpack. Not sure if he planned on holding up here overnight or what." Tsukachi looked out at the bridge. "About halfway down. He's in shadow from here, it seems." He glanced up at the hero beside him. "Hound dog, can you get to the other side of the bridge without being seen? I don't want him running again." "Easy." Hound dog nodded sharply. "Good. I'll climb up on this side." He looked at the other hero. "Eraserhead, watch from above. I'd like to approach him first if he'll let me. But if he won't cooperate, you'll be our last resort. Just nothing rough." "Got it. I'll head over." Hound dog took off quickly, running in the shadow of the bridge on the right. He proceeded to leap onto the structure easily to circle around to its twin from the other side. Eraserhead studied the section of fence that wasn't barbed under the end of the bridge, then looked at Tsukachi. "So, when you say climb up, do you mean actually climb or?" Eraser tapped at his capturing weapon with a questioning look. "Need a hand?" Tsukachi gave him a flat, incredulous look. "I'm not exactly young anymore, but I can still climb a fence." "Heh, all right." Eraser backed down, unbothered in the slightest, with a ghost of a smile and a shrug. "Logically, this would be quicker, but that's not a bad attitude, either." The hero proceeded up the frame of the left bridge as quickly as he had the first time, while Tsukachi followed the fence to the climbable section. He curled his fingers in it and dug a toe through a fence loop and pulled himself up the first step. About a month's worth of convenience food and poor sleep protested, and a flash of regret struck over not taking up the hero's offer. "Though, this was certainly easier when I was a kid." He was committed to the climb, though, and while definitely slower than either pro, he made it up and through the railing with less sweat than anticipated. He adjusted his coat, then started cautiously down the bridge, making sure to step quietly as he eyed the spot where the teen was supposed to be. When he was close, but not too much so, he called out gently, "Akiyama-san." A shadow jolted up from behind a beam, and Tsukachi saw a widened pair of faintly glowing red eyes look back at him, though angled down below his face. The teen backed up, his stance panicked, and Tsukachi quickly held up his hands with his voice softened. "Relax, you're not in trouble. Can I talk with you?" "No." He spun around and started to run, but a huge furry shape stepped out from the beams ahead of him, making him stop short. Hound Dog had his hands lifted too as he stepped forward slowly. "Take it easy, kid. You can't outrun my nose. Just talk with us." Akiyama stepped back from him quickly and whipped around to again face Tsukachi, who had stopped walking and remained at a distance to keep the pressure off. "We're not here because you've done anything wrong, but we do need some answers." Officer Tsukachi again. He gestured slowly over the train tracks, which were somewhat raised relative to the base of the bridge. "Can we sit and talk?" Akiyama's eyes flicked to the tracks, then they flicked to the right where the railing was. His posture relaxed and straightened. He began walking forward slowly. Tsukachi started to relax his hands with a reassuring smile on his face at the teen's apparent cooperation as he came closer. Suddenly, the teen twisted, bolting for the side of the bridge. "Don't!" Both Tsukachi and Hound Dog rushed forward in alarm as he vaulted over the railing. Neither of them could see from their angle that a ledge jutted out from the support pillar about a meter below. Tsukachi hadn't taken the structural detail of each pillar into account before, having never anticipated him jumping off the side. But the teen knew every inch of this bridge. Once he landed, he started running for the end of the ledge with the intent to hang down from it and drop the shortened distance to the ground below. But his hands never reached the edge, for someone else's hands were quicker. His body jerked to a stop as hard coils wrapped around him, suddenly trapping his arms to his sides. He grunted in surprise as he was pulled with a firm yank that forced his back against the main body of the bridge. Above him, a racerhead stood with a foot braced firmly on the railing and his hair dropping as he blinked down at the rather gutsy teenager he had captured. "Let's not have anyone get hurt here." "That's still a bit of a drop down." Tsukachi breathed a sigh of relief as he stopped by the railing. "Thank you, Eraser." Eraserhead took a handful of cloth and started hauling the teen back up onto their side of the bridge. Hound Dog reached over with his greater height and bulk and managed the rest with a few quick hand-over-hands. He set the dangling teen on his feet lightly, and the three adults looked at him, one on each side and the railing to his back. Akiyama kept his eyes pinned on the ground, and there was a sudden lack of fight in his deflated shoulders after having every attempt to flee fail. Tsukachi stood in front of him with a concerned expression. "You'd rather jump off a bridge than talk to me, huh? I'm sorry we had to tie you up like that, but we really do need to talk." He looked at Eraser and motioned for him to untie the teen. Eraser did so without objection. Akiyama rubbed his arms as soon as he was freed and stuffed his hands into his sweater pockets, still refusing to look anywhere but the ground. His bangs hid his eyes mostly save for the faint red glow. Tsukachi put a hand on Akiyama's shoulder. "Let's go sit down." He turned with a gesture towards the tracks. His eyes met Eraser's briefly and he nodded to him with a glance to Hound Dog. "I'll handle it from here." Eraser nodded, though his eyes flicked to the teen. "I'll stay in sight distance, though." Proven to be a runner, the two heroes started walking for the end of the bridge to give them space. Tsukachi's hand on the teen's back urged him forward, and he didn't fight it. The officer guided them over to the tracks, which they took a seat on with Tsukachi on his right. Tsukachi looked sympathetically at the teen who sat curled over with his head down and his eyes pinned on the floor. "Mom said be gentle. For whatever it's worth, I'm sorry for all this. I can tell you really don't want to talk, but it's something that I have to do. Though, that doesn't mean your feelings here don't matter. You don't have to talk to me alone if you don't want to. If you'd be more comfortable, we can go back to your mother." The teen shook his head. "Or, we can talk at a later time with someone else that you trust, like a teacher. Would you prefer that?" Tsukachi waited expectantly, but he gave no response or even moved, his eyes still pinned on the floor and half hidden. The officer frowned, thought, then tried again. "This must be pretty alarming, but I'm not here because you're in any trouble. In fact, I hear you've been helping people. That's what I want to ask you about tonight. I think it's a wonderful thing to do. I just need some answers." Akiyama did react then, hunching down even further with his arms curling around his tucked-up knees. However, again, he refused to speak. Tsukachi's frown deepened, mouth swishing to the side. "Is there anything you're willing to talk about? Something we can start with first?" "I'm all right with that." The teen only turned his head away. Tsukachi rubbed his neck, looking a bit put out. "I suppose the principal did say it was like talking to a wall. Come to think of it, his mother called him that, too." Tsukachi's eyes dropped down to his coat, feeling the objects in the pocket there. "Well, I was going to save these for after, but anything to get through to him at this point. I've spoken to a lot of people who have met you. Yet, there's quite a lot I'm uncertain about. I'd say one of the few things that I am certain about is that you like these." Tsukachi pulled the objects out of his coat and set them by the teen's feet. Akiyama turned his head a little, and Tsukachi watched him stare at the Coca-Cola and black licorice bag he'd placed there with a long look. At last, the teen broke his silence with an exhale of disbelief and looked away again. The police really can figure out anything. Tsukachi looked relieved to hear his quiet, rough voice. He had stopped by the store nearly on a whim on his way to the bridge, a last-minute remembrance of a tiny detail. It seemed to me like you're having a rough day, so I thought I'd get you something on my way here. Is that your favorite snack? Yeah, I wondered if it might be. I saw you getting it on a camera at a convenience store about 2 weeks ago. Come to think of it, that would have been around the time you helped save a man's life by telling him to go see a doctor, that he would be very sick. That was you, wasn't it? Akiyama was silent, and Tsukachi worried that the teen had withdrawn again as he pressed on. That man did go to a doctor. They discovered his cancer and caught it early enough to treat it. He told me that he was grateful to the person that saved him, but he didn't get the chance to thank him. To thank you. He curled inward on himself further, his hands combing slowly through his hair and settling on his neck, hiding his face from Tsukachi. Not that his unreadable expression had given anything away. Come on, what are you thinking right now? Aoyagi told me how you saved her life, too. Even your friend. That one did get a response out of him. A faint snort was followed by him quietly scoffing. Is that what she said? Tsukachi frowned, intrigued by that reply. Yes, it is. She said that you are kind. That you save other people, too. That's why you skip class, it seems. She says your quirk can save people's lives. Can it? It's not that great, came the quiet mumble beneath the teen's arms. But it was finally something. Is that so? Aoyagi wouldn't tell me everything. Your trust matters to her. You have a good friend. I still don't have all the answers. Like how your principal and your mother say your quirk can't help people. I suppose you haven't told them anything about it. I didn't want to tell them. I can see that. You prefer to do it alone. I think it might be scary to talk about it. You don't know what they'd say. And from what Aoyagi did tell me, I think there could be more to it than that. Not just what those closest to you would say, but other people, too. I have to wonder if you know about the call that was made to the police. The earthquake caller. Aoyagi knew something about him, and you, something that she said you should be the one to say. The teen was quiet again at that, and Tsukachi asked quietly, Can you tell me, Akiyama-san? He leaned away from Tsukachi slightly with a tight, tense sigh, his left hand pressing to his forehead with his right arm shielding his face from Tsukachi's view as he muttered, I don't see what point there is. You already figured everything out. You just want a confirmation. You know already, can't that be enough? Just leave me alone. Tsukachi looked at him sympathetically. I can't do that, I'm sorry. There are people who are counting on me to find the truth. Also, there may be something you haven't considered, either. Other people could figure this out, too. There is a real concern we have that there are people out there who would exploit such an ability and people's fears for personal profit. Perhaps not that caller himself, but villainous individuals who would manipulate him. We can protect him from that if we know who he is. Akiyama stood up suddenly with a scoffing comment under his breath. And use him for yourselves. He walked forward and Tsukachi watched him warily. He didn't seem inclined to run, however. His distress was evident as he began to pace up and down the bridge with his hands unable to settle between his sides and running over his hair. Tsukachi watched him in silence for a few moments, then settled forward with his hands together in a focused gaze. Are you the earthquake caller? Akiyama stopped walking, his hands on his neck and eyes looking distantly at nothing down the bridge. The silence stretched and Tsukachi's eyes didn't leave him, watching as he ran a hand back through his hair with eyes low. It doesn't matter what I think. I need to hear it from you, Akiyama. I need the truth. You're scared. That's all right, Tsukachi said softly. It seemed that comment was the breaking point for Akiyama. He whipped back around to face Tsukachi with a glare at the officer's feet, his hands animated. No, I'm terrified, and you're trying to drag me into it. He jabbed his hand at the officer, then spun away, pacing back and forth with his hands agitated. I didn't know this would happen when I made that call. I didn't know it would get all over the news. My classmates are talking about it. It's online, on TV, in magazines, on the radio, everywhere I go. Everyone in the world is looking for me. Once they find out who I am, they're going to come after me. They're going to stare at me, and they're going to want me to look right back at them to tell them when they'll die. They won't take no for an answer. They'll never leave me alone. And you want me because important people everywhere want to use me, too. Am I even going to get a choice in this? His voice cracked with emotion as he whipped back around to Tsukachi with his demand for an answer, though as always, his eyes stayed below the officer's face. It took Tsukachi a few moments of silence to recover from his surprise, and then he looked sadly at the teen in front of him. Fear, uncertainty, and the overwhelming social pressure of the whole world's scrutiny. A sensitive boy they had him. Like talking to a wall, he bottled up his anxiety and fears inside, until it cracked, then collapsed. No doubt, it had been weighing heavily on his mind all this time, but he had still helped. If you had known what would happen, would you have decided not to warn us? Sukachi asked softly. Akiyama was quiet with the energy of his outburst vanishing. He turned away and walked to the railing, leaning heavily on it and looking down at the smooth water where his reflection was. No, I couldn't do something like that. So many people were going to die. If I hadn't done something, they would have. You're a good person, Sukachi said kindly. You chose to take action. With your quirk, I imagine it's hard. Watching people die. It can't be easy to do that alone. Sukachi stood up and approached the railing, settling his arms beside Akiyama and looking over at him. I'm here to say you don't have to help people alone. I can help you and others I know. Not just that, but we have the resources to aid you in reaching the most people. We will look out for you so that you can save people's lives. Tell me, is that something you want? Akiyama was quiet for a long time, looking at their reflections together. He sighed and closed his eyes, slumping down into his arms. I do want to help people, but you've got it wrong. It's not because I'm so good of a person. His voice died, struggling to find the words. Sukachi waited patiently until he found them. I have to do something with this guilt I have. Sukachi frowned. For what? Are you willing to tell me? Akiyama was quiet with his head bowed for a long time, and then he drew in a quiet breath. It started with Aoyagi. She has beautiful eyes. He watched the water rush up to meet them as her feet left the bridge. The darkness that followed when they connected was sudden, and then it was swiftly gone, leaving him looking back at her startled green eyes. He looked away from her, lowering his gaze to the desk. It's a shame she'll die. Her eyes remained on the odd boy sitting in the corner who had stared at her so intensely. Then she shook off the feeling his eyes had left her with and smiled at someone else. Hi, I'm Aoyagi Hitomi from Etagawa Elementary. Let's have a great time in junior high together. Most of them avoided the silent boy in the corner. They read his isolated placement, refusing to look at anyone, and stayed away. He didn't spare any of them more than a glance, but he always listened. 2330081203475 was loud and obnoxious. He didn't like him right away. 233306272322003 already seemed like a bratty sort of girl. 232610171344026 was nice. He'd probably be one of the class reps soon enough. Everyone take your seats, please. He glanced up as their new homeroom teacher came in. She gave them her name, but he just looked down again. 2305020502303 seemed all right. Her voice wasn't annoying. At least, not that any of it really mattered, though. Walking home from school, he kept his eyes on the ground in front of his feet and not on the throngs of people around him. There was no point. Even if he looked up, all he would find was a sea of numbers, faces replaced by numerical digits, and eyes holding a hopelessly unavoidable future. The school year progressed, and with it, he watched 2264083123561 with the green eyes. The bullying started subtly, laughing at her clumsiness, poking fun at her chest, snickering hidden behind hands and whispered insults. 233306272322003 started it. He knew she'd be a brat. He never really could get it why people were wired that way. She singled her out and gradually it infected the class. He sat alone watching her sit alone, surrounded by worthless numbers. They disgusted him, but he never moved against them. He watched and did nothing. What was the point? She would die, and nothing he did, no matter how hard he tried, could change that future. But that didn't mean he didn't care in his own hopeless way. In their second year, he watched her more closely. He noticed how silent and withdrawn she had become, nearly as much as himself. After school, he followed her some days for a little while. He watched her slow down while crossing the bridge on her way home, her eyes on the water. He knew why. He knew this was the beginning of the end. But he said nothing, did nothing. The future could not be changed. What was the point of this life he had? He wondered that often. What value was there in living a life surrounded by constant reminders of mortal misery? What purpose did these cursed eyes have when nothing could be changed? He might as well not exist at all. The future would be the same either way. As the final night of her life approached, he prepared, unable to stop it, but still capable of caring. He decided he would be there to see it through to the end. From his position on the opposite side of the bridge unnoticed, he watched her hesitate. He jumped the railing easily to walk across the barren midnight road, approaching her from behind. She was so lost and thought she didn't notice him until he spoke. This one is tall enough. He watched her jump and whip around. He lifted his eyes to hers, and with the piercing vision, he confirmed her fate again. Eyes dropping from hers, he slumped on the railing beside her and looked down at the waves she would soon meet. You'll die in an instant. It took her a while to recover and respond, her eyes still wide on him as she processed his words. Why, you mean, you've seen it? With your quirk? Yes, he answered faintly. His quirk was vague to her. It wasn't something he had ever brought up willingly in class. She only knew a little bit about it from class introductions. Still, his words gave her an odd sense of relief. Instantly, she didn't have to worry. Ayaga's hands settled back on the railing as she looked down at the water again, feeling strangely calmer. Did you know for a while? How did you know I'd be here? I knew from the first day of junior high. I recognized this bridge when I saw. Well, he quietly left it at that. That long? Then it's for real. Wow, but you, why are you here? I never did a single thing to help you. It didn't matter. I don't have the power to change your fate. But I can do one thing, I decided. She looked at him questioningly. That is. He turned his head to look at her. His gaze dropped to below her chin. I can be here at the end. After all the misery you've been through, and the loneliness, I can make sure that when you jump, it isn't alone. Her brow furrowed, unease fluttering up in her belly disrupting the eerie calm she felt. What are you saying? He looked forward again and closed his eyes, pressing his fingertips to his eyelids. My eyes shouldn't exist. Locking people into their fates is so cruel. If I had the stomach for it, I'd have gouged them out already. But I'm not strong-willed enough for that. Yet, I've still got the will to live miserably looking at nothing but the ground. I don't want it anymore, existing like this. He pulled away from the railing and faced her fully. So, this way, neither of us will be alone. She stared at him with her mouth slightly agape. The calm he had given her left replaced with an unsettling feeling and an anxious gate to her heart. He held out his hand, words spoken quietly. Are you ready? She looked down at his hand and thought for a long moment. The anxiety hadn't left, but the more she looked at him waiting there, the greater the pressure felt not to keep him waiting. And, also, there was a comfort in having him here. It would be instant. He'd be with her. And when he spoke, he sounded so sad to her, so hopeless. Though he wouldn't meet her gaze, Aoyagi looked at his eyes. They always glowed, red, foreboding. She couldn't imagine living with such a quirk. Perhaps that's why neither could he anymore. Aoyagi took his hand wordlessly accepting the offer. Akiyama was taller, so he helped pull her up onto the railing beside him. Once there, he let go of her hand to swing his leg up and pull himself up onto the glass viewing panels. Once he was steady, he reached his hand down again. We're really going to do this. She hesitated, then slowly put her hand in his again. Carefully, he pulled her up beside him. They crouched to stay stable, looking down with nothing between them and the water now but air. It feels so much more real up here. They rose together, slowly connected by their hands still clasped together. And then they stood still. This is it. Neither of them made the first move, both still looking down at the sea. Just one more step. That's all. Then nothing at all. Yet their feet stayed grounded. Akiyama lifted his eyes to the sky, shutting out the sight of the drop below. The sky, he never did look up much. It was all right to look up now. Up at stars made faint by the glow of the city. They'd have been brighter, prettier, outside the city. Maybe, to see them, would be nice, but no. He focused his eyes on the red blinking of a plane. Red. He hated red. So much. Just one step to end the color red. He lifted his foot forward. Aoyaga's hand on his suddenly went tight. Stop. She pulled him back with her grip and his foot found the bridge again as he looked at her sharply with a startled jolt. She saw his wide, questioning eyes on her face, forgetting to keep them angled below, and she hesitated with her grip loosening. I don't want to see you die, too. This feels like I'm responsible for it. She pulled her hand out of his and retreated down to the railing, clinging tightly to the top of the glass panels. She paused for a moment there, feeling breathless from the anxiety hammering in her chest that had made her step down. Looking at the water again from this point of safety while Akiyama continued to stand at the top of the panels looking down at her dumbfounded. I changed my mind. She stepped down the rest of the way back onto the bridge pathway, shaking her head and stepping back. I'm going home. I can't, Don't jump, either, maybe? She turned away looking at the ground. Sorry to leave you alone. Akiyama watched her hurry away without another word. His mouth was wide open as he stared after her, shocked by her declination. Yes, there was something else, too, however. Something he saw that shouldn't have been. 233311172232249. But that isn't right. She's 226408312356110. She was supposed to die just now. The wind picked up suddenly, pushing against his back. It caught him off guard and he felt himself lurching forward. His eyes snapped to the sea below, and in that moment, the sight of it stabbed him with panic. He threw his arms out and caught himself, then dropped down immediately to all fours on the ledge. He slipped down quickly to the railing with his breathing shallow and quick. His arms felt shaky, and he lifted his right hand, watching it tremble out of his control. Swallowing, he slowly stepped back down to the floor on weak, jittery knees. Immediately, he dropped down low on his haunches with his hands still holding tight to the railing above his head to stabilize himself. He stared out at the sea through the glass. The strange calm he'd felt at the top was gone. Back on the ground, the adrenaline surge hit him. Survive. His lips shifted wryly with a weakly amused laugh at his own situation. I guess I really do want to live, after all. Too weak-willed to commit to even nothingness. The moment of bitter humor left him and his eyes focused. His head turned back to her direction, watching her shrinking back retreat over the growing distance. But she was supposed to die that night, but she didn't. Akiyama looked down at the water contemplatively and thought quietly for a while. Tsukachi watched him, his body completely still with a serious, focused gaze, and made no sound. He listened as finally Akiyama spoke for himself. I don't know why it happened. It never did before then. No matter what I did, I could never change the future I saw. But it did that night. Something changed about my Quirk. She lived, and not just her, anyone. I can change the fate I see now. Once I realized, I couldn't take it. If I had just figured it out sooner. There are people out there I've seen, they're dead now. Even little kids. I've walked right by children who I knew I'd outlive and I never said a thing. Because I couldn't do anything. But now I can. I had this ability somewhere in me all this time. And it took me this long to find it. If I only figured it out sooner, they could be alive now. Things could have been different. But I was complacent. I just accepted I couldn't change a thing, so I gave up on trying. What was the point in even bothering? I watched them torment Aoyagi. I never lifted a finger to stop them. For the longest time, I stopped viewing those around me as people. In my mind, I didn't call them by their names, just their numbers. The time of death I saw when I looked at them. But I can't do that anymore. Now that I can do something, I have to. It's why I stopped going to school. I just go walking, looking for people who will die young instead. What do grades even matter when there are people dying? And I can change that. Akiyama went quiet, staring down at the water for a long pause. Then he closed his eyes with a sigh. I just feel so ashamed. Tsukachi's serious look broke into a saddened, sympathetic one as Akiyama fell silent. He put a hand on his shoulder and spoke, his voice gentle. You had no way of knowing you had that ability. And as soon as you did, you used it. You were the only one who helped Aoyagi in the end. You saved her life. You can't be blamed for not saving everyone. Not even All Might can do that. To the people who you've helped, you are their hero, each and every one of them. You have done nothing wrong. Akiyama's lip tightened. He rubbed his nose and sniffed. His eyes flicked over at Tsukachi, then dropped back down quickly. His voice was barely more than a whisper, shaking his head a little. It still feels like it, though. Tsukachi's soft expression only deepened, and he lifted the hand from Akiyama's shoulder to wrap it around both of them with a light squeeze. People will always be dying. No one can change that. Giving even some of them more time as you have done, despite how it makes you feel. That is a very kind and selfless thing to do. Their deaths are not your fault. Akiyama's lip wobbled, and he tried to hold it tight. He blinked rapidly and flicked his eyes up to keep the gathering liquid in while sniffing sharply. His chest was hot and heavy as he focused on counting steady breaths. Tsukachi didn't miss any of it, giving the teen's shoulders another gentle squeeze. It's okay to cry. You've been carrying this around all by yourself. You're strong, and now it's okay to let it go. The calm he'd been fighting for failed. Akiyama's tightened lips split apart as the tears spilled down his cheeks. The control he had over his lungs held for slightly longer. Then it too succumbed to a sharp inhale and the first quiet sob. Tsukachi maintained a silent vigil, staying as he was with his arm around the teen's shoulders, right where he needed to be. He watched their reflections in the water below them, listening to Akiyama and feeling the jerk of each sharp inhale beneath his arm. Patiently, he said nothing nor moved as eventually the quiet sobs he heard faded away and the sharp inhales he felt became less frequent. He watched the teen's reflection wipe his eyes and heard him sniff, collecting himself. Things became quiet. Akiyama had leaned into him slightly as he wept, and Tsukachi felt it immediately as he pulled back again slightly to straighten himself. He looked back over at Akiyama with a kind smile and dropped his arm from Akiyama's shoulder to his back. Akiyama glanced at him, then away again to wipe his eyes once more. Then he turned his head with his gaze aiming for the tracks behind them. His lips turned up slightly with the ghost of a timid smile. I'd like that cola now. Tsukachi chuckled softly, dropping his hand away Akiyama's back. Yeah, go ahead. Akiyama pulled away from the railing and Tsukachi turned to watch him. The officer rested his back against the railing. And for a moment, the weary, morose look he'd kept at bay settled on his face as he watched the back of the teen. He pushed away from the railing and tucked the look away as Akiyama faced him to sit back down on the tracks. Tsukachi walked over as the teen opened the cola and drank deeply. He sat down beside Akiyama while he lowered the can and paused, staring down at the logo, then set it aside and reached for the black licorice. The bag crinkled as he opened it and took out one of the short, bite-sized pieces of candy. He chewed slowly for a few seconds with his eyes set absently on a fixed point on the ground. He silently offered the bag to Tsukachi with his eyes staying pinned where they were. Observing the silent, thoughtful look of the teen, Tsukachi's intuition told him to remain silent as he took a piece and started chewing. Akiyama pulled the bag back and his eyes settled on it with the same lost in thought look. He swallowed his piece but remained silently staring. Tsukachi had finished his own piece by the time the teen broke the silence, watching him expectantly. I have nightmares about people dying. Tsukachi's eyes sharpened on him. Akiyama remained motionless with his eyes on the bag in his hands. It's not a part of my quirk, exactly. It's more just seeing stuff, remembering it. Then I dream about it later. Most people die pretty peacefully. They just get old, die in their sleep, whatever. There's just this darkness I see at the end, because their eyes are closed. I don't mind those ones, but I look for the not-so-nice ones, the ones who die young. Some of those are peaceful, too, like getting sick, dying in a hospital bed. It's not a very violent end, but a lot of them aren't like that. Car accidents, when they don't die right away. Fires, when they burn to death. Slow deaths. He fell silent for a moment, then said with his voice a ghost, "Murder." Tsukachi's eyes widened. Akiyama shifted a little in his seat, his tongue rolling around the inside of his cheek. I see how someone dies in the first person. Once the vision starts, I can't look away. I have to see it all the way through to the end. So, I see the knife coming for me. I don't feel pain, but there's a mortality sensation. I know when it hits me. I know it's going to kill me. Not really me, you know, but in the vision, it feels like it's almost me. When it's done, those thoughts kind of linger with me. I've died a lot is how it feels. Akiyama fell silent again. His tongue rolled again with his lips shifting to the side. Then he took out another piece of licorice and popped it in his mouth. He chewed slowly for a while. It's kind of comforting, I don't know, having something to chew after all that. Kind of to forget about, you know, with the taste. I don't know. That probably sounds stupid. Tsukachi shook his head reassuringly. Not at all. I'd certainly not criticize you for your choice in comfort food. Akiyama's lip pulled back slightly. Silently, he offered Tsukachi the bag again. The officer accepted, his eyes on Akiyama as he brought another piece to his mouth. How much do you see? I mean, information-wise, not the how graphically. Oh, I see all the graphics, Akiyama replied blandly. Some people have bad eyesight, though, you know. I actually see worse with them. It's through their eyes, right? First person. I see everything relevant to the death. Hospital visits, sickness, then the darkness right at the end. The attacker if it's a murder, maybe them coming in the room. The wave was coming, but I couldn't get away. Water filling the building, rising, face pressed to the ceiling for the last bit of air, panicking. Lungs bursting, then giving way, water filling them up, choking, drowning. Then tingles, can't struggle anymore, everything is dark now. And that's how it ends. Tsukachi's jaw had stopped chewing. He stared at Akiyama with a startled look. Akiyama didn't look back, but he seemed to sense it as he continued with a lighter, non-theatrical tone. It varies, kind of, I guess I'm trying to say. Some are a lot worse, more graphic than others. Sometimes it's really obvious, but other times, I just know they get sick from seeing the hospital. Couldn't tell you with what, though. I can't hear or tell anything else about it, so it's just what I see there. Tsukachi slowly started chewing again. How many people do you usually look at? It depends. Who's walking by? I only bother if they die younger than they should. I mean, you're gonna be 80 when you go. That's a nice life. There's someone who's going to die at half that age who needs my eyes way more. Maybe 20 some days, 40 others, something like that. I can't really stand more than that. It's mentally draining. Akiyama paused, his brow furrowing a bit. It was different, though, for the earthquake. I did a couple hundred over the weekend. 100, Tsukachi repeated. Akiyama nodded, his eyes looking focused. I spent every minute I could looking at people. I felt so sick when I got back. I ended up skipping and just slept for a couple of days. Wasn't the best sleep I ever had. Tsukachi looked concerned. And you never told your mother what you were doing. Shisui frowned. I didn't want to tell her anything. I'm not saying why, either, okay. I don't want to talk with her about my quirk. He looked to the side. You're going to tell her though, aren't you? Tsukachi considered that for a few moments. Well, you can't keep it to yourself at this point. But, perhaps. No, maybe I'll leave it for you to say. Or, if you want me there with you, I'll let you decide. But know that your mother is worried about you. When you ran, she blamed herself. You don't have to tell me why things are like that between you, but I think you should consider talking with her. She's worried about you. Akiyama pushed his lip out with a look that was not altogether convinced. Tsukachi spoke lightly. It's something to think about, at least. Akiyama did for a few seconds, then looked over at Tsukachi nervously. What happens now? What happens to me? Tsukachi looked out over the bridge, his eyes thoughtful. Well, I'm going to take you back home. That's not up for debate, sorry. After that, I'm going to report to the Commissioner General. He wants to know who you are. Be prepared to meet him. There will be questions from him, and likely others with him. Mostly about your quirk and the earthquake. As for what comes after that, I'm not sure. It depends on what they want to do, and what they offer you. Tsukachi looked back at the teen with an encouraging smile. I'm sure that's not very reassuring, but just remember, as far as the commissioner is concerned, and many others with him, you are a national hero. Don't doubt your worth. Akiyama thought about that for a long time with a worried crease in his brow and took a slow sip of cola. Can you be there when I talk with them? I think I'd feel a little better. Sukachi looked pleased with that and nodded. Of course, I'll make sure it can be arranged. The worried crease disappeared at that, and Akiyama took another long sip before grabbing another piece of candy. Sukachi let him chew in amicable silence. When he finished the piece, Sukachi smiled and put a hand lightly on his shoulder. Are you ready to go? Akiyama thought about it for a few seconds, looking at the ground, then gave a deep shuddering sigh. As I'll ever be. Sukachi stood up while Akiyama grabbed the licorice and cola, then followed suit. He walked back over to the spot where he'd initially abandoned his backpack. He stuffed the bag of licorice into it and swung it onto his back, then looked down at the can in his hand with a little swish. There wasn't much left. He tipped back his head and finished it off, then slipped the empty can into the bottle holder on his back. He rejoined Sukachi, and together they walked down to the end of the bridge where Hound Dog and Eraserhead had settled, with the former leaning back against the railing and the latter sitting on it with a deep slouch. The heroes watched them approach with keen, focused looks on the teen. Sukachi smiled at them. Thanks for waiting. We've got things figured out. I'll take him home now. You're both free to go now. Glad things worked out. Hound nodded at Sukachi, then looked back at the teen. He could smell the chemistry of emotions on him, but decided not to comment on it. Great. Later, then, Eraser replied blandly as he slipped down from the railing. Sukachi looked at him with a sheepish smile. One thing, before you go, if you don't mind. Eraser stopped and looked at him questioningly. Sukachi pointed down at the side of the bridge where he had come up. A hand down would be appreciated. Eraser looked at the railing. A ghost of humor crossed his lips. Young enough for just one fence a night. Sukachi looked slightly embarrassed and exasperated. Sure, something like that. It was the lack of sleep and convenience. Food, really. Mostly the food. Eraser unwound a coil of cloth and looped it tight around the railing, leaving a curtain of fabric hanging down for the officer to use. Sukachi crouched through the bars and carefully climbed his way down using the fabric's it. He reached the ground and straightened his coat, looking up with a smile. Thanks, HM. Eraser looked at Akiyama, who stood close by the railing watching Sukachi's descent. He lifted a hand to gesture at the tied fabric in invitation. You can. Before he could finish his sentence or the gesture, Akiyama pulled a quick step away from him, shooting him in the fabric a distrustful look. Eraser stopped speaking and retracted the hand to the back of his neck instead, watching Akiyama slip slick as a whip through the railing. The teen scampered down the fence and jumped down lightly with the ease of repetition. Eraser observed this and unwound his cloth from the railing, returning it to his neck without further comment, though mentally gave a shrug as he watched the officer and teen start heading back up the riverbank for the police car parked out of sight. Hound Dog stepped beside him and stopped, and Eraser's eyes flicked over. I know you don't need help getting down, Hound. Hound wasn't looking back at him, though, his eyes set on Akiyama with a frown. He spoke quietly. Hey, you heard him too, right? When he was shouting, said he made that call. Eraser, do you think that was? There's no way the earthquake caller is just some kid, right? Eraser's eyelids lifted slightly in surprise, then dropped back down as he looked to the teen as well with an unreadable expression. It would have been harder not to hear the kid shouting on the bridge with no other sounds around. And certainly, the content had been suggestive of a certain conclusion. But whatever words had followed that sudden outburst were lost to the private distance for the officer and teen alone to know. And that was the real point to take home here. I can't truthfully say that's impossible, logically, improbable, but possible. Eraser looked away from the teen and started walking down the bridge with an air of finality. In any case, I'd say it's no longer any of our business. Hound watched him go with an exasperated look. Grrr. That apathetic attitude doesn't come so easy to some of us, you know. This is hurting my heart. Eraser didn't even look back. Perhaps you should go see a doctor. Hey, when we get there, can you tell her? Sukachi's eyes flicked up to the rearview mirror. Akiyama had his face turned towards the window of the police car, watching increasingly familiar streets pass by with an ever-increasing sinking of his stomach. The part where I'm the caller, I mean. You can leave out the part out where I almost jumped off a bridge. Akiyama thought for a pause, then added, twice. Sukachi's eyes shifted back to the road and he considered the question. I can promise you that I'll tell her the necessary information. But if she asks for more than that, I'll leave it for you to reply. The teen didn't look surprised by that answer, mumbling, yeah, guess I can't expect you to lie. Sukachi frowned in the rearview mirror. Will you lie to your mother? Akiyama shifted his legs and crossed his arms. Well, maybe a half-truth, more like. Depends on what she asks. Sukachi's eyes lingered on him. Let me suggest from experience, that often doesn't work out. Akiyama grunted but gave no further reply. The car fell silent save for the road noise, with the officer's eyes flicking periodically to the teen in the mirror. You said you didn't want to talk about your mother, so it's fine if you don't reply. I do want to understand, though. Is there anything you're willing to tell me? Akiyama remained silent and still, keeping his eyes pinned on the window. He then sighed through his nose and shifted again in his seat, bringing his arm up to rest behind his head with fingers in his hair. He didn't speak or move again. And eventually, Tsukachi's eyes stopped flicking to him in the mirror, giving up on a response. The apartment was in sight when the silence was suddenly broken. I blame her. Tsukachi looked back in the mirror at the softly spoken words. Akiyama still hadn't moved, his eyes looking at their glow reflected back at him. For why my dad's dead. Akiyama Akane and Officer Tamakawa sat across the table from each other in silence. What little tea remained had gone cold with the mother indisposed to heat more, and comforting reassurances from the feline man had long since dried up. When the officer's radio suddenly sparked to life, she jolted up a bit from her heavily folded arms. Tamakawa, I have Akiyama Shisui with me. We're headed back now. Relief sounded from her mouth at Tsukachi's statement, and Tamakawa responded, Great, we'll see you soon. He lowered the radio and gave her a calming feline grin. You can rest easier now, Akiyama-san. She sighed, slumping her stiff shoulders. A bit, you're right. Until he gets here, then the worrying can begin again. She fidgeted with her cup for a moment, then stood up suddenly. Do you want more tea? I'm making more tea. Oh, unsure. She took his cup before he could finish reaching for it and moved to the kitchen. As soon as she had the water heating, she switched to pacing about the room, looking distantly at the front window. The blinds were drawn on account of it being at night, but she opened them anyway, then continued to pace, paying the window many glances. Tamakawa watched her a little but felt a bit at a loss for words now, with any more attempts to comfort her seeming excessive. Rather than continuing to stare at her, he traced the details of the family shrine across from him for the umpteenth time instead, it being the most detailed object in the room. Aside from her briefly returning to the table to give him more tea and carrying her own about, neither's behavior changed over each prolonged second ticking by. That's them. Her words broke the silence, sounding alert and stiff. He glanced up, seeing her eyes fixed on the shadowed body of the police car pulling into the parking lot. She hurriedly put her cup on the edge of the table, then hovered by the entry hallway with her arms crossed. Tamakawa's ears pricked up at the doorknob turning. Then the door opened. Shisui, Akane rushed forward as soon as her son stepped into view. Why on earth did you run off like that? What's going on? He froze, still just half in the house, but though the look on his face really suggested he'd rather flee again, the weight of Tsukachi's hand on his shoulder with the man peeking a look past his head reminded him how futile that action would be. He slowly finished opening the door, eyeing his mom's swift steps warily. Hey, Mom. Hello, Akiyama-san. Tsukachi backed him up with a smile. We have a lot to explain, if you'd please take a seat at the table. She glanced at him stiffly, looking resistant to the idea of taking instructions in her own home. But her gratefulness to the man for bringing her own wayward progeny home just barely won. Her quick feet stopped, and she studied Shisui tentatively slipping out of his shoes for a moment before giving the officer a sharp nod. Fine. She didn't leave the hallway, though, not until both of them were shoeless, the door behind them closed, and they were ready to walk back into the room with her. She returned to the table and thought to resume her seat across from Tamakawa, but disliked the idea of not having her eyes on both of them at once. She sat on the cushion beside him and pulled her cup in front of her with both hands wrapping around it, her eyes locked on her son. Shisui kept his eyes on the floor as he came into the room. His eyes flicked between the two available seats and he picked the spot across from Tamakawa without pause, feeling her eyes on him the whole time as he sat looking down at his arms crossed over his knees. Tsukachi sat across from Akane with his hands on his knees and glanced from son to mother before speaking. Now that we're back, the first thing I'd like to do is assure you that your son is unharmed. As to why he ran, Akane's eyes locked straight to his. That answer may have a few complicated reasons, but put simply, it was because he was afraid. Afraid of what? Her voice came quick. Do you remember why we came to speak with you originally? About our investigation into your son having saved a person's life? Tsukachi asked calmly. Yeah, I confess I wasn't telling you the full story then. Our investigation goes beyond a single individual. Your son has confirmed that he is the earthquake caller. What? She looked shocked, eyes darting back to the boy. Shisui. He flinched at a familiar parental tone that demanded an explanation. He didn't lift his head, but his eyes did shift in her direction. It's true, Mom. It took her a long pause to process that, thoughts whirring. How did you know the earthquake was? It was your quirk, it must have been. You saw it, didn't you? But that wouldn't. How then? It may be easier for me to explain, Tsukachi interjected, his tone quietly polite and pulling her eyes back to him. You are correct. It was your son's quirk that let him see the earthquake coming by observing how a number of people were going to die. He then contacted the police to warn us. We were able to take action and mediate a major crisis thanks directly to his actions. Please understand that we are not angry by his reluctance to come forward. First and foremost, we are incredibly grateful for his actions. Undoubtedly, his initiative saved many lives. He paused to give her a chance to say something, but she only stared back at him, thinking it over and still struggling to put it together, then looked at her son with her eyes softening. It continued, as to how exactly his quirk did this. I understand that it did not initially seem capable of changing the death he foresaw, as you believed, but recently, its ability seems to have matured to a greater extent, allowing him to interfere with the futures he sees. She didn't stop looking at her son, and her voice lost its sharp edge. You can save them now when you look at them. Is that really true? He didn't look up from his lap. Yeah, that was so unbelievable. It was like a miracle, something that they'd always dreamed for and given up on so long ago. His quirk had changed. She leaned forward on the table towards him. No bitterness in her eyes, only something verging on excitement for him. Shisui, how long have you been able to? When did this happen? Tsukachi remained silent, watching him and preparing to quickly adapt to whatever half-truth he came up with. Shisui was silent as usual, then stated a quiet monosyllable. Puberty. Tsukachi blinked. Oh, okay. That was not the direction he'd expected, yet miraculously believable, explaining both nothing and everything with one word. His mother didn't bat an eye. To think, at the same time he'd been growing faster than a weed and his voice had dropped into their non-existent basement, he'd been seeing so many deaths and stopping them. She remembered so many evenings he'd come home late, calls from the school about him skipping yet again, his night terrors at midnight and his headaches in the mornings. And all the time she'd scolded him, berated him, lost her temper and snapped at him, disciplined his silent, moody teenage rebellion. And all this time, he'd been saving people's lives. Alone, her eyes stung and she closed them, taking a moment to compose herself before opening them again. Her voice turned quiet and soft. Why didn't you tell me? His voice became a little louder and harder. You know why? She felt that burn into her chest. Her eyes flicked to the shrine behind them, then turned her head to the side away from it and Shisui without saying a word. The tension of the moment wasn't lost on Tsukachi or Tamikawa, with the latter paying the former a questioning look, hoping for some kind of insight. Tsukachi raised his eyes with his lips pursed and didn't say a word. Shisui hadn't given him more than a one-lined answer in the car, but that had been plenty to tell him to stay out of it for now. Akane recovered in the silence. Her eyes regained their sharpness, and she straightened her head. She glanced briefly at Shisui, then fixed a scrutinizing gaze on Tsukachi. So you have your answer, your earthquake caller. Now what do you want with my son? Tsukachi heard the testy edge in her voice and treaded carefully lest he earn her ire. I think the question burning in people's minds the most right now is wanting to know who the caller is. Just having an answer is enough satisfaction for most people. For many, he's a national hero. I know that the Commissioner General is especially grateful to him and will want to meet him. The Commissioner. She thought back. Right, that dour-looking fellow on TV. That would be him. Honestly, he looked no better in private, Tsukachi kept to himself. There are other individuals in positions of similar rank to his that would also likely want to meet your son. I can't speak for them, but I think they would like to talk with him about what he intends to do with his quirk in the future. His eyes shifted to Shisui. He has an interest in doing good for people, and his quirk has significant potential in that aim. What they want to discuss, and what he and you want, is something I don't have the answers to. She thought that over seriously, looking between him and Shisui, then nodded. Makes sense. All right, when? I don't know just yet. I'll have to inform them of this evening. When you know, I know, and I will be attending this meeting. We aren't making any promises about anything. Tell them that. Understood, ma'am. Is there anything you need from us tonight? No, I think. This has been a long night, and this information has been quite enough. He smiled kindly. Rather than overstay our welcome, I'd prefer to leave it that for now and get in touch with you at a later date. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Yes, quite a shocker, I agree. Thank you for bringing my son back. Her eyes flicked over to Tamikawa, and for the company. The two officers prepared to leave, and Akane accompanied them to the door. Shisui hovered in the hallway watching. His foot stepped forward but hesitating to come closer with his mother there as they put on their shoes. Tsukachi noticed, and smiled at his mother. Would you mind giving us a moment? His eyes flicked to Shisui, and she followed his gaze. She nodded and walked back into the main room. Shisui stepped up and followed them as they stepped outside. Tamikawa headed down for the police car, leaving the two alone outside the door. Shisui looked down at his socks, rubbing the ankle of one leg with the big toe of the other. He mumbled, "Thanks for the cola and stuff." "Anytime," Tsukachi replied, a hand disappearing into his coat. "And I mean that." Shisui glanced up at the business card and pen he withdrew. "The printed numbers are the official workplace ones," he said as he wrote something on the back of the card. "And this one, is my personal number. He handed out the card with the written number face up. I don't know what the road ahead of you looks like, but it might be rough to go it alone. Shisui looked at the card for a long pause, then slowly received it. Also, I don't know if your young friend ever received counseling, which I'd recommend, but if she is interested in talking to me from my involvement, she's welcome to those numbers. Shisui said nothing but gave a bow before turning back to the door. Back inside, he found his mother still standing and waiting for him. He ran his tongue along the inside of his dry mouth and stuffed the card into his pocket. Wordlessly, he returned to the table feeling a little bit nauseous from the flips his stomach was doing. Sukachi had done a fine job of holding her attention, but it was just the two of them now. He expected some irritated outpouring of questions, some combination of chiding words. The first words out of her mouth were not what he expected. Would you like some tea? No. He listened to her sit beside him, keeping his eyes on his hands. I'm sorry. I've been doing a pretty shitty job if you wouldn't even tell me you were doing a good thing. His lips only narrowed. Here I've just been scolding you every day. And you've been. I really look the fool now. I wasn't paying attention. God, it's embarrassing of me, as your mom. If he were here, he'd give me a scolding too, I'd bet. He turned his head just enough to see that she was seated facing him with her face aimed at the shrine behind them. He looked back at his lap, jaw clenching. I'm proud of you, of what you did. I never imagined that Caller would be my own kid. I know he'd be proud of you, too. You don't need to talk about him. She looked back at him. His voice was quiet but hard. He's not here. Her eyes fell to the floor. The silence felt oppressive, and her lips shifted. She looked back at him. Can I try to do a better job and listen to you as your mother? She waited, though he didn't answer for a long time. Do whatever you want. He stood up suddenly. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. He started to walk past her when she stood up quickly. He went stiff when her arms stopped him, hugging him from behind. She turned her head and lay her cheek flat against his back. He was so tall now, she would have to tilt her chin all the way back to touch his shoulder. Good night. He didn't say anything back, and slowly she let him go, watching him leave the room. She settled back down to the floor sitting in front of the shrine. She sighed then whispered to the pictures. I've let you both down, fuck, sorry. I'll try to fix this, Kikairu. Around the corner, Shisui went to his room. After he got ready, he laid back in his bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time. He felt exhausted, yet didn't feel like sleeping at all, not with all that had transpired and the uncertain future looming over him. Eventually, he rolled onto his side and forced his eyes to close. His dreams that night he would not remember, only that they would leave him restless. Sukachi Naomasa unlocked his door quietly, slipping inside and closing it gently behind him. He made delicate movements, carefully peeling off his jacket and hanging up his hat, then walking into the main space of the dark apartment. He paused as he got there, noticing the glow on the couch. Oh, you're still up. And you're just finally getting home. A pajama-clad Makoto looked up at him over her phone with a smirk. 10:03. He snorted and trudged over to the couch, losing all pretense of silence. You didn't have to wait up for me. I had to stay up and tell you I made dinner. You'll have to reheat it, though. He flopped onto the couch ungracefully and stretched all the way out, resting his legs over her thighs. That's what texting's for. She waved the air by her nose and scrutinized his day-old socks. Ew, your feet stink. Take these off. All he offered was a grunt, not a single muscle having the will to move. Her mouth scrunched, and she pinched her fingers together to gingerly pick at his sock. He jerked his foot back at the ticklish sensation and let out a loud breath. All right. She smirked in impish satisfaction as he pulled his feet up and took off the socks, right up until he tossed them into her lap. Hey, she pouted and flicked them aside onto the floor. I was here first, you know. He didn't say anything, though a faint smile betrayed his amusement. She rested her arms on his shins. So, how did it go? You know I can't talk about details, he murmured. Then just give me a summary. He didn't reply, and she pouted again. Come on, I don't need names. Just did you find them or not? Put my mind to rest. His eyes were already half closed. Rest sounded very nice. I know I didn't sound very serious about it before, but was it really a kid you were looking for? His eyelids lifted. He pictured Akiyama Shisui in his mind's eye and felt wearier for it. Yeah, was it really him? He thought about answering for a long while. Soon enough, the world was likely going to know anyway. He hoped they'd never know the full story, though. That sensitive boy needed better treatment than what the media would give him. It was him, yeah. He's probably got quite a road ahead of him. She didn't reply. Her smirk was gone as she watched him. He had a thoughtful look in his eyes that she knew meant he wasn't done yet. It was strange for him to think that as of tonight, the daily search for the caller was at an end. There had been so many people holding important positions breathing down his neck, wanting answers. The dim ceiling didn't have any answers for him as he stared at it, but it looked about as blank as he felt now. He had a troubling answer in Akiyama Shisui, and being the confidant of a young man who would undoubtedly soon find himself at the center of considerable attention made him uneasy. He closed his eyes and rested an arm over them to push the thoughts away for now. Maybe I don't have your way with people, but I think I did a good job. She smiled and gave his leg a pat. Without a word, she lifted his legs and stood up, laying them down gently on the couch. Briefly, she left the room, and when she returned it was with a pillow and blanket. The blanket she tucked around him with care. She lifted up his neck gently for the pillow. He settled his head down on it and she ruffled his hair. Good night, now. He smiled sleepily. Night, Makoto. The next morning, Shisui went to school. Yes, school. As surreal as it seemed to him to return to normality after such an evening. His mother hadn't left for work until she made a passable breakfast and saw him out the door in his school uniform, which was unusual for her. Breakfast conversation had consisted of awkward silence, and her farewell smile he met with a lukewarm grunt. Aoyagi came over to him the first chance she got once he entered the classroom. She shuffled her feet up close to him and leaned in with a hushed voice. Did anyone talk to you yesterday? Vague without context, he could have offered her dry sarcasm. I'll tell you at lunch, he gave her instead, and she nodded and returned to her desk. Lunchtime found them outside, sitting with their backs behind the school next to a tree well away from anyone else. He recounted the details of the evening before and his entire conversation with Tsukachi. He saw her stiffen at him mentioning her own involvement to Tsukachi. He isn't mad at you, he assured her. If you want to talk to him, he said, you can with this number. The business card came out, and she looked slightly more at ease. So he's not telling this to anyone. Shisui shrugged. I don't think he will. I think he's a good guy. I think he'll just say the important stuff they need to know. He finished his retelling. She asked her questions that didn't surprise him, and then they sat in heavy silence, both deeply lost in thought. What are you gonna do? He'd been thinking about it, of course, not that he'd gotten anywhere. I don't know. Tsukachi seemed to think I should accept whatever they offer. Let them help me use my quirk better. But that just sounds like a bunch of people are going to get in my business, telling me what to do all the time. I kind of think I'd rather just finish high school than worry about it. You aren't doing so great with your grades though, she pointed out. It'll be hard to get into colleges if you keep doing that. Are you just going to be a temp worker, then? At least it seems like they'll be letting you use your quirk a lot. That's what you want, right? I think they'll be telling me how to use it and having me do what they say. Probably saying stuff like focus on people who actually matter like politicians and in the government. You're always so pessimistic, Shisui-kun. I bet they'll have you see more earthquakes and stuff. Those happen all over the place. I bet you'll get to travel the world and see all the ways people die. But isn't that what you, well, not want, but have to do anyway to save them? I just think that at some point I'm going to be tired with it all, but that won't stop them. Lunch ended, and the rest of the school day proceeded as usual. It wasn't until the last class ended that his homeroom teacher set a note on his desk. Principal Kajima wanted to speak with you after class. Shisui's stomach nodded. Not again. The round-featured beaver man had on his usual buck-toothed smile as Shisui came into his office, though the student regarded it indifferently. Yesterday, 2 police officers came to speak with me about you, Officers Tsukachi and Tamakawa. Are you all right, Akiyama-san? He thought quickly, trying to judge how much information the officers would have told the principal about his situation from what Aoyagi had told him from her conversation with them. Tsukachi didn't seem the type of person to divulge more information than directly necessary, so Kajima probably didn't know for sure that he was the earthquake caller. I'm fine. The principal's warm brown eyes didn't leave him. I know you've never been inclined to speak with me about your troubles, but do you at least have someone that you do trust? Yeah, good. I won't ask for their name. Just, if you need to speak with someone and they aren't around, your well-being is my priority. He actually did like the principal, though he said so little to him. The guy was warm-natured all the way through. A bit too sweet. The soft voice he had, pity or sympathy, empathy, whatever it was, it just made him feel. He didn't know. Vulnerable, maybe, and he didn't like that feeling. It was Wednesday, and the rest of the school week passed without interest, until Friday evening, when his mother got home. Officer Tsukachi called me today. They'd like to meet tomorrow afternoon. Kind of short notice, that's a bit annoying. He nodded mutely and swallowed the bland curry she'd attempted making for dinner. Tomorrow. His stomach nodded further, and he didn't finish the meal. Tsukachi and Tamakawa came in their police car to pick up Shisui and his mother at noon on Saturday. Being advised that they were going to meet a number of important individuals, Akane had dressed for the occasion with a black skirt suit, white blouse, her hair in a complicated low bun with not a single strand out of place, and makeup that gave an edge to her burgundy eyes. They looked quite sharply at Shisui when she caught sight of the casual black attire he walked out of his room in. Oh no, go get on a suit, he grumbled and walked back into his room. She waited with stiff poise in the living room and he returned with the single suit he owned. Shisui, my God. Has this been buried in a drawer? It's all wrinkled. Whatever, Mom. I'm wearing it. Take it off. What? I need to get the iron. She hurried to the closet. That's completely unnecessary. Take it off. Fine. He walked back to his room and returned again in shorts and a t-shirt with the suit in hand. He stood silently and waiting as she set up the iron. I don't know why you're making such a big deal out of this. Appearances matter in business, Shisui. And I don't know what to expect from these people. But you've only got one chance for a first impression, so make it count. He didn't reply, pretending to be preoccupied with the potted plants staggered on the wall. Did we water the plants today? They're succulents, Shisui. They'll be fine. Now come here, give me your shirt. When the pair did descend the steps to meet the awaiting officers, Shisui was wearing a freshly ironed suit with all the buttons done and a black tie that she had finished after he fumbled it. She had started to fuss over his hair, too, muttering all about products and pulling it up out of his face, but he drew the line there, swatting her hand away and combing his bangs straight down to obscure his eyes like usual. They got into the back seat with the two officers offering them welcoming smiles. Hello, how are you two today? Tamakawa purred. Akane gave the handsome cat a genuine smile. Nervous, but I'm sure that's not surprising. Sukachi and I will be in the meeting with you, if that is any comfort. A bit, thank you. Shisui said nothing the whole ride and his mother didn't say much more, either. The car felt tense and alert. Mother and son both eyed the scenery outside the windows heading into the heart of the city. That's where we're headed. Tamakawa pointed out the building on their approach, and they both looked out the window. It was a tall skyscraper, like all the rest in this area. Stylistically, a massive motif of a diamond-shaped window spanning 4 floors distinguished it, the headquarters of the Heroes Public Safety Commission. Neither of them said a word. Akane tried not to chew through her lipstick for the rest of the ride, and Shisui stared at that diamond window without blinking until they went into the garage beneath the building. Sukachi parked and they followed the two officers to an elevator nicer than their living room. And with a passcode, they were zipping up well past 10 floors. The nauseating feeling didn't help Shisui's already unsettled stomach. The floor they arrived on was just as detailed and pristine as the elevator, as well as oppressively quiet. Sukachi led the way down the halls, passing many nice wooden doors that probably held equally nice and very secret rooms. He stopped them at a certain door, and the officers turned and looked at the two of them with Sukachi checking his watch. Do you two have any questions before we go in? Akane looked hesitantly at the door for a moment. Everyone's waiting for us, then? Yes, they should all be inside. They're a timely lot. How many of them, exactly? Not very many, he assured. She looked relieved by that information. All right. Well then, unless Shisui. They glanced at him, but he only shook his head. Their attention will be mostly on you, Sukachi commented. Answer their questions and speak honestly. They don't know much about you, so this meeting is somewhat an appraisal of who you are and your motivations. You aren't in trouble, so don't worry about that. Shisui nodded mutely, his eyes low on the door. Sukachi knocked, paused, then led them into the room. The two of them steeled themselves as they followed him in, but were surprised to find a nice but simple room with plants in the corners, fine art on one wall, large windows across from the door, and a table that had just 3 people waiting for them. It was surprising in a good way. The table was rectangular with the 3 individuals facing them and 4 chairs on their side. Sukachi took the far left, Shisui beside him, then Akane and Tamakawa. Shisui scanned the 3 individuals, taking in everything but their eyes. The man on his right stuck out to him as being a bit peculiar. He was definitely tall, though his leaning forward hid it a bit, with long fingers tented on the desk. His hair was green with a few yellow streaks and neatly combed. His suit was a light gray with a white shirt and an unfashionable red and white polka dot tie. From what Shisui could gather of his face, it was very solemn with an angular chin and rectangular, yellow-framed glasses. He lingered on his face, counting the numbers and thinking on them for a while before looking away. The only person who looked more stern was the graying man beside him, who Shisui recognized on the spot as the Commissioner General from on TV. His heavy eyebrows threatened to obscure his narrow eyes in such a severe look. Shisui couldn't tell if he was actually frowning or if he just had a very unfortunate resting. Not even a bitch face, just a pissed face. He looked ready to give a scolding at all times. It was the person to his left that he had to think about the hardest. She was an older woman, perhaps 60, with ash blonde hair slicked back. She wore a dark suit with a pearl necklace and a lavender shirt. There was a decorative, purple dahlia flower pin on her lapel. He searched her face for clues but didn't find much around her eyes. Just a distinct steadiness in her expression. Compared to the other two, she was difficult to read. That made him wonder about her the longest. With his position across from them, Shisui sat slightly between the woman and the commissioner. He saw the commissioner shift forward slightly, and Shisui dropped his eyes to the table. Thank you for coming here today. I'm sure you can recognize me, at least. I am the Commissioner General of the National Police Agency. His voice was deep, matching his stern brow and authority. He looked at the woman. This is the Madam President of the Heroes Public Safety Commission. and then the peculiar man and pro-hero, Sir Night-Eye. The commissioner paused, and his mother bowed slightly. I'm Akiyama Akane, and this is my son. She glanced at him. His head was already a bit low, but he bowed it some more. Akiyama Shisui. He spoke a bit louder and clearer than usual. Officer Tsukachi has already informed me of the conversations he's had with your family, the commissioner continued, looking at Akane. Today, we intend to discuss the matter in greater detail. The matter? Shisui's sweating fingers curled into his pant legs. Why not just say him? As if reading his thoughts, the commissioner turned his gaze. Akiyama Shisui. His fingers tightened stiffly. You are the earthquake caller. This is correct. Yes, sir. He didn't look up from the table. We would like to begin by discussing the details of that incident. Can you describe your actions for us? Okay. He thought for a moment. Where do you want me to start? When did you first know there would be an earthquake? Sir Night-Eye asked the question, his eyes pinned on the teenager. It was about a week before I contacted the police. Night-Eye's head tilted slightly. You waited that long. It's not that I waited, exactly. I was trying to figure out more about it. First, describe every step that you took. Okay, Shisui thought back, putting the timeline together and clearing his throat. I was outside the Sea Life Park in Edogawa when I saw a woman who was going to die soon, with my quirk. So I checked to see how, and I realized there would be an earthquake then. I didn't know how bad it would be, though, and I thought about a tsunami happening, too. So I waited until the weekend. And then I headed to the coast to look for more people who were going to die at around the same time as that first woman did. I just worked my way up the coast from there until I ran out of money for the train in Iwaki, so that's as far as I got. That was when I got the disposable phone and called the police with the information. He left out the part where he got the money for the disposable phone from Aoyagi. A rather random sampling process. Night-Eye continued with the comments, seeming to take control of the conversation from the commissioner through an unspoken agreement, his fingers twiddling amongst themselves as he thought with the same solemn frown. Explain your thought process. What locations did you pick and why? The East Coast. The fault line's out that way, so I figured if there was going to be an earthquake it would be there, and if there was a tsunami, that's where it would hit. I just started in Chiba because it was closest. I went to the small towns right on the water, the ones that get hit the worst. I looked up some places that have been hit hard in tsunamis before. Why go up the coast, not down? Because of the timing of the deaths. I noticed they were getting earlier the more north I went, with the tsunami hitting. Did you record this data? Yeah, on my phone. The man's expectant silence bid him permission to reach into his pocket. He took out the device and took a few moments to open the file. It's nothing fancy, just a spreadsheet. He set it on the table and slid to Night-Eye. The pro stopped the phone with a lengthy index finger and looked down at it, observing the screen. One column documented the location and a second contained a string of numbers. The document was organized by location, north to south. He scrolled down the list with flicks of a pointed finger, then his gaze flicked up to Shisui. What do these long number strings represent? That's what I see with my quirk. Year, month, day, hour, minute, second. Night-Eye thought for a few moments, his finger tapping the desk beside the phone. This is how long a person has left. The time of death, actually. His finger stopped tapping, and he was still for a moment. The exact moment. His fingers folded again, looking down at the phone then back up at Shisui. There are over 300 individuals here. How long did this process of yours last? I skipped school on Friday and came back on Sunday night. Akane stirred, her eyes widening as if with a revelation. Is that where you were that one weekend? She'd been ready to tan his hide when he came back, and probably would have if he hadn't been so sick with food poisoning that he couldn't get out of bed. In reality, the backlash of his quirk. 300 deaths. Shisui flinched a little, glancing her way. Yeah, Mom. Night-Eye's eyes didn't stray from Shisui. You've been rather reluctant to share your death-defying feats with authority figures. Is that why you didn't give your name to the police? I didn't want the attention, and I was afraid that if you knew I was just a kid, you'd think it was a prank and not take it seriously. We were possibly inclined to believe the same from the anonymity of the call. It was your rather persistent attempts that persuaded us to take a closer look. I imagined that was intentional. Yeah, I figured if I called a bunch of you, at least one place would look into it. Night-Eye remained silent for a while, fingers ever rolling amongst themselves. His fingertips all tapped together and they paused their rhythm for a moment. Let's talk about your quirk. Describe how it works. His fingers resumed. If I look at your face, in my mind's eye, I see when you'll die. If I look you in the eyes, I'll see how you die. What sort of view? Third person, first person, and what exactly do you see? As an example, describe the first death that you witnessed when you realized there was an earthquake. Okay, I met her eyes, and then it's like the area around us went away, and I was somewhere else seeing that things were shaking around me. And then she was crushed beneath debris, and then it got dark and she died when she couldn't breathe. And that's when my sight ends. Approximately how much time before her death did you witness? Probably a couple of minutes. It didn't feel like that, though. Kind of. Sped up through it, if that makes sense. As though you're observing a great span of time within a single moment. But blink and the moment is gone. Shisui's face hadn't expressed much during the conversation. But he paused to look surprised at that. Yeah, that's exactly how it feels. It doesn't always feel like the same amount of time, though. People die in different ways. Sometimes the cause is really quick, but other times it's slower, like disease, and I get glimpses of it over a longer period of time. Were all of the people on this document going to die in that earthquake and tsunami? Yes. Night Eye considered that information for a moment, then continued on analytically as he pointed his index finger down at the screen. When are these people going to die now? I don't know. I'd have to see them again. Night Eye's brow furrowed. You mean to say that, when you interfere with a death, you can't see how it changes their fate right away? Shisui considered that for a moment, finding the hero surprisingly astute. Yeah, I guess I'd say that. Night Eye's wrist rolled around to point from the phone up to the boy with a scrutinizing gaze. Explain. Shisui was quiet for a long time, thinking. Night Eye and the rest of the room remained equally silent, watching him. He finally shifted in his seat, a focus set to his brow. It's kind of complicated. I'll try to explain. It's like there are two parts to it. If I only see when a person is going to die, nothing can change that timing. Even if I try to stop it, something will always happen to ensure it, because the how is unknown. But once I've also seen how a person is going to die, it's as though just knowing that information is enough to make the future uncertain. It's a vision of what will happen to a person if I take no action. But once I know it, I could change it. And my quirk can't read the uncertainty. It doesn't know if they're going to die at the original time, or if I'm going to change it so they live longer. So, from the moment I see how a person dies until the time when I saw them originally dying, there's this window, a period of time where my quirk gets scrambled. The numbers just keep shifting in my mind. And when I meet their eyes, I could see them die all kinds of ways. But once they've reached that original when, my quirk becomes certain of whether they survive past that point or not. And the person gets a new when and how. And then I can see it again. Shisui finished and waited. But not even Night Eye said anything in reply. Nervous, he added quietly. Sorry. Hope that makes sense. The look on some of their faces suggested that thinking about it was somewhat painful. However, Night Eye's eyes had widened sharply. Who? The hand pointed at Shisui pulled back to his face, curling with forefinger and thumb and an L covering his mouth in an intensely thoughtful expression. Fascinating. So, your quirk doesn't prevent someone's death. It just gives you the option of putting it off. Shisui's face gained an odd look, his eyes shifting a little towards Night Eye. Well, yeah, everybody dies, eventually. I can't change that. Just the when and the how. The look Night Eye had him pinned with didn't budge, his mind still worrying with the implications of such a quirk. So, tell me, then, could you keep doing that to these people? His hand on the table touched the phone. Put their deaths off again and again until they're ready to die of old age. I don't see why not. Night Eye gave another hum at that, his forefinger stroking down to his chin with eyes still intense and unblinking, fixated on the boy as he murmured quietly beneath his hand. When I look into the future, the clarity of my vision dooms those outcomes to be all but fated to occur. Certainty denies alternative possibilities. But your sight allows you to take the certainty of that final, guaranteed outcome, death, and adjust its circumstances, all of its possibilities, by throwing it into a state of uncertainty. A singular path split into many. If they were to interact, no, where would they even begin to converge? Would I see the moment of your first when and how, or the final interpretation? Would my sight change with each retelling of yours? Maybe. Would the events I see happen regardless, but their timing altered by you? Perhaps it could even be that my sight is rendered not so infallible, after all. Night Eye's voice drifted off into silent musing. But Shisui's eyes had widened and he had lifted his head without thinking to look at Night Eye directly as he spoke. Wait, are you saying you have a quirk like me? Night Eye's mind paused. The intensity faded in his eyes, and the hand dropped away from his face, revealing a return of his somber expression, though softened. No, mine is a quirk not nearly so kind as yours. His hands clasped on the table, eyes lowering. My foresight sets the ill-fated future into stone. Shisui considered that in silence, and the rest of the table was likewise grim. Night Eye's face turned slightly, shifting his eyes to the commissioner and the Madam President with a subtle nod that they both reciprocated. Night Eye set his gaze squarely on Shisui again. Have you put any thought into what it is you will do with that quirk? Shisui hesitated, his head and eyes dropping with uncertainty. I'm already using it. I'll keep doing that. That's not quite what I meant. Night Eye lifted his head with his presence suddenly turning businesslike. Skipping school and living off your mother's resources to peddle your quirk to everyone in the streets may work now while you're still just a kid. But you'll find reality to be much harder when you grow up. That lack of an education and any meaningful skills to support yourself with will catch up to you. But there is a career in which doing just as you are is encouraged, becoming a pro hero. Have you considered that? Shisui looked stunned for a moment, then defensive. No, that's ridiculous. I don't want to fight or meet people, and I don't want to be on the news at all. Not every pro has to follow conventional standards, Night Eye replied calmly. I, for one, don't fight very much and maintain a low public profile. It's not popular by any means, but it's possible to be an underground type. Yeah, because no one's ever going to pay attention to the earthquake caller, Shisui retorted dryly, his voice rising for the first time since entering the room. You are acknowledged by the world because of your actions, heroic actions. Adding a title to it only makes it official. As it is, everyone is already talking about you. You can embrace the situation on your own terms and make something of it in yourself, or retreat with nothing. Shisui's mind swirled with thoughts and emotions with Night Eye staring him down. But he couldn't speak, clenching his teeth. Be a pro hero? No way. It looked cool to a 5-year-old, but come on. People got hurt doing that. It was physically grueling. They had to put on a smile and meet the public. And it was all about selling yourself with the merchandise and the costumes. It wasn't him. But this guy sure thought so. How was he supposed to respond to this guy? Are you making my son an offer, Sir Night Eye? Sir's attention shifted to Akane's, finding her burgundy eyes sharp and critical to match his own yellow gaze. I am. Officer Tsukachi has already expressed that he has interest in helping people. As my intern, I can ensure a constructive environment in which he can best use his quirk. He will earn a small income for his work, and I will ensure his schoolwork is maintained to a sufficient standard. This arrangement is not one-sided. His responses in our conversation today have confirmed for me that his presence will be of use in my agency as well. And I think the life-saving capability of his quirk speaks for itself. And what are your credentials, exactly? Her voice was unconvinced. I've never even heard of you. I don't often entertain the public spotlight or flaunt my connections. But in this instance, I served as All Might's sidekick for a number of years. My duties were largely behind the scenes as the brain that kept his operation running and his desk from overflowing with paperwork. Not glamorous, but crucial and definitely not easy work. Nonetheless, I've been in charge of my own independent agency since parting ways with him. The cases we handle are typically of a more intellectual nature, such as investigating illegal substances, rather than combat-oriented, for which we would seek inter-agency aid. My quirk, foresight, enables me to see details in the future, which we use to form strategies where the best outcome can be achieved. If you desire to see my complete resume, that can be readily provided. Oh, I definitely do. Hold on. I haven't agreed to anything. Shisui found his voice, cutting between them loudly. That's right, you haven't. He looked over at his mom in surprise, finding her looking across the table at Night Eye. We haven't, and we won't be making any decisions here on the spot. There was a firm finality in her tone that he was used to having aimed at himself, but in this instance, Shisui was relieved to hear it. Night Eye seemed unruffled by her response. Of course, you are welcome to discuss this matter with your son before deciding. It is not an offer with a deadline, though a timely reply would be polite. And if the answer should be negative at this time, I would not be disinclined to a change of heart at a later date. His eyes flicked over to Shisui. You're not even in high school yet. You have a number of years before graduating to decide your course. Think on it wisely. Shisui stared back at him but didn't respond, unsure of what to do. Silence fell over the room for a few moments. The commissioner shifted forward with his hands folding flat on the table and took in a breath, his eyes on Shisui. Regardless of what you choose in the future, you have our deepest thanks for the actions you have already taken. His voice didn't sound so hardened as before, and Shisui looked back at him. He didn't look at the commissioner's eyes. But if he had, he would have found them less narrowed with his brows a bit higher. Many people owe their lives to you, and you've undoubtedly spared many others from injuries. Not only on their behalf do I thank you, but for my own. I put the fate of my career and reputation in your hands. And were it not for your early initiative, the preparations and response we made would not have been possible. The commissioner bowed his head low to the table, and both Shisui and Akane looked shocked by the honor. Shisui dipped his head a little, flustered. Why, you don't have to do that, sir. The edge of the commissioner's mouth pulled back and he lifted his head. It would be remiss of me to do otherwise. He sat in silent contemplation of the team, too shy to look up from his lap. Do you have a time frame in mind for their response to this offer? Tsukachi spoke then, his eyes on Night Eye. I think a week should be sufficient. Tsukachi nodded. Will it be necessary for them to return here with an answer? I can also pass the message along. A message would suffice for me. Night Eye flipped his hand back, gesturing to the room. It's not as though I could do anything here anyway, regardless of the answer. Akane listened to them and nodded. That's fair with me. Then I believe we've reached the end of our discussion. Barring any objects, the commissioner announced. I have a question. They looked at Shisui. He kept his eyes down. Is my name going to be made public? We have no intent of releasing the information at this time. The commissioner replied firmly. The media will be informed that the caller has been identified and contact established. But no more. It'd only be a hindrance, and there are some safety concerns with publicizing your identity as a minor and regarding your Quirk being an attractive target. Akane stiffened. Not from anyone in particular, the commissioner assured her. More of a general possibility. At any rate, it's a non-issue. He watched the teen's shoulders relax a little. Any more questions? None were raised. He inclined his head. Thank you for coming, both of you. The officers stood up, and the Akiyama pair followed. They had just pushed in their chairs when someone spoke. Young man. The voice was one Shisui hadn't heard before. A woman's, but not his mother's. He turned his head to the Madam President. He had begun to consider her presence as merely part of the background, as she hadn't said a single word. But he found her ever watching him with that same unreadable steadiness. As you reflect this week on your next course of action, I offer this advice: weigh your own personal desires against the greater good for society that you can achieve. Her voice was as level as her expression. She said nothing more as she continued to gaze at him. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded slightly as to not be rude. Thank you. They left the room and headed down the hall back to the elevator. Shisui's stomach felt significantly better on the way down compared to the way up. They got back into the car and headed out with Shisui watching the building shrinking as they went. He raised his voice quietly. That was kind of shorter than I thought it would be. They already had the details I gave them, and they aren't the kind of people to extend things longer than necessary, Tsukachi explained. I'm sure they had in mind exactly what they wanted to accomplish. They just needed to fill in a few gaps to confirm their decision. Shisui wondered about those gaps for a while, eyes on the distant diamond window. He didn't feel like he'd given them much about himself, and they hadn't asked either. He figured Tsukachi had probably given them all the pathos they needed. Sir Night-Eye had certainly been more focused on the technical explanations. He seemed like a very methodical guy. He asked for what he needed and spoke straight without any nonsense, and for that, he made a good impression on Shisui. But if there was anyone who made a strong impression, it was the next guy. He remembered the commissioner's bow and was struck again by the unexpected, humbling action from someone so high above him. He didn't need to know a single thing more about the guy to respect him. As for the Madam President, he had nothing. Well, next to nothing. Just those parting words of advice. Why had she even been there if she wasn't going to say anything at all? It made it look like she was holding back. And Shisui did that all too well himself to like it coming from someone else. At any rate, they seemed to have a good view of himself, so that was reassuring. He wondered about the wrinkles of his suit from the morning and grimaced at the thought of walking into that room with just his black everyday clothes. God, that would have been embarrassing. He tilted his head away from the window to look beside him. Hey, Mom. Thanks for making me wear the suit. By the time Shisui and Akane arrived home, there was already an email waiting for her from the Night-Eye agency containing his requested resume. Accompanying it were the 2 resumes of his sidekicks as well. His mother changed clothes and undid her hair, then sat down at the table to study them. Interested himself, Shisui changed and joined her at the table with the laptop between them. Shisui had to admit, Sir Night-Eye had an impressive career history. He'd been a pro for 2 decades, many years of which were spent in All Might's agency, and had his name on plenty of high-profile cases with other top heroes that he could recognize at a glance. Honestly, if someone wanted to be a pro, he was a solid choice as a mentor. What are you thinking? His mom spoke quietly, looking away from the laptop into him. He thought about what to say for a while, overloaded to the point of going blank. He's good at being a pro. She nodded. I wouldn't be opposed. It's quite an opportunity. Most people would never get a chance like this. True, most people would have to claw their way to the top in high school programs just for the chance to be seen by any worthwhile agents. But he wasn't most people. He was a special exception now with his actions and Quirk. He didn't think of himself as special. Maybe a bit smarter than average to go unfound for a month, but not by much. He didn't have some remarkable skill. No, the only thing he had was a talent for seeing soon-to-be dead people, and that was remarkable enough that they'd take the rest of his mediocre self. He didn't say anything to his mother, and she spoke again, turning her head back to the screen. I won't tell you what to do here, Shisui, but I will say that if you're serious about spending your time saving people, I think this may be the best option you have right now for doing that. This guy knows what he's doing. And if there's anything that you want to do or learn, I think he could help with that. If you tell him no, what do you want to do instead? I don't know. I have to think about it. He shifted, and she watched him get up. He went around the corner to his room without another word. He closed the door and stood there, looking at his room. There was his bed, a desk with his computer, a short bookshelf, and a dresser. Most of his clothes had hit the hamper, but there were a few socks that had missed. It was boring, and that described him perfectly. He went over to his desk chair and sat down to think, swiveling slightly and looking at the black screen. It was hard to imagine what he wanted to do with his life. Hell, not so long ago he'd been standing on a bridge with no intention of making it to 15 years old. Aoyagi and his quirk had really changed things. He didn't have anything he'd call a noteworthy talent, like art or writing, though maybe he found math easier than other subjects when he'd bothered to read the lessons. If he applied himself, he'd be good enough at school. The books on his shelf weren't anything he'd bought recently. Not enough to call reading a hobby, and were mostly manga anyway. If he had a hobby, it was probably gaming. He reached forward and turned the computer on as he thought. That had always been something that interested him, though earned more disapproval than praise. Remembering his mother scolding him for his screen time and saying he was on his way to being a hikikomori. But maybe he had more reason to like gaming than the average person. It didn't have the same worries that a face-to-face interaction did. People thought him strange for always looking down and often rude or antisocial. Eyes were the first thing that most people looked at in a conversation, the window to one's soul, and he hid his. There had been a number of times unknowing adults had told him to look up at them when they were talking, and he only made them annoyed when he seemed to deny their authority. If he ever felt inclined to make eye contact, that person should be worried for their future. Gaming took all that concern away. He could speak without worrying what he looked like. He could even look the game characters in the eyes all he wanted. Movies and TV shows held the same appeal. He could be more at ease through a screen, so why wouldn't he prefer it? He looked through files on his screen as he thought. Modding interested him, and he had a few small projects and ideas. He liked it. Coding and tinkering through computer files was pretty intuitive to him, and with the motivation of gaming behind it, he'd actually made an effort to learn it a little. Unlike anything else, programming wasn't a bad job. It paid well if you were good at it, and it could be done anywhere with a computer. Flexible, secure, sufficiently interesting. He could do that and still use his quirk with the rest of his time. Definitely, he could find something to do with it that he could spend his life on. It sounded like a pretty safe bet. In contrast to being a pro hero, he pulled up the latest on Hero News Online and scrolled through it, scanning headlines and article summaries. Plenty of combative incidents, of which he had zero interest or ability. He'd never been in a fight in his life. There were also rescues from burning buildings and car accidents. Like hell, he wanted to run into a fire or pull apart bent metal. With his quirk, he probably wouldn't be doing much of that, but still, he didn't feel like he had much of an emotional connection with the profession. One look at the publicity news side of it with all its celebrity hero sightings and gossip confirmed that. It looked downright dreadful to be in the spotlight like they were. It might have been the dream of nearly every little kid to be a pro hero at some point. And there was a time when even he went through that phase. But then people grew up. Most of them realized they weren't cut out for it by nature's design with subpar quirks. More still found it logical and safe to just admire their abilities and contributions from afar. Pro heroes carried the pressure of lives in their hands with everyone's eyes always watching them, just waiting for any excuse to criticize. And he couldn't even meet their eyes. It just didn't feel like him. Like they were asking him to decide his whole life's plan in just 1 week. What about a police officer? The suggestion came from Aoyagi the next day at lunch behind the school. Shisui paused in his chewing to consider it. It definitely didn't command the same spotlight as a pro hero. Often the police force was where all the pro hero rejects fell when they couldn't make the cut of stardom. But it was still viewed as a respectable career. Sometimes it could get physical, but the pro heroes took the brunt of it. Criminal investigation carried an appeal to it, a bit like working out a puzzle similar to programming. Forensic science could be intriguing, too. And certainly his quirk seemed perfectly suited. Forget murder investigations. They could have pre-murder surveillance, cutting off the criminals before they had a chance because they knew the death was coming. If the pros wanted his quirk, they could easily call him in to assist. Then at the end of the day, he could quietly slip back into the faceless ranks of the force. And Tsukachi was there. He put the cell phone number the officer had given him to good use. "Hi, Officer Tsukachi. This is Akiyama Shisui. I'm thinking about things and was wondering what would it be like if I wanted to join the police force." His reply came by the end of the school day. "Hi, Akiyama. It's a good idea. We could definitely make use of your quirk on investigations. You're too young right now, but teen police academies accept initiates 16-18 years old. It would be tough but give you a head start on joining the police force after you graduate. Is there a topic you're particularly interested in?" He thought for only a little while, then typed, "What do you do?" Had Shisui been there, he would have seen a smile on Tsukachi's face. "I'm a detective in the police force. I have the experience to be trusted with investigating complex and high-profile cases, such as yours was, though not every detective gets those. I started out as a normal police officer for a few years developing my skills and reputation before earning this position. It may be different with your particular circumstances in that you'd assist investigations sooner, though in a junior rank of course. There are a lot of things that make it a challenging and interesting career. I often work independently and for long hours. I have to know about human behavior, laws, and criminal processes. Writing reports is a big part of what I do, which has to be done accurately and promptly. Sometimes cases can be quite graphic or lengthy. I appear in court to give testimony at times. Some cases go cold, and that's tough. Other times I'm able to give a family closure, and that is highly rewarding. I know I'll never get bored with this job, but it can be tiring and difficult. It absolutely feels like meaningful work, though, and I wouldn't want to be doing anything else. Not bad. Thanks. Can you tell me more about? Shisui worried about being intrusive on the detective's time. But Tsukachi seemed patient in going back and forth the rest of the day. Becoming a pro hero was quickly falling down his list. Still, he felt uncertain enough to give it a fair chance, especially with his awareness of just how great an opportunity it was that Sir Night-Eye had presented him with. Hey Mom, can you forward me that email from Night-Eye's agency? Oh, sure. Not to look at the resumes again, as he sat down at his desk and opened it, but to reply. Hello, this is Akiyama Shisui. I was wondering if Sir Night-Eye could describe more of what I'd be doing as his intern. Thanks. He had a reply within the hour. The guy was prompt, he'd give him that. Or maybe they were having a slow day. Hi Akiyama, Night-Eye here. First we would establish your baseline capabilities and develop a plan to improve them from there. We would implement it alongside your other duties. These would include simple tasks around the office and accompanying us in fieldwork, though not participating for the time being. You lack even a provisional hero license, after all. We will make this time as productive as possible despite your legal limitations. By the time you are old enough to enroll in high school and qualify for the provisional hero license exam, you should be sufficiently capable to pass it. Your involvement in active hero cases will increase at that time. I do not foresee you excelling in a combative role, and thus we will focus your strengths toward this agency's strong suits, which are of an investigatory nature. We often work closely with the police and other agencies which fill in our lack of combative ability. Your quirk, of course, will be of particular usefulness in our style of agency, though I have yet to examine its exact limitations and capabilities. I have every confidence based on its previous performance of you being called on again to use it in a similar manner. This request may be from me or others outside my agency. I guarantee that we will use both our quirks to ensure the best possible outcomes for the greatest number of lives. If you want further details, just say the word. Sir Night-Eye. Shisui read the screen over again unblinkly. He was just as precise on paper as he was in person. It didn't actually sound so bad. No fighting, no rushing into burning buildings, just being paid as a glorified coffee runner, at least for a while. It didn't sound like Night-Eye was going to be missing any of the details or concerns he had. I guarantee that we will use both our quirks to ensure the best possible outcomes for the greatest number of lives. That sentence in particular struck a deep chord with him. Maybe being a pro hero didn't seem like it was for him in general. But if someone like Night-Eye was going to specifically oversee his training with such a strong intent to save people, well, that was exactly what he wanted to do, right? And maybe being a pro hero would offer more flexibility than he originally supposed. He could eventually be his own boss, or just stay a sidekick and leave the hard choices for Night-Eye to stress about. There were certain freedoms that came with a hero license that the police didn't have, such as an easier time working internationally. He'd thought about other people needing his quirks' help outside of Japan, just like Aoyagi had pointed out. But there is one problem with the offer. A big one. They were absolutely going to have to resolve it. Shisui thought about it for the rest of the day. Then right before bed he responded, Hey Sir Night-Eye, can I give you an answer in person? The answer came quicker than he could fall asleep. Yes. The rest of the week passed with a great deal of deliberation on Shisui's part that found him lost in thought throughout every school day. His mother, being exceptionally keen on tracking him this week, ensured that he didn't skip any days, not that he had felt particularly inclined to do so. There was some comfort to be had in bouncing ideas off of Aoyagi and letting his mind catch a break by focusing on school topics instead. He arranged with Sir Night-Eye to meet on Saturday at noon. This time, the hero invited him and his mother to his personal agency. The taxi they took dropped them off in front of a gray, 5-story building that had full-length rows of windows facing the street. He wondered dryly to himself if such excess in windows was so that Night-Eye could foresee the arrival of any visitors. The pair had made the effort to dress nicer than usual today, though not as nice as the meeting before. Shisui picked at the cuffs of his black button shirt and stared at the big white and yellow boots of the woman his mother greeted when they entered the lobby. Hi, you must be Akiyama Shisui. She sounded young and a little nervous, but chipper. Yeah. He lifted his eyes to look at her and got an eye full of way more blue midriff than he was expecting. Good grief, what was she wearing? Her shirt, if he could call it that, exposed as much underboob as could be legally allowed. How did it even stay on like that? Her pants also covered her hips as minimally as possible with dark leggings, white and yellow shorts that looked unzipped. Had she gone to the bathroom and forgot about it? Should he comment, or would that be embarrassing? Probably. He looked back down at her boots and mumbled hello. I'm Bubble Girl, a psychic here. I'll take you to Sir Night-Eye's office now. Shisui nodded and started to follow her boots as they turned. He saw his mother start walking in the corner of his eye and hesitated. Actually, They stopped and looked at him. Want to talk to him alone, if that's okay, Mom. She frowned, looked at Bubble Girl, then back at Shisui before giving a small nod. If that's what you want. He went on ahead with Bubble Girl to the elevator. He said nothing as they stood and she pressed the button, but she paid the boy many curious glances. He was halfway between herself and the men in the office in height. He was leaner than the other guys were, too, clearly not grown into his gangly limbs yet. With his black buttoned shirt, slacks, and shoes, he seemed to lean more to Centipter's fashion sense than Night-Eye's lightly colored suit. The floor seemed to be very interesting to him, for he looked at nothing else. She was quite interested in him, having gotten the gist of things from Sir's explanation. I've been a psychic with Sir for 2 years now. I've learned more from working with him than I ever expected, she started determinedly as the elevator rose. He's strict and has high standards. At first, I thought he was downright scary. But he actually really values a good sense of humor and loves it when people make him laugh. She continued with the same chipper tone. Really, Shisui had to admit, be funny was not his first response that came to mind when looking at the guy. The opposite, really. Bubble Girl looked put out for a moment at his lack of response as they stepped off the elevator and started down the hall. What makes you laugh, Akiyama-san? He didn't respond immediately. Honestly, he was really trying to focus on the impending conversation, not coming up with jokes to tell the guy. But he could tell she was just trying to lighten the mood and help him out a little, so he could appreciate it well enough. He thought for the length of the hallway, then muttered, Irony, She mused about it until they came to a door, then she stopped and turned to him. Well, this is Sir's office. He's already expecting you. Bubble Girl smiled at him, and though he didn't look up to see it, he could hear it in her voice. Don't be too nervous. Go on ahead. Shisui looked at the door for a long moment to put his thoughts into order for their presentation. He took in a deep breath, then pulled his hands out of his pockets, wiping them at the same time. He knocked tentatively on the door with one knuckle. Enter. Sir's voice came immediately. Shisui turned the handle and pulled his head and shoulders back a bit, hoping to gain some confidence from the action as he forged ahead. The first thing that he noticed was a cardboard cutout near the door. A step further into the office, and another moment's observation led him to realize it was an All Might cutout. Okay. He lifted his eyes up warily to scan the room. Oh dear. All Might was everywhere. He was every poster on every wall, from every era. He was every unboxed collector's edition action figure in the generous display case at the back of the room. He was even the title of every book on every shelf, all except for the man at the desk now across from him. Hello, Akiyama-san. Shisui pulled his attention to Sir Night-Eye and swallowed, feeling his heart racing. Up until this very moment, he'd had a very reasonable and serious impression of the man and been rather interested in the hero's offer. But now the whole room weirded him out to such a degree, it completely threw him for a loop. Like, sure, it was All Might, but he had worked for the guy who the heck idolized his old boss so much that he'd deck out his whole office in his merch and be his #1 otaku. Was this some kind of emotional hang-up? Bizarre. Hi. It came out weak and he cleared his throat. Hi, Sir Night-Eye. Take a seat. There was a chair waiting for him in front of the hero's desk. Silently, Shisui did as instructed, wiping his hands down his pants legs and resting them on his knees. He kept his eyes on Night-Eye's laced hands on the desk, watching his fingers slowly drum, and could see his face looming over them, pinning him with a stare. Silence seemed to stretch unbearably with each passing tick of the All Might clock on the wall. Well, what is your answer? Shisui licked the inside of his lip, finding it too dry all of a sudden. His mind was blank. The thoughtful response he'd been planning all week had scattered. There are a couple of ideas I have. I'm not sure which, yet, that I want to do, so no, at the moment. Night-Eye didn't say anything, and Shisui sweated. Everything was completely out of order, and he could feel his face heating up as he kept explaining quickly, trying to correct it. I need more time to try things, and I don't know if I want to be a pro hero. I was thinking about the police force, too, but that's not an option until I'm 16, so I don't want to pick this before that's even available. And it's still a ways off. This was just sounding worse the longer he kept going. His voice died and he didn't revive it, just watching Sir's hands and waiting. His fingers weren't moving anymore. I see. His tone wasn't judgmental, which was both surprising and a relief. Well, enjoy your youth. You still have time to decide. Don't let it go to waste. The offer remains open, as I said before, should you decide on this path. He watched Sir's fingers unlace, shifting towards a pile of files. Let me know in an email if you change your mind. You may go now. Finality rang clearly in his tone. Not angry, just neutral. The pro was already returning to his paperwork. It wasn't as underwhelming a reaction as Shisui expected. He thought that Night Eye would have asked for clarification of his reasoning like during the previous meeting. To the contrary, it seemed like the man didn't see the need to spend any extra time on him with the negative response. Maybe he even felt it was a waste to meet face to face instead of through a message like Tsukachi had offered. But on that point, it definitely wasn't a waste. Shisui licked his lips. I need to tell you something else, too. Very well. Night Eye's attention didn't lift from the document, long fingers delicately flicking through pages. When we met last time, I noticed with my quirk, you're going to die soon. Night Eye's fingers froze mid-flick. Shisui could feel his eyes shift back to him. Tick, 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 tick. His fingers moved again, shifting to an all-might pen and a notepad shaped like his pointy hair at the top with his costume colors around the edges. He turned them to face Shisui and pushed them across the desk. When Shisui wiped his hands again before leaning forward to hold the pen, he glanced up at Sir Night Eye's face and wrote out the numbers. Setting the pen down, he pushed the notepad back to him. Night Eye turned it and looked at the numbers. Tick, 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 tick. It will definitely not occur until this time. Yes, Shisui watched one long, pointed finger tap the notepad in time with the clock for a full 33 seconds. His finger came down, paused to fall out of time with the tick, then lifted. His hands refolded with an audible inhale and he shifted forward slightly, refixing his gaze on Shisui. I would like for you to reach out to me again when you begin preparing for high school exams. By then you will have had more time to explore your options. We will see if your mind has changed. Yes or no, I'll accept the offer of your quirk then. Shisui thought about it for a few moments then nodded. He could definitely do that for the sake of the pro's life. Is there anything else? No, you may go. And thank you. When Shisui exited the office, he found Bubble Girl waiting for him in the hall with her back leaning against the wall. Oh, that was quick. How did it go? There was a hopeful note in her voice that he felt he would quickly disappoint. I won't be an intern here. I want to think about it for longer. Oh, just as he thought, her tone dropped. It quickly picked back up, however. Got it. Well, let us know if you change your mind. We'd gladly have you here. Bubble Girl led him back to the elevator and he followed mutely. His mother was waiting in the lobby looking expectantly for their return. Back so soon, she commented as soon as he was in sight and stood up. That doesn't seem good. He hadn't told her what he'd wanted to do yet. It felt like Night Eye deserved to be the first to know. He started heading for the exit. Yeah, bye, Bubble Girl. Goodbye. Mother and son left the building with Shisui continuing to talk quietly. I want more time. I'll wait until high school exams to decide. Akane nodded. That's not a bad idea at all. She gained a bit of a glint in her eye as she nudged him with her arm. High school though, so you're going to start getting good enough grades? Yes. He hesitated, then grumbled something unintelligible under his breath. What was that? A little, yeah, I guess. As a police officer or a hero, it would matter. She patted his back. Good. Akane took out her phone to call for a lift. What do you want me to make for dinner? Shisui hesitated with a slight wrinkling of his nose. Could we order takeout? We could, but that's not what I asked. Onigiri. She slapped his back this time. I can make more than that. He decided against arguing the point further lest he rouse her rage. He would much prefer the usual dinners she brought home to whatever she called her own handiwork. But he could see that she was trying, however bland the attempt. It still made him feel stiff or something, but a tiny bit of him was receptive to the change. The future was still unclear in many ways, but in some others, he could say that it seemed like it was looking up. And just like that, life returned to normal as life could be. The weekend passed uneventfully. Shisui played video games and went out for a long walk. A few people he stopped along the way with a watchful gaze. Akane didn't insist on going with him, but she asked him about it when he got back. He told her in short words about it, and she listened to him. Monday came, and he went to school and ate lunch with Aoyagi. She seemed surprised he'd turned down Sir Night Eye's offer, but encouraged him to do better. Far behind on his homework, she even offered to help him catch up. Last year's grades were pretty much a bust with barely passing. But they were only 3 months into this one. Certainly he wouldn't be at the top of any subjects. But if they started catching up now, he would definitely be in a better place for high school. They spent their time after school walking to the old bridge to study and catch the eyes of a few people passing by. Akane made him swear to come home at least a little earlier than usual so that they could try and eat dinner together. Reluctantly, and on the promise that she would bring dinner home at least some nights, he agreed. They didn't converse exactly over the meals, just a few awkward comments. But it was progressing a little between them, trying to connect. Friday drew the school week to a close. Many of his classmates stayed to mingle in small clusters for a bit, but Shisui had other plans as he gathered his things. No way, yeah. Is this for real? Their voices rose up excitedly about something. But he ignored it, eyes already on Aoyagi as she walked between the desks over to his spot in the back. She decided they were going to catch him up on homework this weekend, starting now. There's no way it's really. The kanji are the same. She smiled at him, ready to go. Yeah, they headed together for the front of the classroom. The weather had been great all week, so they'd head back to the bridge to hang out and study in the grass beneath it along the riverbank. He set his hand on the door and started to slide it open. Hey, Akiyama-san, are you really the earthquake caller? He froze. Aoyagi behind him froze too, drawing in a sharp breath. They both looked back. What? His voice sounded faint. It's on the news. See. The phone screen was turned for him to see his own name and face looking back at him on an article headline with the words "Earthquake Caller Identify." But that's not actually true, right? I mean, come on. Shisui's face was white. Aoyagi took a step forward, speaking quickly where his voice failed him. That can't be right. But hey, isn't your quirk something just like this, Akiyama-san? Yeah. It says he sees how people die in the article. It is you. Shisui spun out of the room without answering. What the hell? Aoyagi dashed after him. Shisu, what the hell? He said it to her harshly under his breath, panic in his tone. His heart raced. His stomach felt like lead. His phone was out of his pocket and his eyes racing across headlines with his face. His name, his secret. Is my name going to be made public? We have no intent of releasing that information at this time. At this time, did you change your goddamn mind? Shisui-kun, slow down. Aoyagi was trotting to keep up with his long strides. She distracted him, but only just. I need to get home. Tsukachi. The name raced through his head, teeth clenching. No way. Did he know? The thought threatened to make his eyes sting, so he blinked it away. There seemed to be more students than usual loitering in the hallway near the school building's front door. Distracted, Shisui hurried past them without pausing to think why. He pushed through the front door of the school, but he got no farther than a single step outside. Oh, is that him? It is him. Akiyama Shisui. He looked up sharply, catching sight of far too many people who weren't students surrounding the door. He saw the mics in their hands labeled with various media logos and caught the flashes of cameras in his eyes before a large body stepped in front of him. All of you for the last time, back up. The voice was deep, loud, and fed up, matching the husky stature of Shisui's PE teacher. The media lulled for only a moment, but he took it to look back at the teen behind him, frozen on the spot. Akiyama. The boy jumped. Get back inside until we figure this out. Shisui nodded mutely and ducked back into the building to the dismay of the onlookers. Aoyagi looked at him wide-eyed, having seen everything past his shoulder. He stood with his back to the door, his chest rising fast and his usual pale complexion looking especially so. He stared at the floor looking like he was about to be sick. He didn't make any move, and she took hold of his sleeve. Hey, let's go to the principal. He said nothing, just following her numbly back the way they had come. They could hear whispers from the students around them who were catching on to the news, but Shisui kept his head down and Aoyagi straight ahead. They must have arrived at the office, because Shisui heard his voice. He looked up, listening to the loud tone. This is completely inappropriate. They need to get out of here, now. Even through the closed door, Principal Kajima was clearly audible. Aoyagi gave a quiet tap of her knuckle on the door. The principal's voice didn't pause as he continued his heated conversation, and she chewed on her lip. After debating for a moment, she tapped again, louder. Though uninterrupted, it sounded like his voice moved in the room, and she pulled her hand straight back to her side as it approached the door. It opened sharply, though only a partial degree, for him to look out with a perturbed look that demanded, "What?" As soon as he saw it was the two of them, the look quickly turned startled, then backtracked into a hurried smile, trying to reassure. He opened the door all the way, ushering them in. Kajima walked back around his desk and drew an abrupt conclusion to the heated phone call, setting it back down on the hook with a loud, dismissive clack. He paused to collect himself, then took in a breath and let it out with his shoulders relaxing. The natural charm of his round beaver cheeks came back to him as he wiped the anger away and looked up at the boy standing stiffly before him. Come, let's sit down, relax. He motioned with his hand towards the two sofas facing each other, and the two teens moved over wordlessly. Kajima turned on a hot water pot for tea on a short table behind the sofas, then took a seat across from them. He sat down looking between them both, then settled on Shisui. His voice proceeded gently. I was fairly certain before this of what your circumstances are. All this media buzz. It is true, then. Shisui didn't say anything, but after a long pause, he nodded. They won't be heckling you on this campus, that I will make sure of. Those paparazzi have got to have some boundaries. He briefly looked angry again. Then it subsided. We should call your mother. She would want to know what's going on. A few minutes earlier, Akiyama-san, H.M. Akane's attention was pulled from the inventory and list before her to the coworker that had walked up. Your son's on TV. Her eyes snapped wide. What? On the display TVs. They're on the news channel. She hurried back to the TVs before the words could be finished. Before she even stopped, she could already see her son's face on the screens. Headline, Earthquake Caller Identified. 15-year-old Akiyama Shisui confirmed as the anonymous caller. She stopped reading to take out her phone, rushing through pages to click on his name. Her eyes fixed back on the screen with an anxious furrow in her brow as she brought the phone to her ear, holding her breath until the ringing stopped with a voicemail recording request. She let out the breath tensely. Damn it, Shisui, give me a call back as soon as you get this, okay? Bye. She hung up the phone and scowled at the TV screen again. He's just getting out of school now. I bet his phone's still off in his bag. She looked back at Tanagawa, who looked on with uncertainty. Sorry, I need to go home right now. Family situation. Tanagawa-san, can you let everyone know? Of course. I is the news. True. The sharp look Tanagawa earned from Akane killed the curiosity. Never mind. See you later. Akane headed to the back of the store to get her things. Grabbing her purse, she pulled out a business card and raised the phone. Iorarararararara. Iorararararara. Iorararararara. Tsukachi finished typing a sentence of the report on his screen, then reached for the phone on his desk. Officer Tsukachi speaking. Ho. Any idea why the news is branding my son's face and name all over the place? Tsukachi was taken aback for a moment by the vitriol on the other end of the line, but recognized the voice. Akiyama-san. He quickly recovered as he processed her words, his face shifting. What are you talking about? I guess you don't know then, HM. Or you're lying your ass off. Turn on the damn TV or pull up a website. He shifted the phone between his ear and shoulder and quickly clicked away from the report to check as she said, You're saying your son's name is online. Which media outlets? He heard her scoff. Oh, just type it in. I'm sure you'll find it no problem. That sounded foreboding. He started typing Shisui's name and it autofilled in the search bar. His eyes widened when he saw the results. Earthquake caller. He stood up quickly and started scanning the room. Where is Shisui now? Tamakawa's ears gave a twitch at the urgency in his voice and looked up. Tsukachi locked eyes with him and motioned silently for him to get ready. I don't know, but he should be getting out of school right now. I'm about to call the school. All right, you're at work. Yeah, we'll meet you there and head out together. Make that call and try to figure out where he is. I don't know what the situation is exactly, but I'll find out and make sure you two can get home all right. As he talked, he raised his voice and gestured his arms, catching the attention of the officers in his unit. All right, I'll see you then, I guess. Right, bye for now, Akiyama-san. Tsukachi hung up, then swept his eyes around the room, commanding their full attention. Akiyama Shisui's identity as the earthquake caller has been leaked to the media. Find out what's going on. Update us on what you find. I'm not sure how things look right now. His eyes settled on a very surprised cat face. Tamakawa, with me. We're going to go get him and his mother. Right. They quickly gathered their jackets and were off. We should call your mother. She would want to know what's going on. Shisui nodded, mutely slipping off his bag. He reached into his zipper pocket and took out his phone. He paused when he saw the missed call and message from her. Oh, I didn't notice she called. He listened to the brief voice message. I think she might know what's going on. He hit the call button and brought it to his ear, tucking his lips as he waited. It only got past the first ring before she picked up. Shisui, where are you? Hi, Mom, I'm at the school. The news, I'm on it. They know they were at the school. I don't know how. I'll be there soon. Officer Tsukachi is coming. Just stay at the school for now, all right. Go to the office or talk to a teacher. And don't talk to any of those reporters no matter how much they bother you. Okay. I'm with Principal Kajima right now. And Nagi is here, too. Good. Call me if you have any problems. Okay. I'll see you soon. Okay. Thanks, Mom. He hung up and looked up a little at Aoyagi and Kajima, watching him expectantly. My mom is coming with a police officer soon, she said, just to wait for them. Kajima nodded deeply in approval. Good. I was trying to get the police down here anyway. He stood up again and stepped beside Shisui, giving his shoulder a gentle pat. Just sit tight. Tsukachi and Tamakawa went to the store where Akane worked and found her waiting for them outside. She got into the backseat, meeting Tsukachi's eyes in the rearview mirror with a tense glance. Is this some kind of sick joke your higher-ups have cooked up? HM. Got a snitch in your office. His eyes dropped from the mirror. I understand how this must look. Your people are the only ones that knew. The ice in her voice didn't escape either of the officers. Tamakawa looked at Tsukachi in the tense silence that followed. Tsukachi stared at the steering wheel, then lifted his eyes back to the mirror. If this was someone in my division, I assure you they'll be receiving disciplinary action when we find out who. If it was someone above my head, I don't know what they were thinking, Akiyama-san. That's really all I know. She maintained his gaze for a long moment, then rested back against the seat with her arms crossed. HM. It seemed like it would be the best he would get from her, so Tsukachi looked away and started driving. When they arrived at the school, they quickly took notice of the media vans and people loitering around outside. Tsukachi frowned at the sight. There's already so many of them. He glanced over at Tamakawa, who looked similarly alert. Tamakawa, I'll leave this crowd to you. I'll go in and get him. Akiyama-san, please stay here in the car. or else the media may be tempted. The two officers got out and advanced towards the building. 3 male teachers, one of them especially thickly built, had positioned themselves in front of the school to stare down the cameras and keep a path for the front door so students could exit freely. They had been barking at any reporter that tried to catch the students' attention for questions, and a sour stalemate had been drawn with no re-emergence of Shisui. At the sight of the approaching police, the teachers looked relieved. "At last you're here," the largest teacher called out to them. "Clear this rabble, please." Tamakawa took the lead then, turning to address the crowd with his arms spreading while Tsukachi went on ahead and slipped inside the building. He retraced his steps from his last visit to the principal's office and gave a clear knock. After a few seconds' wait, the door opened and Principal Kajima looked back at him in relief. Officer Tsukachi." He stepped back and invited the officer in. Tsukachi saw Shisui in his black middle school uniform and Aoyagi sitting down waiting with cups of tea tucked in their hand. "Hi, Akiyama-san." Shisui didn't respond, though he shifted his eyes up the officer's body a bit. Tsukachi saw a wary look in the teen's eyes, and the officer's expression turned worrisome. He approached him. "Your mother's outside in the car. I'll take you there and we'll get you both back home." "Okay." Shisui didn't move for a long pause. Then he gave a small nod before his eyes fell back to the floor. "Did you know this was going to happen?" Tsukachi crouched in front of him, meeting his face though carefully, not his eyes. "I know this looks bad on me and the police. I don't know how the information got leaked yet, but I did not betray your trust." Shisui didn't respond right away, thinking it over and reading the expression all around the officer's eyes. There were hardly any people that knew about this. He'd told Tsukachi everything, and there was a part of him right now that seethed. The commissioner had said they wouldn't tell the media, but look where he was now. Someone had to have told them. And even if Tsukachi was innocent on that particular point, everything had started with him when he'd hunted him down to the bridge. "This is all your fault." But he also remembered their conversation, and the personal character he'd judged in Tsukachi then, that he could trust him. Honestly, it was true to say that he barely knew the guy. It wasn't Tsukachi's job as a police officer to be his friend. The police could say all kinds of things to solve their cases and to get the confessions they needed. It could have all been to give him a false sense of security with a manipulating kindness. But Shisui couldn't convince himself of that. Tsukachi's presence gave off a sense of integrity and genuine interest. And right now, he really wanted to believe in that. Shisui glanced to his right. What if they bother Aoyagi? Tsukachi looked over at her, and she watched him nervously. "They might, especially if they know you two are close. Once we leave, their interest in sticking around the school will decrease. You should have an easy time leaving then, but have a teacher around just in case." He glanced at Kajima, who nodded in confirmation. "Yes, we'll definitely take care of it." Both of the teens seemed relieved, so Tsukachi stood up. "All right, we'll go then." Shisui set the tea down and stood up, sharing a glance with Aoyagi, who smiled at him. "Let me know how things go, okay?" "Yeah." Tsukachi excused them from Kajima's office and headed back to the door with Shisui walking slightly behind him. He looked at the teen frequently as they walked and scanned his eyes around, noting the looks some students were giving. He turned his head, speaking quietly. "Officer Tamakawa and some of your teachers are outside. When we get there, just stay at my side and keep your head down." They reached the front doors, and Tsukachi turned to him with a pause to confirm he was ready. Then the officer opened the door and stepped out with Shisui a step behind, sucking in a breath and holding it. The media frenzy he expected just outside on the steps wasn't there, surprising him. Casting his eyes out a bit further, he saw that Tamakawa with the teacher's help had forced them to back up past the entrance gateway of the school. It still didn't take them long to notice him, though. Akiyama Shisui. He dropped his eyes to the ground right in front of his feet and didn't lift them again. When they got close to the entrance, Tsukachi put an arm behind his shoulders and guided him with firm pressure straight through the gap in the crowd Tamakawa and the teachers created to the police car straight ahead. He saw way too many shoes and heard far too many voices sweeping over each other, indiscernibly saying his name and asking him questions. Tsukachi opened the rear door, and Shisui shot inside. He let out the breath he'd been holding, breathing fast as Tsukachi shut the door and the media's voices were muted. "Shisui." His mother slid over on the seat beside him and put her hand on his arm. "Are you all right?" "All right." He would have laughed if he could. Instead, his lips stayed sealed, his head giving the tiniest of shakes. Her arm wrapped around his with a gentle squeeze, and in a rare moment he was thankful for her company. It took the officers a bit of time to rejoin them from dealing with the crowd. Shisui didn't move, keeping his head down below the window and his eyes on his shoes. His mother slowly stroked his back. He heard the doors open, first Tamakawa's then Tsukachi's. "Sorry about the wait," Tsukachi apologized. "It's fine. They're a pain in the ass," Akane answered him, shooting a peeved look out the window. She pulled away from Shisui to buckle up, and he leaned back only briefly to do the same. Once the car was moving, he finally sat up a bit, looking out of the window and back at the school. "Are they just going to Follow me around now. Tsukachi sighed. I'm afraid that you are the hot topic of the day. Everyone's wanted to know who the earthquake caller is. They can't climb over each other fast enough to be the first to learn about you. I wouldn't expect this level of attention to die down for a little while, at least. It didn't surprise him, but it wasn't what he wanted to hear, either. Things were supposed to have been getting better. He wasn't certain about his future, but he had a plan. He was supposed to have time. Now what did he have? Overnight celebrity status, news cameras heckling him at school, paparazzi stalking him, his identity known to everyone in the nation. No doubt his classmates would start pestering him, and who knew what else was coming his way now. His eyes remained lost outside the window in the distance for the rest of the ride back to their apartment. When they neared the building, he pulled his eyes closer, scanning ahead. Seriously, there was a prominently marked media van on the street outside his apartment complex. He could see one person in the driver's seat, another in the passenger's side, and at least one other sitting where the rear van door was open, waiting for him. Clearly, they're here, too. They know our address already. Akane sounded affronted. They are unfortunately good at getting these kinds of details, Tamakawa explained sympathetically. Then, after a pause and in a lower tone, he mused at Tsukachi. Though, they seem to have organized themselves exceptionally quickly. Tsukachi didn't say anything but secretly agreed, noting the oddity. Well then tell them to screw off, she snapped. Legally, there's a limit to what we can do about them so long as their behavior is within specific boundaries, Tsukachi explained calmly. And they're well aware of what they can get away with, especially following pro-heroes around so much. So for that, I apologize, but I can't tell them to just beat it on a public street like the one they're currently parked on. She glared at the van's occupants as the police car passed them and turned into their apartment's parking lot. He continued, this property is privately owned though, I imagine. Get in touch with the manager and explain what's going on. The property owner can file for trespassing violations should they arise. He thought for a moment, then glanced over at Tsukachi as he parked. Remind me and we'll get them some info on the laws. Public versus private photography. That sort of thing. Tamakawa nodded and pulled out his phone to make a note for later. The specifics of the laws are complicated enough to deserve a headache. But in general, when the two of you are in public or on private property and can be readily seen from a public space, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy. She made a sound of disgust under her breath as the engine shut off and whipped her seatbelt off. Let's just get inside. We'll be parting ways with you here, Tsukachi said, looking back at them. But we will be in touch again. Call or text me with concerns. She nodded, still looking tensely out the window, but after a few moments she looked back at him with softer eyes. Thank you, Officer Tsukachi. You're welcome, ma'am. Akane scooted over to open the door on her side. Come on, Shisui, let's go. They got out of the car and closed them in a hurry, eyeing the van. Of course, the people in the media van noticed them as well, and all three of them got out of the vehicle. One man in particular trotted ahead of the others with a smile and a mic. Akiyama-san, no questions and screw off. Akane barked at him and pushed Shisui on ahead of her with a hand as they reached the stairs to the second floor of their complex. The man only hesitated briefly before trying again. If I made you screw off. Shisui didn't look back for any of it, fishing his house key out and unlocking the door as quickly as he could. He ducked inside and she followed him in with a final withering glare at the man and his van before slamming the door shut. Akane locked it, let out a huff, then turned around. Shisui was already out of his shoes and padding quietly down the hall. Hold on. He flinched, stopping mid-stride. He peered back at her with his head down. She realized her voice still had a hard edge to it. She paused to breathe for a moment and let her shoulders slump with a sigh. I just want to know how you're doing right now. He turned his head away and shuffled his feet a step further. I just want to be alone. Okay, go ahead. Her voice was soft now, and he went ahead to his room. He closed the door, dropped his school bag carelessly, and flopped back onto his bed with a long exhale at the same time. For a while, he stared at the ceiling, then he reached for the phone in his pocket. Did you get home okay? He texted Aoyagi and waited with the phone on his chest until she responded. Aoyagi, yeah, no one bothered me. How about you? Shisui, they were waiting for me at home. Aoyagi, I'm so sorry, this is all happening so fast. What are you going to do? Do you know? He looked at the screen for a long time then typed back with lead fingers. I have no idea. Grin and bear it, maybe. There was nothing else he could do. He eventually smelled food and heard Akane call his name. He wasn't hungry, but he ate the fried onigiri with tomatoes she made, anyway. That was one thing she could make well. He didn't want to talk, so they ate in silence and he returned to his room. He spent the rest of the evening on the computer reading his own news stories one after the next, seeing pictures of himself and even video. It wasn't a healthy thing to do perhaps, but he needed to know. They'd already posted the short clip of him coming out of the school with Tsukachi. He saw the protective look on the officer's face, and some of his anger towards him subsided. This wasn't what the officer had wanted, either. The talk shows were the worst, with people bouncing around theories and criticisms of him for not coming forward. They questioned his character, and his stomach sunk further and further into his chair. How could he even defend himself from this? They'd already formed their opinions of him, and they'd never even said a word to him. How did celebrities ever survive this kind of attention? He was ready to crawl into the cracks in the woodwork of his floor and never come out. Overwhelmed, he turned it all off and crawled into bed, relying on the covers to hide him until morning. Tsukachi and Tamakawa returned to the police station after dropping off the Akiyama family. They promptly regrouped with their team plus one extra addition. Makoto. Hi. Tsukachi relaxed a little to see her waiting for him at his desk. Yeah, got your text. How can I help? Now. She sat up in his chair with an earnest look. In just a minute, he looked around at the officers in the room, meeting everyone. The group of 6 officers plus Makoto filed into a private room and took their seats around a table with Tsukachi standing at the head of the room, Makoto seated beside him. All right, what have we found so far? The officers spoke up in turn, and Tsukachi listened intently and asked questions. He put it all together in silence when they were done, with a frown forming on his face behind his folded hands. How did that information get to the public? They hadn't found any security breach in their network after questioning it about it. Maybe there was a bug planted in the office. It seemed doubtful to him, but not impossible. The list of people who had knowledge of and access to Akiyama's information was short enough in this building that he could list them all by name. He didn't want to think of one particular possibility, but couldn't rule it out on good faith alone. There's something I need to know from all of you. He paused and looked at them seriously. Did any of you leak this information? They looked surprised. No, sir. A few immediate objections came. Tsukachi's eyes searched them and settled on one. Ada. The officer jumped. Did you forget and leave documents out on your desk again? His eyes widened. No, it wasn't me. Can you say that to her? Tsukachi pointed at his sister, who looked on with rapt attention. Something like relief flashed over Ada's face, then his expression leveled out. He stood and walked over to her, and she raised her hand expectantly. He took it without hesitating and looked Tsukachi in the eye and speaking firmly. I didn't leave anything out on my desk or tell anyone Akiyama Shisui's identity. Tsukachi glanced at her to confirm, then nodded at him. All right, back to your seat. His gaze passed over the room. Next, the rest of the officers in the room quietly came forward one by one, testing his question with Makoto's polygraph. When the whole room appeared honest, Tsukachi's hackles finally went down, crossing his arms on the table with a deep exhale. Well, sorry I had to doubt you all. Thanks for not letting me down. They looked understanding and relieved. He thought through more possibilities, looking at the desk with his brow furrowed. There's nothing obvious, but, with the evidence as it stands, could it have been? He checked the time on the wall. You guys were on this fast. As it stands, there's not much else for us to check, so let's call it for now. I have to make a phone call. He dismissed them, and when Makoto lingered, he looked at her. A private phone call. She looked a bit perturbed. Going to be another late night? Huh, we'll see. She sighed and got up, dragging her feet to the door. Is that all you needed me here for? Well, not to sound ungrateful, but yeah. Thanks. Let me know when you're going to be home. He waited until she had closed the door behind her, then dialed a number with a focused look in his eyes. Hello. Hi, this is Tsukachi. I'm sure you've seen the news about Akiyama Shisui by now. Yes, you have information. I do. We've ruled out any obvious source of leaked information. I can't help but wonder at another, though it may be improper to ask. I'm curious to hear your suspicions, Tsukachi. Speak freely. Tsukachi said a name, and there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Tsukachi, I want you to come to my office this Monday at 2:55 p.m. Feel free to invite yourself in. Yes, I'll be there. Good. Is that all? Yes, sir. They ended the call, and Tsukachi couldn't help but feel slightly uneasy. He leaned back in his chair, thinking about this impromptu meeting in Akiyama Shisui. He worried about the kid. He wasn't at all ready for the kind of attention he was about to receive. Did you hear? The earthquake caller has been found. Akiyama Shisui, some middle school kid. Seriously, Edagawa Junior High. He looks totally average, kind of edgy. Boy needs to trim his bangs. Why didn't he go to the police? Hey, cut him some slack. Kids do dumb things. This isn't just dumb things if he's got a quirk that can save lives. They got him now, though. Do you think the police force will recruit him? I bet the hero agencies will want him. Maybe All Might, yeah. He can point All Might where to go. He's too young to be a sidekick. Not that young, he's almost in high school. Kids going places. I'd be his fan. The Akiyama family remained quiet and secluded the whole weekend. The farthest either of them went to going outside was Akane peeking through closed blinds with a scowl. They both received numerous unknown number calls, and neither of them replied to any. Twice there was a knock at the door, and Akane peered suspiciously through the peephole. The first time she turned right back up the hall, shaking her head. The second time, she quickly opened the door and pulled in their delivered groceries with a nod at the delivery man and a squint at a vehicle parked out on the street. Beyond them, the world was abuzz with the news. Japan had acquired an overnight celebrity of such unique circumstances that every tabloid was jockeying for even the slightest new details. Shisui, despite scarcely leaving his room, was well aware of this fact. What kind of person is Akiyama like? He's always really quiet. He's not that great of a student and skips school a lot, to be honest. Shisui couldn't help but glare at his classmate, Akata, on the screen. Based on the background, it looked like the media that had been hovering around the school had gotten him. Are you good friends with him? Well, I wouldn't say that. He's hardly friends with anyone except Aoyagi. Damn him for saving her name. He knew from texting her that some people had started to catch on to their close relationship. It wasn't just his friends and classmates the media had sniffed out, either. He came up to me on the street and told me I was going to get hurt soon, and that I should look out for a certain man. He described him and I realized he meant my ex. The creep's been stalking me. Who knows what he would have done if Akiyama hadn't warned me. My grandma lives in a small coastal town. It was almost completely swept away in the tsunami. She would have been gone with many others if it weren't for the evaluation, if he hadn't told the police. I swear it was him. The same look, clothes, everything. He came up to me and said I should see a doctor because I would be sick soon. I almost had a heart attack, for real. Akiyama Shisui saved my life. It was kind of a weird thought given his anxiety about it all, but it seemed like most people were happy about him. I thought they'd be angry. There was some backlash over his reluctance to come forward, of course, and the criticism cut particularly deep for him. But it was wholly overshadowed by the outpouring of thankfulness and the anticipation of his answer to one looming question. What's next for Akiyama Shisui? If only he had that answer himself. This was one of his worst fears brought to life. The whole world was watching him under a microscope. He nearly had a panic attack just reading that the Prime Minister had voiced interest in meeting him on social media. He could barely mumble his way through a presentation in front of his classmates, and people wanted him to have a conversation with the political leader of a nation. No fucking way. He'd keel over mid-bow with a heart attack before they exchanged a single word. When Sunday night came, he spent half of it tossing and turning and the other half checking the time on his phone, desperately pleading for any sleep. His request went ignored, and he added dark bags under his eyes to his list of uninteresting and unattractive qualities. Akane made him breakfast and lunch and sat to eat the former with him, which surprised him given that she was usually gone for work by the time he got up. She surprised him further by going out the door with him to a waiting ride. You don't have to do this, Mom, he mumbled, carefully ignoring the existence of the vehicle on the street. I can walk to school just fine. You're right, but I'm going to. She glared at the vehicle and the one on the other side of the street, too. The first one she'd recognized the whole weekend. The other must be its competition. She hoped their camera lenses could capture her disgust with them. When you get off school today, go ahead and call a ride back home. I don't want them bothering you when you're out walking about. You want me to call a ride every day? Yes, Mom, that's going to get expensive. I don't care. Don't give them anything they want without you wanting to give it first. Got it. They piss me off coming after you. He didn't respond, and they ducked into the car she'd ordered for them. It drove to Shisui's school, and Akane gave him another short lecture at the sight of a media vehicle parked tactfully on the street off school grounds before he was able to leave. He power walked up to the building and didn't look up until he was seated safely at his desk. He saw his classmates turn to look at him, his seat being the last in the row. He usually loved his secluded corner seat, but now it just felt like a trap. Good morning, Akiyama-san. He glanced over at Masuda's greeting, reading the smile on her face. Good morning. She never greeted him. Normally, she was class vice president, though, so it probably wasn't good that she was already leading the class's focus on him. So, Akata spoke up with a nervous smile. I guess the news is right about you. Akiyama stared at him and let him sweat, then looked down at his desk. I don't know. You're the one who talked to the reporters. You tell me. Oh haha, sorry about that. He rubbed his neck and waited, but Akiyama didn't reply, so he continued hastily. They started asking me all these questions right after I left school. I wasn't sure what to do, but I didn't want to be impolite, either. It was none of their business. Akiyama shot back more forcefully than he ever usually spoke. Right. Akata turned forward in his seat and didn't look back. The others in the class seemed to get the hint. Silence prevailed for a while as they turned back around in their seats, and then quietly they spoke among themselves. Their normal state of ignoring his existence gradually returned, though sometimes a subtle casting of eyes his way would remind him that things weren't truly the same. Classes offered Shisui a reprieve until lunchtime. He and Aoyagi started to head to their usual spot to eat when they were stopped just outside the school door. Hey, you're Akiyama Shisui, right? He flicked his eyes up to the chin of the boy who had spoken, blocking his path. Shisui was a little bit taller than him, and definitely taller than the girl on his right. And who are you? he answered stiffly. Yuno Katashi, class president of 3D, the other boy replied, sounding friendly. He gestured to the girl beside him. This is Miura Saori. Nice to meet you, she bowed quickly. Shisui just gave a nod and looked back at Yuno. And, we heard about you from the news. Is it true that you can tell when people will die? Yuno continued. Do you have a point, or is this an interview? Sorry, we're not meaning to bother you like those reporters. Miura has a question for you but didn't want to ask alone, so she came to me. Her grandma is in the hospital right now, and she was wondering if you could come in. Well, see how much time she has left. Shisui's eyes widened, and Aoyagi looked at him sharply. He shifted his gaze over to Miura again in a less adversarial light now. She didn't look troublesome, just nervous, with her hands folded in front of her and her head still bowed slightly with short, dark brown hair framing her face. Dark eyes would dart up to look at him every now and then. Shisui swallowed, his thoughts racing. Don't give them anything they want without you wanting to give it first. Got it. He took in a breath. Okay. Miura's head lifted quickly, relief in her features as he quickly ducked his gaze before hers crossed it. Thank you so much. He nodded. When? I will. Sooner if you can, because, I mean. She couldn't quite say it, and he didn't make her, either. Right. Today then, after school. Oh, that's so soon. She bowed again. Thank you. Right. Just meet me outside my classroom, 3A. The two of them let him walk by, and he and Aoyagi continued on. You said yes really fast, Aoyagi pointed out as they sat down by the tree behind the school. He looked at the grass and murmured, how could someone even say no to a request like that? She thought about it and silently agreed that he wasn't that type of person at all. Monday afternoon, Tsukachi arrived at the police headquarters building. He went up to the correct floor and came to the office designated to him in the phone call. He checked his watch and waited for it to turn to 2:55 p.m., then squared his shoulders and knocked on the door and turned the handle. Tsukachi stepped in and scanned the room. The Commissioner General was there as he expected, but his eyes snapped in surprise to the President of the Heroes Public Safety Commission sitting across from him at the other side of the desk. She seemed to feel likewise of his sudden appearance, with her head turned around to look at him and her eyelids lifted slightly, though her usual unreadability quickly returned. Officer Tsukachi, what are you doing here? She asked. Pardon the interruption, Madam President. He inclined his head. I had some business to attend with the Commissioner. I was unaware you were here. He shifted his eyes to the man and found him looking as calm and stern as ever. Yes, it was on my request. You'll have to excuse me. I seem to have given him the wrong time. Tsukachi stepped back sheepishly. I could go outside and wait a few minutes, if you want. She didn't answer him, eyes flicking between the two of them. About what? Nothing worth taking up your time, the Commissioner assured. Very well. I suppose we may conclude a few minutes early, if there was nothing else. No, that covers everything. Then I will take my leave. She gathered some papers on the desk into a file and tucked it into a shoulder case. She stood up and turned to the door where Tsukachi stood to the side looking on awkwardly. As soon as her back was turned to him, the Commissioner motioned a hand, catching Tsukachi's eyes. He locked gazes with Tsukachi and nodded, then flicked his eyes to her and spoke. Now that I think about it. She stopped and turned partially to look at him. Officer Tsukachi has been looking into the media leak on Akiyama Shisui. Tsukachi. Her face remained remarkably unresponsive, but the slightest raising then narrowing of her eyelids as she looked at Tsukachi betrayed her surprise and suspicion. Tsukachi straightened a little, looking from the Commissioner to the Madam President quickly. Oh, I see now. Yes, we've concluded there was no security breach in our network, thankfully. None of the officers on this case were the source, either. We searched for any kind of bug planted in the office, but found nothing. We wondered if it was someone in another department, but there was no one obvious to begin with, so we turned our attention to the media outlets. Curiously, they all released the details on Akiyama Shisui at exactly the same time, just minutes before he'd be getting off from school. Likewise, the reporting crews were already in position outside the school. This seemed extraordinarily odd to us for how coordinated it was, especially among rival outlets, but upon closer examination, all of them are actually owned by the same conglomerate. Her face didn't betray a thing as she listened to his report, and when he paused for a moment, she interjected immediately. And your conclusion, officer? His jaw shifted as he thought for a moment on her terse tone, meeting her eyes steadily. Well, there were a few more deductions I made based on several factors, but in short, the only possible person left that I can think of with opportunity, influence, and motive to have accomplished this is you. The Commissioner watched on with stern attentiveness. Madam, is that true? She continued to look at Tsukachi coolly, ignoring the Commissioner and appearing completely unruffled. That's a rather circumstantial accusation. I've learned to follow my intuition, Tsukachi replied calmly. She studied him in silence for a long pause. Then the careful expression she maintained broke with the slightest wry smile. And mine. Her eyes flicked back to the Commissioner for a cool second, Then she turned and resumed walking to the door without a glance back at either of them. Someone with that much potential simply must be a hero. The door clicked shut, leaving the two men alone. Tsukachi let his shoulders drop a little. Apologies for reducing you to a chess piece, Tsukachi. He looked at the commissioner, who settled back in his chair with his arms relaxing on the armrests. I had my suspicions of her as well, but she wouldn't be clear with me. I hoped you'd throw her off guard with a sudden appearance. That was probably the closest she'll come to a confession. Oh, I see. That's all right, sir. Tsukachi scratched the back of his neck and walked closer to the desk. Though, you might have told me beforehand. You would have behaved differently. I wanted to make it clear to her that it was coming from me. I told Akiyama Shisui that his identity wouldn't be made public. And scarcely a week later his face is on every news channel and in every paper. His eyes shifted to the side, growing even narrower in a glare. That woman made a liar out of me. Tsukachi remained mute, thinking it best in light of the vibe he was getting right now. Politics are as cutthroat as usual, eh? The look passed from the commissioner's eyes as he focused on Tsukachi again. There are political machinations in action that go above even my head, Tsukachi. They have some use in mind for Akiyama Shisui. Though what, specifically, I don't know. They're pressuring him into their intended direction now. I won't order you, but if you have the time and motivation, it might be worthwhile to keep close to him in the future. I see. Thank you for telling me, sir. Tsukachi considered his words with a grave expression. He had a sense of responsibility for the teen, and knowledge of just how dark the world could get only determined that his intuition grew. Miura was waiting for Shisui just as he told her as soon as school ended. He nodded at her and kept walking, and she quickly fell into step beside him. Which hospital is it? She told him, and he took out his phone to run the math in his head. He'd be home before his mother if they were fairly quick, but not if they took public transportation. I'll get us a ride there. He stopped with her in the hallway by the school door until the car was nearly there, judging by the app. Then they walked outside. They got in and sat in silence for a minute with Miura looking at him, the car, outside, then all around and back again while Shisui kept his eyes on the passing scenery through the window. Thanks for coming again. MMHM. She played with her fingers for a bit and looked at him again. My grandma's health hasn't been very good for a while now. She kept getting infections. And the doctors figured out she would need surgery. She just had it on Friday. But now they're saying she has an infection from the surgery site. And her voice trailed off, and Shisui turned his face away from the window to watch her quickly wipe her eyes and blink. He shifted his lips and shuffled his feet a little closer, looking down at his hands in his lap. His dad's face came to his mind, but he didn't have a clue. I don't really know what to say in these situations. I'm sorry. He tried to make his voice soft, but wasn't sure it expressed his sympathy. It's okay. Has her life been good? Yeah. He looked at her and saw her lips smiling a little. She's had a really great life. He listened to her quietly tell him about her grandmother for much of the remaining ride. When they got to the hospital, he followed her lead into the building and then to her grandma's room. Miura stopped just outside the ICU room to take a breath and look at him. So, you don't have to tell her how much time. Just let me know after, please. Okay, he nodded. She led them in with a smile. Hi, Grandma. Shisui watched the old woman stir in her bed from over Miura's head. She was a delicate 87-year-old with wispy gray hair. She seemed to have been asleep from the gape of her mouth and looked disoriented for a moment as she came to. Once she saw her granddaughter, her eyes gained some focus. Shisui studied the numbers in his mind's eye above her face, then looked away. Oh, hi. Her reply sounded weak and dry, but happy. Shisui eyed the chair in the corner on the other side of the bed and crept over to it as they had their greetings and hugs. The woman didn't seem to notice him at all until Miura actively pointed him out. And this is my friend, Akiyama Shisui. He glanced over with a faint smile and a nod. He saw her eyebrows lift in surprise, then bunch close together in a squint. Oh, I didn't see him. Miura laughed. Grandma, he came in with me. I don't have my glasses on. Shisui looked away with his smile lingering. He didn't say anything as they kept talking, but he listened and thought. He looked back at the bed. So, what kind of snack are you looking forward to when you get out of here? They looked over at his sudden question. Snack. It seemed to be a great effort for her to think about it, and he waited patiently. Dried persimmons. I haven't had those before. He took out his phone and let the two of them talk a while more without saying a word himself. It wasn't an energetic conversation with how tired and medicated the elderly woman was. And scarcely a few minutes passed before they could tell she was getting too sleepy to keep it going. Shisui stepped outside the room to let them have a private farewell. Miura rejoined him in the hall and looked at him, nervously holding her breath. So, he knew what she was expecting, but he didn't answer her. Instead, he started walking down the hall. Confused, she followed him into the elevator. So her time. Is it soon? Just follow me. His reply didn't seem to make her any less confused, but she fell into an anxious silence. Outside, he pulled out his phone and picked a direction looking at the screen. She followed him for a while, looking about. The hospital was in central Tokyo, not too far from the school in Edogawa. She knew the area decently, though didn't have a clue where he was taking them. Akiyama-san, where are we going? Shopping, MMHM. That replay only left her dumbfounded. Okay. For what? Are you going to tell me about my grandma or? Just wait. She didn't seem satisfied, but resigned herself to silence. They reached a busy shopping street and he kept looking between his phone and the environment. Wait here. I'll be back. She watched him leave and looked around anxiously as she stepped off to the side of the street for people passing by. She pulled out her phone and skimmed through pictures and articles as an excuse to pass the time, flicking her eyes up to check for him frequently. When she looked up and caught sight of him some ways off, she tucked her phone away and hurried down the street to meet him halfway. Okay, can we go now? She asked with some impatience betrayed in her voice. There was a small paper bag in his hand, and he held it up for her to take. Here, hold on to these for your grandma. She took the bag tentatively. You went shopping for my grandma. Miura unrolled the bag and looked inside, and stiffened. These are. Give them to her when she gets out of the hospital. I don't care if you tell her they're from me, he continued. She didn't respond, and he glanced at her. She was biting down on her lip in a failed attempt to keep it from wobbling, eyes still on the bag's contents. He shifted onto one leg and lifted the other foot to scratch his ankle as he turned his eyes down the street. They're not really in season right now, so I wasn't sure if the first place would have them. I figured I didn't need to drag you into every store. There's a piece of paper in the bag, too. I wrote down when, so just make it count, you know. He heard the bag crinkle as she moved, and then he went stiff as she hugged him. Flustered, his cheeks reddened as he looked wide-eyed down at her head and heard her give in to a few sniffles. He lifted his hand in a stuttering motion to gingerly pat her back. Sorry, I wasn't trying to make you cry. I just wasn't good at saying anything earlier, so. Someone got me something before on a rough day. I thought this would help. It does, it really does. She suddenly pulled away and lifted her hands to wipe her face. Sorry. No, it's fine, I don't mind. He looked away and shoved his hands into his pockets. Anyway, he cleared his throat. In exchange for helping you today, I want you to promise me something. She sniffed and looked up at him, forcing herself to regain some composure. Yeah, you won't talk to the media, or any of your friends, or whatever. Just keep it to yourself. Miura nodded vigorously. Okay, I won't. That's completely fair. She wiped her eyes and took a few breaths to steady herself. Calmer, she studied him for a second. You're really not a fan of the attention? Huh. She waited, but he didn't answer her. That's okay. There are enough attention seekers out there. He glanced at her and found an earnest smile on her lips. Yeah. He looked away again and checked the time on his phone. Anyway, we should be getting back. I'll call a ride. Shisui, dinner. Akane called out as she came home carrying bags of takeout with her. She kicked off her shoes ungracefully and dropped off her coat at the door. By the time she started up the hall, he was leaving his room. How was your day at school? It was all right. Anybody bother you? No. Good. She moved into the dining table and started pulling food containers out of their bags. Hovering right behind her, Shisui opened the lid on one and peered in. She grinned in satisfaction when she saw him realize where she got it from. I got some of your favorites. It earned her a rare smile from him. Thank you. She had gotten him chowan mushi, a savory steamed egg custard topped with crab meat and shiitake mushrooms, warm mushroom salad, and gyoza from their favorite takeout. They really knew how to do mushrooms right. Together they sat and started eating. Shisui did so in silence for a bit, but his eyes kept flicking to her face. After eating some mushroom salad, he scooted in his seat, swallowed a bite, and lowered his chopsticks. Sorry mom, but today's ride was kind of expensive. I went and helped a classmate with something. Akane glanced up at him. Oh, how expensive. He hesitated, then reached for his pocket. He pulled up the digital receipts on his phone and showed her. She gave him an eyebrow over the top of the screen that demanded an explanation. Where the heck did you go? The hospital. The immediate reaction on her face made him regret his brevity, and he hastily held up his hand. Not for me. It was for her grandma. Her grandma. For your Quirk, right? Yeah. Her brows shifted in concern. Was this Ayaga's? No, someone else. She's in a different class. I never really knew her before. And, is everything good with her grandma? For a few years. And how's your classmate doing? Okay, I think. I made her cry, but in a good way. Akane bowed her head, bringing a hand to her forehead. Oh Shisui, it was happy tears, I guess, he defended. That's my boy, going and making girls cry, she sighed with a crooked grin. Already a heartbreaker. He wrinkled his nose. Stop it. I'm just teasing you. He grumbled, thoroughly unamused, and turned his attention to his chowan mushi. She kept watching him, however. Well, that sounds like a good use of a ride. She pointed her chopsticks at his food. But you'd better get an idea of what you want for dinner the rest of this week. No more takeout. Sadly, he mumbled, Okay. Shisui read a new series of headlines in the media the next morning that made him angry in a way that nothing about his newfound situation so far had done. Earthquake caller on a date in Tokyo. He saw the pictures of him with Miura, and indignant heat welled up in his chest. They showed him walking with her in downtown Tokyo, the paper bag of dried persimmons he'd given to her for her grandmother, and most of all, they framed the grateful hug she'd given him front and center as some sort of evidence of romantic relation. That someone had been following them that whole time irritated him. That something so trivial about his life could be considered news at all made his logical mind scoff. That it wasn't even true, merely a fabricated tale, riled him. But it was how sheerly preposterous it was. Downright insulting even to the real story of someone caring for their ailing family member. That made something inside him snap. Cynicism and sarcasm he kept under tight reins beneath the cover of needing to be quiet and invisible bubbled up, simmering in disdain. Shisui headed to school in a testy mood, taking a lift as his mother insisted. He stepped out of the car in front of the school, and the sight of one of the media vans that had been following him immediately irked him. The official news vehicles with all the logos that reported News Live had cleared out, moving on to pestering others, but the paparazzi and other reporters for the official outlets hadn't backed off, keeping their claims staked on his story. His life. He saw the cameras with the long lenses coming out, apparently finding even him just walking, merely existing on the street worthy of documentation. Unthinkingly, he slowed to a stop, staring them down with a contemptuous gaze. Whatever his goal in doing this even was, if there was one, he couldn't articulate, perhaps just venting some of the building steam. The reporters didn't seem to get the hint, reading his stopping and glaring at them as some form of twisted encouragement. One pounced at the opportunity and quickly walked forward. "Good morning, Akiyama-san. I'm Arai Fumihiro from." He didn't care. "Were you the one who took our pictures?" The reporter paused as Shisui cut him off. Pardon." Shisui stepped closer, his height pressing into the shorter man's space a little, frowning down at his lips, following a couple of teenagers around to take pictures of them like a creepy old man. Shisui watched him smile as the older reporter tried to laugh it off. No, I wasn't You people are really pissing me off today. We were there for her grandma in the hospital, and you were just looking for a photo to make a quick buck." The man lifted his hands. "Hey, I wasn't the one who took the photo." "Shut up. You'd have taken it if you could." Shisui spun on his heel and stalked towards the school, unable to stand another moment with him. He got to class and sat down, and gradually put a lid back on his emotions. Cooler now, he had the wherewithal to consider his actions and what the reaction to them might be. He was torn between irritation bubbling up again and anxiety, and so he twisted the lid on tighter and ignored that it had happened. Lunchtime came and he sat down with Aoyagi behind the school as usual. They were eating quietly and minding their own business when someone thought to interrupt them. Shisui eyed the shoes of the small group of students that rounded the corner of the school and approached them with purpose. He finished a bite of onigiri, then set it aside, bracing himself for whatever was coming. They stopped in front of him, and a boy in white sneakers at the front spoke first. "Hey, Akiyama-san. How's it going?" "Fine. I'm Chihaya Yuuma from 3B. Pleased to meet you." "Pleased to meet you." Shisui watched him gesture his hand to the others with him. "Some of us were wondering something and came to ask you about it. So, we were wondering, could you use your quirk on us? Tell us when we're going to die." And there it was. He'd been bracing himself for an unpleasant discussion. Shisui lifted his head up carefully, checking all of their faces without looking in their eyes. Then he lowered his eyes again to their feet and mumbled, "I'd rather not." He heard the unhappy surprise murmur through the group and spoke up a bit louder. "If any of you were going to die soon, I'd tell you. But you're all going to live nice long lives, so leave me be." "Hey, but I want to know when I'm going to die. I've got the right to know something like that. And why do you get to decide what a long enough life is? Why don't I get a say in that? And what if I'm going to die in some terrible way? I'd rather know that and change it. You helped Miura-san. Why not us?" He winced, curling his hands down around his knees as he took their indignant complaints and they talked over each other. He'd been afraid that this would happen eventually, people flocking to him, expecting him to peddle his quirk like he was some kind of street vendor. He thought of how to avoid it and decrease their interest. "Look, there's a limit to the number I can see a day, so I can't. Sorry, you'll have to excuse me." "I see," Chihaya spoke again. "So it's the supply that can't meet the demand, Then how much do you want for it?" Shisui's brow furrowed. "What? I want to know when and how I'm going to die, and you have a limited product. So how much for it?" He crouched down in front of Shisui with his wallet in hand and extended the bills. 10,000 yen. Shisui balked at the money. "No way." Chihaya leaned his head in, trying to get a better look at Shisui's face through his bangs. "Why? Not enough for you. I can get more." Shisui kept his eyes pinned firmly on his lap. "No, that's just sleazy. It's not a matter of money. There are kids out there younger than you who will die younger than you are now, and others who won't live half as long as you. I have to save it for people like that. But what about Miura, then? Someone else spoke up. You did it for her grandma, didn't you? No way, an old lady is one of those people. Shisui cursed himself for that. He hadn't thought it would backfire like this. He had just been trying to help someone. I won't say it was a mistake to help her, but it wasn't a habit. I just couldn't say no at the time, and, oh, but you can say no now, huh? That's not what I'm trying to say. Shisui huffed and turned his head away from them. Look, knowing when you're going to die, maybe you feel like you want it right now, but later you might regret having it hanging over your whole life. I don't want to be responsible for that feeling. Chihaya pushed closer, and Shisui pulled back with his spine against the wall. I disagree. I'd rather be able to know what to expect and be able to plan my life out accordingly. I don't want to reach the end with unfinished business. That's my choice and my responsibility to have, not yours. Let me live with the consequences of my own decision. That's got nothing to do with you. Shisui didn't reply, remaining motionless with his back trapped against the wall and his head turned far to the side. Beside him, Aoyagi watched his chest rising fast. She'd been silent during the exchange, not certain of how, when, or even if she should say something, but the impulse that she needed to do something now urged her. Hey, let's just step back for a minute, maybe? Okay. She shifted forward on her knees, edging between Chihaya and Shisui timidly. That's a lot to. It's a, give him time to think. I mean, no one's going to die overnight. I mean, right. It can wait so he can think about it. Chihaya looked back at her with level, gray eyes, and she struggled to hold his gaze but didn't move back, either. Then he looked back at Shisui, still flush with the wall. No one's going to die overnight, right, Akiyama-san? Right. Chihaya stood up and stepped away. Then excuse us. Enjoy your lunch. See you tomorrow, same time, Akiyama-san. He started walking with such concluding confidence that the others in the group made no objection and turned with him. Shisui relaxed away from the wall, warily watching them leave. And Aoyagi settled back as well with a sigh of relief. Thank you. She glanced over at him, finding his eyes on her. Don't worry about it. He looked back at the onigiri that he'd set down in his bento lunchbox and reached for it, trying to return to normal. But he chewed the bite full of food mechanically, and after swallowing didn't have the appetite to take another. He lowered it back to the bento box and looked over at Aoyagi, who seemed to likewise be picking at her noodles. Do you think it's wrong of me? She looked up at him. Wrong of what? To not tell them. He looked at the grass. If they want to know, maybe I just am projecting, I guess, because of how I have to see it, that they shouldn't know it. She lowered her lunch as she thought, speaking delicately. Well, you're not trying to be mean about it. It's just so they won't feel bad about it. But that's the issue. Do I get a say in their lives like that? He pushed. If someone wants to know, it's their life, so why shouldn't I tell them? But if I do it for one person, then another person is going to ask, and another and another. And if I do it for one person, I can't turn down another. That'll look unfair. But once people know, I'll just hand it out. Word'll get around and even more people will want to know. And where the hell does that end? But that makes me selfish then. Not doing it because it's inconvenient to me. How can I logically say no when it's their life? Their right to know. He ran a hand through his hair with a loud exhale. It'll never end. What the hell? I'm not a fucking palm reader. Aoyagi froze up at his rising tone, looking at him with widened eyes. He glanced up at her and then away. Sorry, I'm just frustrated. It's okay, that makes sense. She started picking at her food again. I don't really have a good answer, sorry. I mean, it's a moral question that doesn't really have a right answer. But I guess, would you want to know if you were them? He thought about it and picked at the grass. I think I worry about enough numbers as it is, but they don't have that problem. If I were them, I'd only have one number to worry about. Mine, I guess you can plan your whole life around that number, but it would make you anxious too, I bet. Shisui picked at the grass some more, ripping up one blade at a time, then with a huff, he brushed them all away. But it doesn't matter what I want, anyway. They'll only be happy if I give them what I want. Okay, sadly the chapter is over. And if you enjoyed the video, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.